It was released 10 years ago as a dating simulator targeted at a female audience, but it ended up more popular among male players. It allowed players to play a variety of characters, starting from easy but very efficient characters, to the more complicated but inefficient characters. Amongst them was one trash character, especially known for his difficulty level and terrible features. There was only one pervert who played this character for 10 years, and that pervert was the player, Beak Usial. An evening with the sky, colored orange from the setting sun, Usial paused in front of his screen. He noticed new posts in the forum and wondered if there was a new update. He noticed a lot of complaints from other players and wondered if there was a final boss in a dating sim. He thought those kinds of games usually ended when players got together. However, he noticed a famous ranker complained that the boss was unbeatable, so he set down his coffee. It doesn't make sense for there to exist a monster with magic nullifying skills in a magical world, and wonders if it is a bug caused some characters got deleted. Then, he sees the Dark Demon Dragon, the 13th moon of the Black Knight. In the Ether world, there is a cult-like organization called Dark Demonic Humans. Their goal is to help another world, called Persona Gate, take over the world. When they finally managed to achieve this goal, the Dark Demon Dragon appeared. 90% of the continent got taken over, but our main guy has only concerned himself with PvP and not the main story so far. The whole lore got messed up, but he can't avoid fighting it, so he decides to give it a try. He enters the game and accepts the request to fight the Dark Demon Dragon. He decides to show off the skills he's honed over the last 10 years, so his character appears before the beast. His character, Beak Usial, is the sole character in the game who cannot use magic, so even the most experienced players choose to not play him. Basically, he's worse than an extra, but of course, the character can use some magic. The dragon prepares its fiery breath to roast his player and fires at his player. His player faces the dragon with determination and grins. His power is the blink spell, moving super fast as he charges at the dragon. He slid to a stop and gritted his teeth. Beak Usial's blink spell allows him to randomly travel between 3 to 10 meters very quickly. The direction he will blink in is random, so if he does not control the distance well, he will die immediately due to the speed and impact. The cool time and mana usage is also ridiculous. There is also a penalty where he cannot move 2 seconds after using the skill. Anyone can learn it, but most people don't use it. However, Beak Usial has mastered the use of blink. He can control which direction he will go in. He can also control the distance, and has managed to nullify the penalty. It does not use up mana since he does not have a mana stat. Unlike other spells, blink was nothing more than just a movement ability. He became obsessed with this character since everything depended on his skill level. So, over the last 10 years, he has been playing as the only character in the game that does not use magic in battles. The dragon charged again, and Beak Usial attacked. He dodged the dragon's next attack, and looked upon his opponent. The beast fell as the notification came up that he had defeated the final boss. He was shocked that he actually killed, though he was covered from head to toe in ancient relic grade items. Still, he played a garbage character, but it was nice that he beat the boss. He will flex to the community that he killed the Dark Demon Dragon. However, he got a loud notification that because the wrong ending has been reached, 90% of Ether World has been destroyed. He is shocked, and the notification informed him that he was the closest to reaching the true ending. Then, the notification begs him to please reach the true ending. Our main guy was very confused, but suddenly he was zapped away and everything went quiet, leaving only his chair and computers behind. He opened his eyes with a gasp and found himself on the floor. Sitting up, he wondered what was going on. He also wondered where he was. Then he glanced to his side and saw the mirror before him. Stepping closer to the mirror, he saw his reflection, and his eyes widened in surprise. He had the appearance of Beak Usial. Suddenly, something glitches, and a notification screen pops up before him. It tells him this is episode 1, titled Escape the Chase. He is surprised, because he recognizes Beak Usial's prologue quest. Still in shock, he slips his hand into his pocket, and is shocked to see the entrance certificate to Stella Academy. It is hard to believe, but he is definitely in the Ether world, and he is stuck at Beak Usial. He places his hand on his face with a groan, but decides to be logical about it. The voice told him to reach the true ending, but from what he knows, the game does not have a true ending. Then his eyes widen as he realizes that no one has managed to reach the true ending in the last 10 years. This is not the time to think about that though, cause if memory serves him right after his character wakes, the people chasing after him burst into the hut. Sure enough, there are angry people searching for him, and he hides in apprehension. They are already here and a blonde member of the group spots something. He yells to the group that he has found a hut and tells them to search it. They rush ahead, and our main guy wonders what to do. There is a limit to how long he can avoid them, but he cannot fight them either. He wonders what to do when a screen pops up again. The screen tells him that he can use the spell Blink, and he is shocked that he can use Blink. Blink is an ability that allows the user to flash forward. With a body that suffers from magic leakage syndrome, Beak Usial cannot accumulate mana in his body, and he only has Blink as his one hope. It is the spell that he practiced his whole life. Back to the present. He is still hiding in the hut, his face fixed on the screen as he sees the offer to use Blink. It is 0 class, with a maximum distance of 9 meters and just one charge. Cooldown is 3 seconds. He wonders if he should use blink when he only controlled his character with a mouse and a keyboard. Running feet. As the hooded men charge towards the hut, he does not have time. His eyes widen and he gasps to see that they are already here. There's no time left, so he grits his teeth and decides that he must try. The hooded men stop with alarm. They notice him running from the hut and declare that they have found him. Immediately, they are ordered to chase him. They race after him through the snowy forest outside with no intention of letting him escape. The first part of the tutorial is for him to avoid the pursuers using the power of blink. He runs into the forest, noting that his pursuers wear magic boots that are faster than he is. The only way he can escape is if he uses blink. He calms himself, knowing he has used blink 1,000 times before. The timing is burned into his muscle memory. His pursuers scream in rage that he won't stop running away, and he sees that they have caught up with him. Blink's main disadvantage is that if the user fails to control the distance, they could collide with an object and die instantly. However, as the lead chaser swings his mighty sword at him, our main guy activates blink. When he uses it, the ability works differently, and he takes on a burst of speed, vanishing from his attacker. He is shocked but pleased that his execution of the ability was a success. His pursuers are shocked to see him use blink as they did not believe he was a mage. The lead blonde tells them not to falter, because blink has a rest period that paralyzes the user for 2 seconds. However, the lead is shocked to see that the main guy can still move, and is still running. He runs fast through the forest, and encourages himself to be more careful. He must use the uneven terrain to his advantage, since players who aren't able to learn how to control Flash at this stage won't be able to make it to the next episode. In reality, 99% of players who played this character were unable to pass the tutorial, and even the 1% that passed were unable to surpass the wall of blink distance control and continuous blinking. Our main guy counts down 3, 2, 1 in 3 seconds. He blinks once more and moves rapidly through the trees and snow, his brown coat flying in the wind. His pursuers think he is insane for using blink in such a terrain. He tells all those who can use magic to come to the front and attack the main guy from a distance. The menacing-looking mages come forward and our guy can tell they are going to use magic against him. The second part of the tutorial was to use blink to dodge the magic arrows flying at him. In the game, players could see everything behind because it's on a monitor, so he could dodge it then. His screen pops up again and informs him that his magic leakage syndrome is being used. Its derivative skills include Sixth Sense and Cognitive Acceleration. He is shocked as the power from these skills floods his system in multiple lights of green and pink as he stares in bewilderment. Then, he bursts forward, activating blink and dodging all the magical attacks till he slides to a stop. A crate smokes where he used to stand and he sighs in relief because that was a close call. Then he takes off running once again. The last part of the hurdle involves Tutorial Part 3, crossing a canyon while using blink. The canyon is deep and deadly. The only way to cross is to control the distance of his blink perfectly. Then, he can meet up with some passing mages and escape, and that will end the tutorial. To pass this part, he has to cancel his blink spell, which occurs in 0.1 second at the perfect time. If he fails, he will die. There are about 20 floating boulders. Crossing them is a lot easier said than done. He wonders what jerk made the tutorial this difficult. However, being honest, it is just about doable. His pursuers once again catch up with him and shout out his location to their comrades. The problem with making this jump is that his pursuers are closer than expected. The distance between him and them is about 100 meters. Since his blink has a 3-second cooldown, that is not enough time to make it across. The likeliest method he can use now, for his survival, is to kill them all. The deadly snowy canyon is vast with many floating rocks, and our main guy hides underneath a snowy tree. Even he thinks it is crazy. How dare he think he can achieve this when he has never even been in a proper fight? If this were a game, the system would make it impossible to attack those who are chasing him. This is reality. No rule says that I have to blindly follow the game's system. The thought of killing someone doesn't bother him at all. This is not because those guys are his parents' enemies, according to the story. He glances behind him and sees that they are there. He believes that he can win. He stands with his knife in hand as his enemies appear before him. They shout out in anger and race to catch him. They charge at him, and his attacker laughs that he dares to fight them all alone, and that he is done for. His target is 8.7 meters away, so he activates blink. His attackers are confused when he suddenly charges forward. He appears before one attacker, suddenly appearing closer than the man expected him to get, and the attacker coughs blood that splatters on his face. Our main guy has stabbed him with the knife and he feels the blood running down his fingertips, yet he feels no sense of guilt at all. After all, he is only killing them to survive. So, he yanked out his knife from the dead man and smacked his body away. The man's corpse fell into the arms of his colleagues. The attackers become alarmed and see that he is getting away. They scream that he must not escape at any cost. He has dealt with one of them, but the next attack won't be easy. However, he notices it has gone quiet and wonders if they gave up on chasing him. However, he sees that they did not give up and have instead switched to magic attacks again. He tries to dodge it but nearly loses his footing. The attackers fire magic at him, and the runes glow as the magic is shot right at him. He groans as large giant orange flaming fireballs come flying right at him, and grits his teeth as he tries to avoid it. Suddenly, he sees an opening on a tree branch at the side of the mountain and activates his blink. The fireballs hit the area where he'd previously been standing, and smoke covered up the area. The lead attacker says that it serves him right for being so cocky and acting up. However, the smoke clears and they can't see his body in the crater that was made. The lead attacker is shocked that he's not there, and our guy appears above him. The lead guy looks up just in time to make eye contact with him, and our main guy grits his teeth with determination. One of the peculiarities of Blink is that it maintains the same momentum before and after use. Using the ability, he stabs the lead attacker and the man screams in pain, leaving the other attackers confused and scared. They ask what happened, but blood has already been spilt, and our main guy has sliced through the lead attacker. The other attacker stares in shock as the man's body falls and our guy stands before his fallen corpse, covered in blood. He pauses to catch his breath. Only 2 are left within his range, and he needs to end it before the 2 who fell behind catch up. The other attacker thinks he is a weird guy with an uncanny reaction speed for a mage. He asks our guy who he is. His reaction time is admittedly faster than most professional gamers, but that is only when talking about games. He cannot keep dodging their attacks forever, especially at such a close range, so he shall end it as quickly as possible. However, the second attacker says that he has already figured out his fighting style. All this guy uses is blink and a dagger. As long as he protects his face and neck, then the dagger won't scratch him. The attacker raises his large sword as our guy runs at him. He tells him to bring him on and activates Ice Wave. Our guy activates Blink and the attacker slashes a wave of ice at him. He laughs that he has got our dude, and he will make his face wrinkle in pain. However, he is shocked to hear a gurgle beside him, and sees that our guy has slashed the neck of his companion. He is horrified to see our dude slice through the throat of his teammate. The attacker curses. Earlier, our guy was running like a rat who has never fought before, but now he is acting differently. He admits that he acted like that earlier, but he thanks the attacker for helping him get better at it. He curses that he is a little brat, just because they went easy on him. He will kill our guy this time. Our main guy charges once again with determination on his face. Our guy raced at him with his weapon raised and flung it at his attacker. Using Blink head-on puts him at risk of getting counterattacked. The attacker wonders if our guy is trying to lure him into defending his front by throwing the spear, and then aiming for his side. However, he won't let our guy have his way, and he slices through the weapon with his sword. Now all he has to do is attack our guy while he is beside him. That's what he thinks, but he is shocked to see that our guy is not at his side. He stares in shock, then realizes with horror that our guy came from the front and stabs him. He was planning on attacking from the front from the beginning. Episode 1, Escaping His Pursuers, is over. He is informed on a blue information screen that he has obtained EXP. He has been promised an additional reward for uniquely developing the story by the Constellation Project. He sits on the snowy floor with a sigh of relief and struggles to catch his breath. His blood hand shakily reaches for the bloody knife, and he glances at the corpses that lay beside him, covered in red. He reminds himself that this is not a dream, and he just experienced his first blink and his first battle, as well as his first murder. He sits and thinks grimly about how he killed a person to survive. He dusts the snow from himself and gets to his feet with a sigh. He shall leave this place for now. He pauses when he suddenly recalls something and turns around. He pauses as he thinks deeply, although it leaves a bitter aftertaste. He has to think realistically since he is broke. So he rummages through the corpse pockets and finds around 2 million credit, which is approximately 2 million won. It is better than nothing. Now, the problem is how to cross the snowy cliff before him. Suddenly, he hears a voice calling out to ask if anyone is there. He sees a group of hooded figures in the distance and recognizes them as the group of mages that appear in the tutorial. He waves to them, and they shout that there is no bridge, unsure on how he will cross. However, he tells them that he is on his way, and they decide to wait for him to cross. However, they say he would need to be a third-class knight to successfully cross the cliff, and they doubt it is something a young boy can do. However, to their surprise, they see him zapping from floating rock to floating rock, using the power of Blink. He moves quickly and swiftly like the Flash, and they stare in wonder at his skill. They wonder if he is using a jumping type of magic, and realize he is using Blink. Among the mages, a blue-haired girl with deep blue eyes watches his approach. They are surprised he is using a Blink when it won't be able to control the direction and distance. They are surprised that such control over Blink is possible, and they stare in surprise when 2 more people show up at the edge of the cliff. However, they watch the other 2 charge up some spells that are aimed at the boy they are trying to aid. It's the remaining attackers, and the other mages yell at the boy to watch out. Our main guy barely manages to dodge the attack using Blink. He makes a narrow escape and turns to face those other 2 mages who attack from the distance. He figures they are with the mercenary group after him and realizes this is dangerous. His power has 3 seconds to cool down. Dodging all magic with it is not possible. He has to find the next floating stone that will work as his foothold. However, to his surprise, a mage fires up a spell and shoots at him again before he can think up a plan. He barely dodges the attack, and the stone he stands on gets a crack. He realizes he is going to fall as he slips from the rock. Unfortunately, all the floating stones are too far from him, and he hopes that he lands on just one. He uses blink and zips through the air, hand outstretched to grab a floating stone. He manages to grab it. Hanging on barely, he is relieved to have survived. However, his enemies fire yet another fiery spell at him and he realizes his survival is not guaranteed. There is no way for him to dodge with him hanging off the rock and he realizes that he is going to die. Suddenly, ice magic comes forth. The great blue spell collides with the orange of fire in a blast of wind that halts the fire spell in its tracks and the air clears to reveal that our main guy was protected from being burnt to a crisp. He looks up in surprise and wonders what that magic was just then. An ice spread covered with lightning. Someone just used 2 attributes in one magic in the tutorial. Furthermore, the caster precisely calculated the trajectory without wasting mana. He wonders who could perform such a feat. Glancing at the mages gathered at the other side, he spots the blue girl with cold eyes and a spark of magic on her staff. The mercenary mages are shocked at such a display of power that they turn tail and flee with fear. Our main dude watches them flee with relief and sighs in relief that he will survive after all. He manages to drag himself up and makes it to the mages who wait for him at the other side. However, his attention is on the hooded figure that saved his life. He thanks her for helping him, and she says that she did not do it to receive any gratitude. He thinks she has the prettiest voice he has ever heard in his life, but she seems difficult to approach. Anyway, although they are known as bandits who pillage nearby villages, in reality, most of such activities are carried out by the Dark Demon cult. However, even that ends here. The moment he escapes this cliff, he will enter the territory of the mages, and the dark demonic humans will no longer be able to pursue him, not to mention that they don't even know who he is. He is taken by surprise at the sudden appearance of another status window. It tells him to enroll in the Stella Academy, and he wonders if that is the start of the second episode. It does not sound like it will be hard, so he is not too worried. Suddenly, on seeing the Academy's name, his face goes pale. He wonders how he can possibly go through school again at this day and age. A crescent moon stains the night sky as Beak-Usial is being transported via a carriage. The other mages escort him as they ride in silence. He, on the other hand, falls fast asleep from the tiredness of the day's battle. From slumber, he falls into a dream state, groaning as he sees a much younger version of Usial calling for his mom. Whilst gripping her garments, he tells her that he will be a mage when he grows up. His mom just smiles and tells our hero that she believes in him. Usial stares at the second-hand magic text that his parents worked very hard to get and then slits it open, promising to study very hard to make them happy. He crosses his legs as he makes use of the library until he later sleeps off on a desk nearby. His mother then shows up as she covers him up with a blanket. We're taken forward in time to a doctor's appointment where Usial's mom asks the doctor if he's sure her son has mana leakage syndrome. Her tone is so distraught but our boy cannot even bring himself to react. He just stands there, expressionless, only freaking out in his mind. He refuses to believe it, telling himself that there's no way this could be his situation. This makes our hero wonder if they're his memories or Beak-Usial's. The little boy bursts into tears soon enough, every attempt to wipe his tears failing woefully. Our man wakes up in a frenzy, groaning as he grabs his head. Still dazed, he takes a look around and discovers that it's morning. The sun peeks out from the far mountains to confirm his conclusion. One of the mages, a redhead, exclaims that Usial is finally up, adding that he was about to wake him. Our boy just stares at him as the mage announces that they're about to arrive in Lezoicha, the satellite city of Arcanium. The wheels of the carriage are brought to a stop amidst the 2-centimeter deep snow and the mages reach a consensus to take a temporary break. They all step out of the carriage and Usial stretches for a bit. His eyes widen and his expression perks up upon the sight of something. Of someone, more like. It was the blue-haired mage that saved him. She glares at him with lifeless blue eyes, leaving our hero more puzzled than ever. His attempt to greet her fails, mostly because she turns away before he can get to it. He grins to himself, admitting that that's a cold thing to do and gains solace in the fact that things are going well, compared to how worried he was before. Anyway, Usial is also grateful that the era he found himself in is closer to the modern age rather than the Middle Ages. You see, although magic exists in the ether world, there are also trains, flying ships, and even warp holes set up in the safer cities. Also that long-distance travel can be more convenient. Usial thinks to himself that they're about to head to Lezoicha to use a flying ship. As it seems, the city is en route to Arcanium and that's where the second episode will actually begin. It's a beautiful city with tall buildings and captivating aesthetics. It's also called the City of Magic. In Arcanium, there are renowned magic towers as well as mage knight orders. It also houses 5 magic academies. Of all the 5, the academy with the most promising students and powerful mages is none other than the Stella Academy. For this one reason, Stella Academy is chock full of nobles and geniuses from every crevice in the world. With arms folded, our hero leans on the carriage as he wonders how Beak-Usial managed his admission into such a place. His brows perk up as he suddenly remembers that he hasn't checked his skills yet. He does so immediately, pulling up a blue console outlining his capabilities. He experiences a little increase in his strength, agility, and sensitivity. He also checks out the new Sixth Sense ability, which enables him to detect mana within a 12-meter radius. To top things off, he notices his detection acceleration skill and attributes his survival to these aforementioned skills. This doesn't stop him from remembering his predicament, being stuck with mana leakage syndrome, a cursed physique that stops him from accumulating mana in his body. He remembers how downtrodden his mom looked at the hospital and how BQCL was left with such an inherent curse. However, this allowed him to detect mana around him with his Sixth Sense. It also allowed him to notice any incoming attacks even if he's not looking in that direction. Detection acceleration allowed him to notice things as though time had been slowed, and he could detect any threat much faster than a normal human could. Our hero realizes how important this skill is for BQCL, but is painfully aware that he can't use Sixth Sense for long, seeing as it uses up a lot of mind power, and leaves the user with pretty huge consequences afterwards. He goes on to check his stats. As expected, his mana is non-existent and his blink ability is still at 0. Basically, our hero has a long way to go, but realizes that it is not a bad place to start. The real BQCL had really low sensitivity, and our boy deduces that maybe it took a part of the stats of the character he had fostered UCL into. Anyway, in the Ether world, there isn't just one level, but one for each stat. The skills are in the form of levels, and the stats are measured in stars, with the maximum stat level being 9 stars. This is practically impossible to reach though. Hand on chin, our MC recalls playing the game for 10 years but only reaching 8 stars in both sensitivity and stamina. He decides to invest into his sensitivity to boost his Sixth Sense and reaction speed, telling himself that he can boost stamina and flexibility through other means. Afterwards, he goes glum again, remembering that he's still stuck with the mana leakage syndrome. He tells himself that if he doesn't train, he won't be able to survive for long. This helps him decide to, as soon as possible, upgrade to the Secrets of Nature physique. His hands dig themselves into his coat pockets as he affirms that the way to reinforce mana leakage syndrome lies in Stella Academy. This leaves him no choice but to head there if he wants to save the world and treat his syndrome. Our hero lets out a tired sigh as he admits that he already doesn't want to go. He wishes that he could get something that would help him out here, and suddenly realizes that he has missed some notifications. At that moment, one of the mages prompts everyone to resume their journey, so our boy calls out that he's coming. He simply decides to check his notifications later and has no idea that the blue-eyed mage was checking him out. Well, she looked in his direction. The flying ship is nothing if not majestic, with the wind in its sails and a beautiful blue and brown exterior. On the inside, it's littered with nobles fraternizing amongst themselves, and announcements are made that they'll be leaving for Arcanium. They're also told to take a seat for their safety. One of said nobles glances in our boy's direction, pointing out that he's just looking around like some lost little kid. True to his word, UCL twirls his head every which way, taking in the sights. The noble's companion then concludes that our hero has never been on a flying ship before, adding that he must be some country bumpkin. UCL overhears them regretting why Stella lets peasants into the academy, so he turns to see who's talking. The noble then doubles down, accompanied by 2 of his friends. He quips that the academy is supposed to be the most renowned in the world and adds that they're sullying the waters with lowly folks. Our hero just stares at the noble blankly and then sighs in disappointment. He concludes that kids are the same wherever you go, and simply walks away from the noble as he screams in annoyance. He continues to boil and eventually calls out to our boy, telling him to stop. Meanwhile, the crowd begins to mumble amongst themselves. The noble turns around, wondering why everyone's being so loud, only for his eyes to widen in shock. Some lady with white luscious hair and a red bow on her blouse comes into view, and someone amongst the crowd calls her Princess Bion. This pulls our hero's attention, so much so that he has to double check if he heard the name right. Indeed, it is Princess Hongbion Adalbert, the Princess of Adalbert Kingdom, in all of her glory. The crowd continues to mumble amongst themselves with every step that she takes. The troublesome noble immediately mellows down, placing his hand on his chest and referring to her as Your Highness. Princess Bion only stares at him through the corner of her eye, and it sends chills down this youngin's spine. His speech stutters, and before he can get any words out, the princess brushes past him and then brushes past UCL too. He watches her go and admits that she's the villainess of the Ether world. You see, Hongbion is one of the main characters of this game. She and the main female protagonist always have arguments, but she dies in the end. No matter what route one chooses to take in the game, Bion never has a good ending. She's brutally murdered in some, and in others, she's bullied by the entire academy before getting expelled. In one of the routes, she goes through something so shameful that she never appears before the public again. Our boy deduces that the game developers must have something against the princess, seeing as they wanted her to suffer no matter what. At that moment, UCL remembers hearing that she's popular amongst the male players and admits that she's pretty. Anyway, he's scared to talk to her because he feels like she'll kill him. His stomach interrupts his thoughts, so he rubs his palm against it and tells himself that he should probably get something to eat. UCL heads upstairs to a cafeteria of aesthetically pleasing pastries and freaks out immediately. He sadly turns to leave, asking himself why everything there is so expensive. He decides to get some food when they arrive at Arcanium. Just then, the public address system buzzes to life and everyone listens attentively as an announcement comes. Apparently, they'll be arriving at Arcanium in 10 minutes and the captain wants everyone to head to the first floor. The princess, our blue-haired mage, some dark-haired maiden, and a regal prince all hear the information even as the captain repeats it. A grin creeps onto our boy's lips as he wonders if everything is finally starting. He finally accepts that this is now his reality and he plans to face it head-on. Yusial stands as he sadly intertwines his arms. He lets out a sigh, admitting to himself that he's glad he resolved his issues. He starts to wonder if he can really survive in Stella Academy or worse off, in this world. The dark demon dragon and the dark demonic humans come to mind and he stares out the window, wishing he had something to help him at a time like this. Our boy then remembers that he has a notification that he hasn't checked yet. He taps it and discovers that the Constellatio project offered him a special reward. Amongst them were the downgraded versions of all the weapons he used in the game, the downgraded version of all the skills he acquired in the game, and lastly, some EXP. His hand finds its way to his chin once again as he admits that the game has some commercial ethics. He wonders what he should pick. The returning light comes to mind, but he wonders if he should take the price of the flash instead. Unfortunately, the console tells him that the item's grade is too high and that it'll be downgraded severely. He tries asking for Hyperspace Blink but gets told that he cannot acquire it because it's an advanced version of the Blink skill. It adds that he can use the reward to slightly increase his Blink skill though. This frustrates our boy into asking if they really have to downgrade everything. The console reveals that they're also unable to materialize fully due to the lack of his narrative power. Yusial wonders what that means, so the console tells him that it's the force that drives the progression of the story. It then adds that narrative power will accumulate if he continues to explore unknown branches of the story like he did the day before. It becomes clear to Yusial that he can't be provided with late-game items because he's too much of a newbie. The console stays silent and so does our hero. After giving it some thought, he asks about bulbul glasses and stands in wait as the console mulls it over. It finally announces that it can be provided, so our boy chooses to go with that. In no time, the glasses emanate amidst a blue light and Yusial grabs them. He had never thought a day would come where he would wear the glasses, but he looks them over wearily. You see, bulbul glasses are an item that contains all the information our hero has gathered while playing the game. In Etherworld, it was possible to recall and read notes about all the hunted monsters or acquired knowledge, so players found various ways to store information. Yusial was one of those players. He tries on the spectacles with a grin on his face and waits for the information to load. He gets a description of the glasses and the option to either open a folder or seal information. He chooses to open the folder and waits once again as the console opens up 5 folders, namely Alchemy Materials, Hunting Grounds, Dungeons, Monsters, and Characters. He takes a quick look at the folders and admits that it's good enough. As he makes his way down to the ground floor, he wonders how much grinding he would have to do using the game system, since this place is now his reality. He then concludes that he should be able to regain half of the abilities he used to have with the help of these glasses. His thoughts get interrupted when someone asks if the blue-haired mage isn't Azel. The stranger goes on to refer to her as the eldest daughter of Dutch Malf the traitor. She just remains quiet, clasping her book against her chest. Yet another stranger asks where she got the audacity to show her face and his companion shushes him for fear of Azel hearing him. Our hero picks up on her name and uses the bulbul glasses ability to register or check a character's information within the story. The glasses reveal an Azel Malf, a fake heroine and ice lightning mage who dies later on. Yusial stares at her with surprise after realizing that she's a fake heroine. To understand Azel being a fake heroine, our hero clarifies something for us. Although he's currently in the Etherworld, the game was created based on Don't Love the Princess, an original romance fantasy novel. The novel is about a heroine named Azel who had lost her entire family. She grows by challenging the schemes of Bion, the villainess, and eventually ends up with the male protagonist. In the end, her revenge scheme completely disappears and the male characters protect her. Unfortunately, it had a sad ending after receiving harsh feedback from its readers. But here's the problem. Although the game's world was based off of this novel, its story is completely different. In the game, an original character named Flame was added and she took over the role of the heroine. However, Flame also has a backstory. You see, she was a woman living an ordinary life in the modern world who occasionally enjoyed reading Don't Love the Princess. She ended up getting transported into this world. So, contrary to the novel, Azel became the fake heroine in the game while Flame became the real one. Despite the efforts and numerous attempts by the players, it is said that Azel was not able to survive in any routes. This was the reason why she got pushed from the main heroine position. Our hero removes his glasses and shakes it off, admitting to himself that it has nothing to do with him. He still wonders if it's just his imagination or whether he has seen her somewhere before. The fake heroine continues to walk away and our boy concludes that it has to be his imagination. He then readies himself to hop off the boat. We're transported to Stella Academy, a place for geniuses, a place for nobility, a place for excellence. The students, well-dressed and attentive, listen to their headmaster as he states the obvious. He mentions that dark demonic humans are the mages who have embraced otherworldly powers and transformed into monsters. He goes on about how dark demonic humans continue their invasion even as they speak. They open persona gates and even liberate dungeons to encroach upon the magical world from the back world. He then makes it clear that their destiny as mages is to protect the world from the forces of darkness. One of the students secretly calls his speech boring and his mate concurs. Meanwhile, Yusial stands in the back, looking dapper in his new uniform. The headmaster announces that they'll be conducting an oath ceremony for the 4 students who were admitted based on their high scores as well as the freshman representative. He calls all 5 of them to the podium and our boy walks up alongside Princess Bion, Azel, and 2 others. He can't help but think that everyone's faces are shining, fitting their positions as main characters. However, the brightest one of them all is Ma Yuxiang, the freshman representative. He happens to have entered with the highest score, leaving people wondering how he's so handsome and intelligent at the same time. Our hero just takes a glance at him, acknowledging that he's the famous Ma Yuxiang. You see, Ma Yuxiang is best described with the phrase throughout heaven and earth, I, alone, am the honored one. He possesses a mana status of 9 stars and potential close to the realm of deities. He's also a natural genius with the ability to control all the elements of this world. As our hero checks him out, he realizes that although he cannot reach the good endings, he'll aim to avoid the bad ones by bringing the class rep to the good side. However, that's completely up to Flame, the last but not the least of the 4 exceptionals. Yusial concludes that it all depends on how she acts from here on out. He concludes that it's a good idea to befriend her seeing as she's also from the same reality as him. He becomes worried about the possibility of things getting complicated if she considers him an enemy, and he faces rejection. Our hero concludes that he shouldn't risk anything since he has the upper hand in terms of information. It turns out that Flame is a romance fantasy novel possessor while he's a romance fantasy game possessor. While the oath goes on, our hero accepts the fact that his importance in the story can't even be compared to a shop NPC. His expression becomes glum once again, remembering that the heroine, Flame, in this case, has the special ability to cleanse the dark demonic humans. She also has an ability that enables her to weaken those around her, so Yusial admits that being near her will definitely affect him. His role is to support the main characters from a distance and to try his best not to get involved with them as much as possible. At this point in time, the headmaster declares that the entrance ceremony has been concluded and all the students clap in unison. Our hero then gets a notification that episode 2 has been completed. On to the next chapter, we witness the elegance of Stella Academy accentuated by the calming morning sun. Inside lies our hero and his mates, seated behind descending wooden desks. He admits to himself that it has been a while since he graduated college, so it feels quite weird for him to be a high schooler once again. He pulls out his pocket watch soon enough, seeing as he feels good having it. Apparently, a stellar pocket watch is proof that you're a student at the most prestigious magic academy. Anyone in possession of this pocket watch will be treated much better than even those with magic warrior licenses. Our boy begins to daydream about going out and using his pocket watch. Sightseeing will just be a side attraction. At that moment, the class door creaks opens and a man with quite the serious expression enters. He commands everyone to take their seats. Our hero stares quietly as this instructor mentions that they'll be beginning the exams. He asks that the students put away all their items other than writing supplies and announces that those using glasses will be examined prior to the exam. Yusial remains calm, although he's surprised that the entrance ceremony is accompanied by an exam. It becomes clear that Stella Academy's curriculum is more rigorous than any university in Korea, seeing as you take an exam on your first day. The instructor announces that the exam is for class placement and yells for everyone to begin. Our boy stares at his question paper and panics when he notices that he doesn't know what it says. Apparently, the class placement exam is not only unrelated to the entrance exam, but also notorious for its outstanding difficulty. Students are usually assigned to classes of through F and then S, pertaining to the results of this exam. Princess Bion just minds her work while our boy admits that most of these playable characters are going to end up in S class. On the other hand, characters like Yusial, who entered the academy in last place amongst 1,141 applicants, can automatically be considered to be assigned to the F class. Dazed, our hero wonders if he can just turn in a blank page since he has already gotten in. He wonders what the odds could be that they'll expel him but gets distracted by a student not too far to his left, Ma Yuxiang. That's right, the genius seems to be bored with the whole thing and even lets out a small yawn while he's at it. Yusial takes another glance in his direction and soon realizes that Yuxiang is done with the exam. Our hero sighs sadly and now understands why living is boring for the genius. This reminds him that the nature of the character of Ma Yuxiang was boredom. You see, he was born into the most powerful family in the world and seeking as he has the most intelligence and talent, everything was too easy for him. That was why his actions would either be decided as good or evil, depending on what the female lead did. It's obvious that the dark demonic humans will be very interested in Ma Yuxiao. Instead of concentrating on his exam, our hero considers the genius's family to be his biggest issue. He then realizes that staring at Yuxiao makes him compare himself even more. Beak Yuxiao gets an epiphany as he wonders if he can use his bulbul glasses on this exam. He remembers using it a lot when he wanted to stack up additional while studying in the library. He just tells himself that he has nothing to lose and pulls out the glasses from his breast pocket. Before he can even try them on, the professor draws close to him, asking what the glasses are for. Our boy freezes halfway and the professor reiterates how he announced that if glasses are to be used, they would be checked prior. He takes the glasses from our hero to do just that, staring at them intently and furrowing his brows. Still in a panic, our boy speculates about what the problem could be this time. It's obvious that if the professor discovers that the glasses have magic, he might get expelled. To worsen things, the bulbul glasses notify him while they're still in the professor's hands, stating that a missing part of the glasses has been sensed. The system would like to know if our boy wants to call it, but he screams in lowercase that the system should stay the same. After looking the glasses over for some time, the professor returns them, adding that he can't sense any mana from them. He then tells Yuxiao to ask beforehand next time, and our hero smiles sheepishly as he accepts them. Within himself, he heaves a sigh of relief. He was lucky enough that the original functions of the glasses weren't working at the time. He goes on to put them on and they immediately provide answers to the questions in blueprint. Our hero is excited that he can really see the answers and refers to this as the jackpot. He buckles down to write, but his new fear becomes coming in first place. He begins to entertain the thought of making it to the class, only for the professor to bellow that the exam is over. He then commands the students to hand over their papers. Without waiting for them, he uses his magic to pull all their sheets to the front, so our boy's paper easily escapes his grasp while he cries out helplessly. He realizes that he only finished 3 questions, but the professor doesn't even crack a smile, so approaching him is out of the question. Said professor looks over the different papers quietly until he sees something he thinks is an anomaly. His eyes widen in shock, and while our boy concludes that he's still going to end up in F class, he notices the teacher grumbling in the front. Soon enough, he yells at our hero to give him the glasses at that very moment. He increases the urgency, but a confused Yuxiao begs his pardon. The professor takes the glasses and looks over them for the umpteenth time, refusing to believe that they aren't tainted. He then sends another student to go and fetch Dr. Gran, and the student immediately obeys. Our boy, on the other hand, questions what could be wrong with the professor all of a sudden. He remembers writing his solving process clearly so he wouldn't get mistaken for a cheater. Our boy is left wondering if he was caught. Dr. Gran joins them in the hall and the professor asks him what he thinks. The doctor inspects the glasses as a magic engineering professor that he is, and still doesn't find anything. He just admits that it's quite suspicious that our hero could solve a particular problem. The professor is only interested in knowing if Yuxiao cheated, but Dr. Gran confirms that he didn't. He then adds that he can't feel any magic tool energy coming from the glasses or any of our hero's items for that matter. Yuxiao just stands there as the doctor commends him for solving the question with his own ability. He laughs and pats our boy's shoulder, confessing how interesting it is that he got to see such genius in his lifetime. He proceeds to tell Professor Lee Hanwall to apologize to our hero and guide him well. Mr. Hanwall quips that he understands and wastes no time rendering an apology to our MC for the misunderstanding. He admits only to himself that he did cheat and that it would have been so much trouble if the original functions of the glasses still worked. He just smiles at the professor, telling him that things like this happen and that he should be careful moving forward. He's just happy at how lucky he got for not getting caught. To say any part of Stella Academy is anything short of standard would be blasphemy. That afternoon, in the professor's lounge, Mr. Hanwall and his assistant go through the recently concluded exam papers. He's especially interested in Beak Yuxiao's script, so he stares hard at it like a dyslexic man waiting for the letters to rearrange themselves. Just then, someone calls out to him from behind and then approaches him, asking if he's working on the exam papers for this year's freshmen. He stoically confirms this, but the lady is so full of life that she smiles from ear to ear, announcing that she heard about many interesting freshmen being admitted this year. She's Professor Edeltamen of the Stella Academy Council of Elders. Once again, Professor Hanwall confirms her speculation in as few words as possible. He mentions Princess Bion from the most renowned family in fire class magic, Prince Jeremy Scalvin, who had surpassed all his older brothers and was crowned at age 12 solely because of his magical prowess. And lastly, He Wenryong, successor of the Magic Tower Master and member of the Full Moon Tower. Still smiling, Professor Edeltamen mentions how hard it must have been to set questions for so many elite children from prominent families, and adds that she saw a lot of interesting questions. Hanwall smirks as he claims to be glad that she likes them. His brows then return to being furrowed almost immediately. True to Professor Edeltamen's words, the questions for this year's placement test featured something new. The first 3 questions were ones that would be difficult for any student who studied in an ordinary manner to solve. The intentions behind them were as follows. The first was a flexibility test to see whether or not a student can move to the next question when they realize that they can solve it. The second was to test for how the student would solve a question that did not appear in any of the textbooks they've studied so far. Professor Hanwall keeps staring at our boy's answer booklet as he bears in mind that the era when rote memorization and theory prevailed is over. Now, it's the era of combat using quick judgment and creative thinking. In truth, those questions weren't meant to be solved. Worse off, over 1,000 out of the 1,141 students left them blank, and out of the 100 that attempted them, most of them couldn't answer a single question correctly. Only 3 out of the new students actually got all 3 questions right. Ma Yuxiang, the prodigy of unknown origin. Flame, a commoner recognized by the principal because her talents are close to that of Yuxiang. And lastly, Beak Yuxiao. The professor can understand how Flame and Yuxiang got excellent grades, but he's certain that our hero got the worst admission score. He really didn't expect him to answer those 3 questions right, especially because he couldn't solve any of the other problems. Professor Edeltamen intrudes on Hanwall's thought, voicing her concern about why he's so interested in the scores of the new students. He then admits that there's a student whose scores don't make any sense. Edeltamen smiles once again as she points out that although countless formulas and equations couldn't solve the problems, one could as well solve it without knowing anything. Professor Hanwall then asks her if she thinks our hero could be a genius, only for her to reiterate that it could totally be a coincidence too. She turns to leave and Mr. Han watches her leave. He lets out a sigh of confusion and stares at our boy's girl. In it, he finds a note attached and pulls it closer for inspection. It turns out that Yuxiao had been granted special admission because his control of Blink was held in high regard. Hanwall's features stay frowned as he acknowledges that the child granted admission by the principal is different. His lips finally curl into a small smile. He plans to find out soon enough whether our hero is special or it's just a coincidence. Some other students are busy murmuring amongst themselves, and our boy returns to class to hear them talking about the results being posted on the bulletin board. Some students are stressed out about the class they'll get, and another reiterates that his mother threatened him not to return home without getting into the class. Meanwhile, all Yuxiao is bothered by is the fact that he has to check his result in person. In the game, he could just check his result with one click. Anyway, on the bulletin board, the different classes are mounted in shiny purple columns as students gather round it to check. Our boy's arrival draws some attention, and one of the other students asks if he's the one approaching. Another mentions that our hero got a 0 on the magic section of the entrance exam. Yuxiao just states at the ground as they keep talking about how someone like him managed to get into Stella Academy. They even question the school's standards because of him. Our boy decides to swipe off their mindless comments and approaches the board to quickly check his new class and leave. He tells himself that it doesn't really matter and searches for his name in the F class. He's surprised to discover that it isn't there, and surprise soon turns into panic as he concludes that they might have failed him for answering only 3 questions. He begins to wonder if he's going to die now, only for a student to mention his name after seeing it on the board. Well, the student is more pissed than happy, declaring that it must have been a mistake. His colleague quickly agrees with him, and they go on to talk about a certain Uslek from Marquis Checkbale and getting into class with rank 29. Yuxiao stares in their direction from the side of his eye as they contemplate why someone like him would do well when Kyle came in 17th place and got out in a class. Our boy has to accept that something weird is going on over there, so he walks over to check it out for himself. His eyes grow wide with surprise and he freezes in place. For some reason, our hero's name got placed in the S class. Still in shock, he begins to ask himself why his name is up there. He refuses to believe it and wonders what is going on. Why would he get placed in S class, the most special grade that all students dream of? You see, Class S is a place where the most special students of the academy gather. It's different from the other grades with multiple classes per grade because Class S has only 41 students and only one class. It still doesn't sit well with our hero that he's been placed in Class S. He closes his eyes and itches his head, all in about to understand. It even dawns on him that he'll run into the main characters of the game more often in Class S. This is bad news because making more contact with the protagonist will only shorten his already short life. Worse off, he can't even change his class. Our boy then makes up his mind to keep a low profile no matter what. He quietly peels away from the crowd, telling himself that he'll manage somehow. On the outside, Stella Academy looked calm as ever. Little did anyone know that in one of its offices, Princess Bion was getting slapped silly by her mother. She yells at Bion furiously for getting 3 questions wrong and compares her to Azel, who got 2 out the 3 right. She's Hong Yil, the elemental class fire professor. Bion falls to the ground as her mom continues to abuse her, telling her that she's lower than an insect because she couldn't even get the questions that insects got correctly. She yells at her to think of herself as a bug and try again. Mrs. Hong asks if her daughter understands, and a bruised Bion replies positively from the ground. Her mom continues to stare down at her and then heaves a tired sigh. Her hand never left her hip as she breaks into advice, telling the princess to listen to her. She goes on about Bion not doing anything to become like her, a woman who is chased out of the kingdom and is holding on to a stupid professor position. She reiterates that her daughter cannot afford to become the shame of the kingdom. She then squats down to Bion's eye level, grabbing the girl by her cheeks as she begs her to become a better existence than her sister. Mrs. Hong cracks a smile and inquires whether her daughter understands what she means, and Bion agrees just to get the woman off her back. Still on the floor, she admits to herself that she doesn't understand and looks away from her mom. Apparently, the poor girl only lives her life the way she was taught and solves questions by the same principle, what she was taught. She had come across problems composed of magic, spells and formulas that she hadn't learned. This just brings her to tears and leaves her questioning why she's being tormented. Back in the S class, all the students really sit and await their tutor. All the students except Yusial. Our boy is in a panic, overwhelmed and massaging his head to no avail. He admits that he's screwed, mostly because he got chalked into a place full of antisocial weirdos. Not that he was going to fraternize with high schoolers though. With every passing second he's in the class, he overhears murmurs of other students asking each other how he made it into the class. One of the students whispers to his friend, narrating how his parents had protested about Yusial being in the S class, but only got told that our hero has the qualifications to be there. His friend confesses that it just sounds weird. Our boy smiles weakly as he notices that he's the class outcast. He then realizes that these other students have been working since they were young and agrees that he, too, would be frustrated if some known dunce ended up in the same class with them. He stretches his joints, recalling that classes change according to one's performance after every test, and the S class is exempted. Of course, there are very few cases where a student can get demoted. Our hero glances to his left, recalling that there's going to be a male student who will rise from the class to the S class later on. He then pushes the thought aside, seeing as he'll still end up finding out when the time comes. He takes a good look at everyone, still baffled that all the game characters he once saw behind a screen are now in front of him. In a few years, some of them will become famous worldwide, with 5 of them having the possibility of betraying the magic world. His eyes travel to Ma Yuxiang because he's one of them, and then to Flame, who he hopes to God can stop Yuxiang from going astray. At that moment, Professor Hanwell majestically waltzes into the classroom and tells everyone to settle down. Our hero's senses immediately switch to high alert as he sees this man, but the professor just mounts the podium and expresses how nice it is to meet all the S-class students. He mentions the possibility of them already meeting him, but still opts to introduce himself formally. The next ending glare deepens as he introduces himself as Lee Hanwell, professor of the S-class. The students, as usual, begin to talk amongst themselves. One of them mentions how famous the professor is, and his colleague points out that the man has almost eliminated 1,000 dark demonic humans, adding that he's called the 7th class magic warrior. Once again, Mr. Hanwell tells the class to settle down and breaks into a small speech soon enough. He claims that there are a lot of talented students in the class and adds that there's a very unique student there as well. Of course, our hero immediately feels watched. The professor goes on about Stella Academy being a place where they foster combat mages and how as magic warriors, his students will undergo a rigorous high school training for 3 years. He announces that he doesn't expect all the students to make it to the end, but he would like for them to show him what they're made of within the 3 years they have together. He opens the floor for questions, but Hai's expression doesn't seem like he wants to take any, so none of the students ask. The professor gives them a few more seconds before indicating that they'll be starting the class. Just then, Princess Bion drags her feet as she steps into the class. She steals a glance at her professor and just keeps approaching him. On the flip side, Yusial is perplexed that Bion, who's normally a stickler for the rules and waltzing and late to class. She and Mr. Han discuss quietly while our boy is busy wondering if something happened. He peels out his bulbul glasses to get confirmation, only for the spectacles to reveal that she occasionally burns herself, has an evil mother, and worse off, is guaranteed to die. Our hero doesn't feel like he has the correct information. He resumes his signature pose of placing his hand on his chin, just so he can think about the whole guaranteed to die thing. While the professor continues conversing with the princess, our boy breaks things down. You see, if Azel dies because of Flame, Bion dies because of both Azel and Flame. You could say that it's the inevitable fate of a villainess. Yusial bites the edge of his glasses, thinking to himself that he would like to help her out, to save her life. Unfortunately, he's in no position to do that. He overhears the professor tell Bion to go to her seat and he just sighs, telling himself that he feels bad but can only keep his distance. Trust the universe to put its spin on things. It all begins with a mild surprise. Our boy's expression perks up just a little. It then becomes clear that Bion wants to sit next to him, seeing as she's standing next to him now. She stares down at him with her red eyes and bruised cheek, and of course, Yusial breaks a sweat. He then scooches over for the same girl he claimed he'll have to keep his distance from. She quietly sits beside him and our hero, just as quietly, begins to freak out, wondering why things are getting so twisted from the start. With his arms folded, the professor declares that before they start the class, they'll be having a staff succession for the staves that they'll be using while in school. He goes on about how the S-class and the A-class will have their staff succession together while our boy seems intrigued about the upcoming ceremony. He smirks as he admits that it's quite annoying, but he's also looking forward to it. Undoubtedly, there are 2 big events in the prestigious Stella Academy. One of them is the familiar contract ceremony, and the other is the staff succession ceremony. As expected from a special academy, its staff succession is equally special. The professor leads his students to a room made entirely of blue crystal and asks if everyone is present. Without waiting for confirmation, he points out that there are staves ranging from the lowest class to the middle-high class already prepared. Our boy listens attentively as he's told that all they have to do is walk up to a staff they like and grab them. Mr. Hanwell rounds up by warning the students about how complicated it is to switch an already picked staff. He then announces that he hopes they'll choose wisely. UCL stays quiet but can't help but think that the professor is wrong. Contrary to what he said, the students won't be picking the staves, but the staves picking them. In the ether world, the staves only respond to mages they seem worthy to possess them, and this causes a resonance effect. It basically means that one can't use a high-level staff just because you want to. Our boy wanders around the room in search of a staff that will pick him. He comes across 2 different ones soon enough and the hunt for a staff begins. Usually, he would pick a staff meant for an F-class mage, but now that he's in the big leagues, he has to take a different approach. UCL feels like the staff that would fit his position the most is a wand. It turns out that staves are of 2 classes, the short-form wand and the long-form staff. Wands are mostly wielded by the knight class for close combat and for spamming quick magic. However, staves are used by the bishop class to focus on a single hit with a longer casting time. Unable to mind their business, some losers gossip about the staff our boy is going to pick. He steals a glance of his foe admirers from the side of his eye and overhears them snickering about him not having a problem causing a resonance effect since he's supposedly in the S-class. He turns away as the side talks continue, telling himself that they can think whatever they want. At that moment, someone calls out to him, so he softly spins around and sees one of his mates folding his arms with a frown plastered on his face. He asks for the boy's identity and he claims to be Uslek. The name is utterly unfamiliar, seeing as it's UCL's first time hearing such a name. He then presses Uslek, asking why he's in his face. It turns out that he just wanted to know the staff that our boy would pick, so he tells Uslek that he'll pick anything. The noble smirks as he talks down on our hero, telling him to only pick something befitting of a commoner, and to try not to cause any trouble for the professors. UCL just stares at him blankly and after a few seconds, tells him not to cause any trouble either. He then walks away from him, leaving the noble furious. He yells at our hero, calling him a bastard, but he remains unfazed by this. Uslek then asks if he's picking a fight and our boy stays quiet. He finds the noble quite annoying, so he pulls out his bulbul glasses to check him out. While Uslek continues to lash out, the glasses reveal his specs. Unsurprisingly, all they have on him is that he's a third-rate bully. Our hero is disappointed at how insignificant this noble is, and just tucks his glasses back into his coat. Disappointment turns into a mocking pity as he wonders how much of an extra Uslek is. The noble then announces that he's going to pick a nearby staff and tells our boy to watch carefully. UCL is of course very intrigued by the staff, seeing as it's the Edmarietta Mary. Our hero realizes that the staff is the highest one in the exhibit, a middle high class one. You see, such a staff is usually used by pro-magic warriors. However, no matter how talented you are, no student should have access to anything higher than a middle-low class staff. UCL thinks the same, mostly because professional magic warriors are barely able to grab a hold of middle-low class staves. Our guy gets a notification about another middle-high class staff other than the Edmarietta Miri, some staff that's floating in the midst of its own light. It's then specified that it isn't there for anyone to pick, but only to be shown off. Professor Hanwell interrupts by announcing that every student should stand in front of the staff that they like. In turn, they all obey. Yuseong teases his staff. Scalvin has on a mischievous grin as he grabs hold of his, and Princess Bayonne, as calmly as ever, picks hers. UCL then notices a flash of light behind him. He overhears some students talking about the staff that he picked, adding that it's the Haddon Amakoten, a middle-class staff. It turns out that even Prince Scalvin picked a middle-class staff too, while Princess Bayonne picked the Suavita La Haven, also a middle-class staff. The bully stays completely dazed while our boy maintains his composure. He is left thinking about just how many students can wield middle-class staves as though they are certified magicians. The bully then admits that it's crazy and curses under his breath. He storms away from our hero, claiming that he can also pick a middle-class staff. Our boy just quietly watches him leave, and other students notice as he takes strides towards the Edmarietta Miri. They suspect that he is trying to resonate with the staff, and that's what he does. Uslek wields a confident smirk as he reaches out for the staff. He thinks to himself that he would like everyone to watch carefully as he shows them what a true S-class should look like. He grabs hold of the staff, only for it to emanate a loud flash of light, so bright that all the students have to block their eyes with their hands. Yuseong isn't shocked as he realizes that Uslek failed to resonate with the wand. Amidst the fog, the bully is knocked down to the floor. He grunts and grits his teeth in disappointment. One of the students immediately yells out that he seems to have been badly hurt, and another asks for anyone to call the professor. The genius overhears someone laugh as he admits that a middle-high class staff is practically impossible to wield. Calmly, he makes his way to the wand, thinking to himself that it'll be better for the other students to just give up. He brushes past us like, still on the ground as his friend tries to help him get a hold of his faculties. He then cracks a sly smile, believing that the owner of the staff has already been decided. Yuseong stands before the Edmari, drawing the attention of all of his mates. They wonder if he is going to pick it up. Some don't believe that even he could handle such a staff. Well, he proves them wrong when he grabs hold of it and the loud flash of light repeats itself. Our boy blocks his sight so as not to get blinded. He then spies with one eye and notices a smiling Yuseong in the middle of the light. The brightness dies down and the genius is still standing, this time seamlessly wielding the Edmari. The other students refuse to believe it. A student wielding a middle high-class staff is the last thing they anticipated. Our hero just heaves a tired sigh, seeing as he is the only one who expected something like to happen. He is just worried that a lot more people will know how talented the genius is. He peruses his new wand and suddenly shoots a glare in our hero's direction. He has no idea how to act, but Yuseong smiles at him soon enough, making things even weirder. Our boy is left wondering if the genius has lost his mind. In other news, Flame also attained a middle high-class staff in the game, a staff named Terravan. Yuseong feels like this is where the route will split. Flame being able to wield Terravan will definitely put her on Yuseong's radar because he only respects geniuses. He strongly believes that this will open up the My Yuseong route. If only she had gone for another staff, another route entirely would have opened up. For our hero, the task at hand becomes using the female lead to pull the genius to his side. Just then, he sees her walking towards the staff and as expected, she heads in Terravan's direction. He watches her intently, asking himself what she'll do. Every step she takes, our hero gets more agitated. He hopes that she will grab Terravan, then Yuseong will notice her and get a better chance at a happy ending. At that moment, the girl simply walks past the staff, shocking our hero to his marrow. She stands just after it, hand on her chin as she wonders which other staff to pick. Our boy realizes that she is not interested, and questions whether or not she knew about Terravan. Her ignorance troubles him and he admits that the situation is bad. She's supposed to be able to resonate with any staff, seeing as she is the female lead. He grits his teeth as the anxiety builds up. He is worried that she might pick up some strange staff and end up losing out on the other good routes too. At this point, our hero knows what must be done. He begins to warm up his ability, planning to push Terravan to her like a pharmaceutical sales rep pushes medicine when he hasn't met his quota. He activates his blink and in a split second, he arrives right behind Flame. She catches him with the side of her eye, and she turns around in a panic, wondering how our hero got behind her so fast. A nervous laugh escapes his lips as he says hi. He then confesses that he just wanted to know which staff she was going to choose. The female lead immediately folds her hands and asks why. In turn, our hero claims that he wanted to help her because she looked lost. She claps back, telling him that it's not his business. She then bids him goodbye and spins around to leave. Yuseong stretches his hand in an attempt to stop her. He tells her to wait and then wonders what could be strange about the current situation. Normally, the Flame he knew was supposed to be friendly with everyone because she is a social person. He questions why she would be so cold, and then realizes that he doesn't have the time or the luxury because his life kind of depends on it. He yells for her to wait, and she glares at him as he reiterates that he just wants to help her pick a staff. She also repeats that he should mind his business. Of course, our boy is too determined to give it a rest, so he goes on about a staff that is perfect for her. This only infuriates the female lead, so she screams as she asks what he knows about staffs. Another nervous laugh escapes our boy's lips. He is starting to understand that he may have either done wrong or that the female lead is unfriendly with extras. He just claims that he has heard a lot about her and openly reaches for Terravan in an attempt to show her a good staff choice. She recognizes the staff instantly and asks if it's Terravan, just so she can confirm. Our hero simply laughs as he agrees with her. Suddenly, he begins to hear a strange noise. It gets so bad that he begins to stare intently as a bright light approaches him. He squints when it gets too close, groaning and admitting that he was scared by the light. It then takes him a few seconds to realize that Terravan is already in his hand. Looking down as if to question the situation, Yuseong is shocked. He immediately freaks out, wondering why the staff is with him. He recalls that the female lead was supposed to wield it, so he curses under his breath before trying to call out her name. He can feel the deadly energy now emanating from her, so he nervously tries to talk to her. Her deadly energy becomes more furious as she asks him why he did it. Dumbfounded, our boy claims that it's nothing, and admits to only himself that he has messed up royally. The sky is stained yellow by the sunrise as Flame makes her way to school the next morning. All she hears from others is news about 2 students being able to resonate with middle-high-class staffs. She looks in the direction of the voices and overhears them talking about how there were only 5 people in history who have been able to grab those, and now it has increased by 2. They go on about how strange it is that one of the students was only able to use Blink in the magic manifestation exam. His friend quips that it's not supposed to be possible, seeing as Blink is basic magic. Even his parents have told him that Blink was a rare garbage magic. The female lead keeps her ears peeled as her mates wonder aloud if something went wrong. Anyway, she just continues in silence. Later on, at the self-study hall, she heaves a sigh of relief only because the whole place has gotten quieter. She just stares at the ground, slightly annoyed that the two middle-high-class staffs were all people talked about wherever she went that day. The news spread instantaneously, but the female lead doesn't seem to understand the outcome. She was utterly shocked when our hero grabbed Teravan the day before, and it made her question his identity. Apparently, she had read the original novel 3 times before coming into the game, but never has a character like Beak Yusial appeared, not even once. She remembers vividly that no one is supposed to have the ability to just grab Teravan, but our boy waltzed in and did it. This really pisses her off, so she thinks Yusial just wanted to show off to her. She imagines him with the staff on his shoulder and a mocking grin on his face, and then swipes the thought aside, telling herself that it's pointless to think about that now. She angrily tucks a tuft of hair behind her ear in a bid to walk off into silence. Unfortunately, her mates call out to her, asking if she wants to go study by herself. Flame forces her expressionless face into a strained smile and then asks if the girls think that she is some kind of nerd. One of them immediately denies this, reminding her of the numerous times she claimed that there was nothing to do and just ended up studying. The female lead reiterates that it's not like that. Another girl then speaks up, asking the female lead why she always calls them kids when they're the same age. Our girl laughs it off, claiming that it's a force of habit. She then adds that she has always been treated as an older person where she used to live. On the outside, she continues beating her teeth in a fake smile, while on the inside, she admits that she realized she is inside a novel from the present and can't exactly act like a kid. She gets asked again if she is going to study alone, and our girl does her best to remember the name of who she is talking to. The best she can come up with is that she is Jackie. She looks her over and realizes that her style is a bit similar to hers. She then remembers a time when Jackie was more tacky. Our girl simply tells her that she won't be going to study alone. She clarifies that there's going to be a special supplementary meeting coming up, so she is going to attend that. After this, she bids them goodbye and Jackie asks to visit a cafe with her sometime. The female lead doesn't give an answer, she just waves goodbye once again and walks away. As her feet hit the marble floor with some malice, she scoffs at the idea of teenage girls. She admits that it's quite hard to be a student at her age and is too preoccupied with her thoughts to watch the incoming corner. She bumps into Wonryong and lifts her hand to her head as she groans in pain. Wonryong calls out her name and she stops fiddling with her head instantly. She then looks up at this tall glass of adult juice as she calls out his name too. They stare into each other's eyes for a little bit before the boy asks if she is okay. Instantly, she claims that she is, but he doesn't believe her. He points out that her expression isn't a good one, and asks what is up a second time. She wonders if he is worried about her and then tells him that nothing in particular is happening. The boy switches the topic as he inquires whether or not Flame is going to self-study. She accepts that she is and points out that he is on his way to an S-Class exclusive training hall. He talks down on her, claiming that no one can be lazy when it comes to training every day. In turn, she tells him that he is unnecessarily sincere. Wonryong claps back by telling her that her last statement is not something she is supposed to say. She highly doubts this, but it ends up with more soul-snatching eye contact. Suddenly, the boy cracks a smile and reaches for her face soon enough. She watches as he tucks some of her hair aside and then tells her that they'll see each other later. Now flustered, our girl continues to watch the hunk as he makes his way to training. She then turns her gaze away, stubbornly claiming that he is a bland person. She notices another surprise spying at her from just around the corner. It's Jackie from earlier and the girl stays staring at her, so she waves absent-mindedly. Before she can call Jackie's name, the girl flees the scene like she is late to her only job interview. This leaves the girl a little bit confused, but she brushes it off, telling herself that it doesn't matter. She then admits that this isn't the time for fraternization and continues taking long strides until she reaches the self-study hall where she is supposed to attend a special supplementary meeting. According to the novel, Princess Bion and Azel are supposed to be in attendance. Our girl thinks it'll be fun to watch the fake female lead in the villainess of a romance fantasy. As they face off, she pushes the door open and walks inside, book in hand. The first thing she notices is our hero and Yuseong talking it out. Next up, she notices Azel with her ever-calming exterior as she minds her business. Our girl admits that all the important characters are present, so she decides to take inventory. First off, there's Kyle, their host and also an A-class student. The dude looks like he is taken aback, overwhelmed, if you may. Apparently, it's a supplementary meeting for students who need to work on their grades, and seeing that famous S-class students are partaking in it has to do something to poor Kyle. Our girl takes a seat soon enough and gets carried away with Ma Yuseong being present. She is surprised that the male lead of this world is interested in our hero and thinks that it can't be a coincidence. She continues to steal glances as the two boys keep talking and remembers how our boy didn't solve anything other than the 3 hardest questions in the class placement test. Flame thinks that Yuseol knew from the start that if he could solve those questions, he would make it to the S-class. Meanwhile, our boy is nervous as hell. Flame doesn't drop her suspicions about our hero. Instead, she imagines a world where he actually knew about the S-class thing beforehand. In this world, she considers Yuseol to be very dangerous. And over here, our boy is in hell with no one to give him water. He sighs for the umpteenth time, hoping to God that someone would come by and take his current seatmate, Yuseong, off his hands. Unfortunately, the universe never liked him. His seatmate flashes an unnecessary smile as he questions him about why he came to the meeting, adding that he doesn't need to listen to this kind of stuff. The genius proposes that our boy may have come to the meeting for a special reason, so he quickly intervenes to save himself. He tells Yuseong that there's no special reason, and then admits to himself that he is only here because his grades are poor. Our hero wipes off the smile on his face faster than he needed to, but the genius keeps his smile up. This makes him wonder why he is so interested in him anyway. Kyle's voice filters into the crowd as he declares that they've had enough time for chit-chat. From the podium, he announces that they'll be looking over the pavement exam problems. He goes on about how the exam had problems with very high difficulty that the students nicknamed the 3 questions from hell. Princess Bion keeps her eyes peeled on him. Of course, she wouldn't like to replay what happened with her mom the last time she failed. Anyway, the class tutor smiles shyly as he admits that he was only able to solve one of the problems. In his heart, he curses our hero for being in his class. He had hoped to expand his influence in society by teaching a bunch of stupid noble bastards. He catches a glimpse of Yuseol and sees this as his chance to downplay him. He had heard that our boy got the lowest grade in the placement exam, and a smile emanates on Kyle's lips as he sees this as an opportunity to prove that he is better than our hero. The tutor grabs some chalk and his notepad and announces that he'll first show everyone how he solved it. He gets to writing on the board and admits that the problem is kind of like a trap, one purposely trying to lead its solver to make errors. As he explains, some students jot down points. Not Yuseong though. He just keeps staring at our hero with this unsettling smile gracing his features. Anyway, he asks him if he thinks Kyle is right, and this question catches our hero unawares. He has no idea about how to respond, seeing as he doesn't even understand what he is trying to achieve on the blackboard. To worsen things, our boy doesn't even know what they mean by the 3 questions from hell. Immediately, Yuseol kills his nerves and throws caution to the wind by planning to be honest. His hand rests on his chin nonchalantly as he tells the genius that he doesn't know. Kyle, who's still going at it, overhears some students talking about our boy. They mention that he claims that what the tutor is doing is wrong. The news infuriates said tutor on the spot, making him grit his teeth. Our hero realizes that he is being stared at and swirls his head from side to side as he wonders why. The chalk breaks in the tumor's hand and he turns around to ask Yuseol what he means by he is doing it wrong. Our boy shudders, seeing as he never expected the confrontation, only for Kyle to smile mischievously and request that our hero comes to the board to solve it himself. On the outside, our MC keeps his cool, but on the inside, he cannot freak out enough. He keeps wondering the type of trouble he has gotten himself into, only for him to glance at the genius sitting beside him and see him smiling. Yuseong encourages him that he can do it, and our boy realizes that he was setting him up from the start. He accepts his fate and begins his journey down the stairs, eyes pasted on the floor like he is looking for the dollar he lost. At that point, Flame also stares him down from her seat and Bion steals a glance as he walks by hers. Upon reaching the board, he stands beside the tutor and pulls out his bulbul glasses. He puts them on and realizes that the 3 questions from hell are kind of like a pun quiz. Take an earth spell for example. Say a sorcerer cast a spell willing the earth to shed tears and there was double the amount of dirt than before. Why would that be? Our hero believes the answer is simple. He believes that if the dirt cries, it's in a state of decomposture. When this thought comes, our boy feels like a pun king, so he flashes a smile. He soon feels stupid when he realizes how ridiculous the question actually is. It even makes him wonder who came up with them. Anyway, he swipes away the feeling as he stares at Kyle, who now has a frown on his face and his hands folded as he awaits our boy's failure. Meanwhile, Yuseol just thinks about how the dude solved the problem with math, talking about the soil splitting when it cries. That aside, our hero acknowledges that the tutor's method was wrong, but he came to the answer via a stroke of luck. He knows full well that if a similar question were presented to him, he would get it wrong. After looking the question over, our hero declares that he can't really show Kyle how to solve it, but he can show him where he is wrong. The tutor is perplexed, but our boy goes on. He explains that the problem mentioned earth and asks what would happen if it were wind or water, whether his method would still work then. The tutor loses his composure and stutters that he'll just use another method then. Our hero counterattacks by telling him that he'll have to do everything differently in that scenario, and this makes the tutor grit his teeth. Yuseol makes it clear that he only got it 8 due to dumb luck and adds that it was not what the test maker intended him to do. Kyle tries to defend himself, but the words don't come out. He ends up admitting that our hero is right, making him hope that he didn't kill his colleague's confidence that much. He then returns to solving the problem, explaining how things should be. As he explains, the tutor takes notes. Even the students jot down his words anxiously. Only Flame is shocked at the outcome. Her eyes grow wide as she wonders how this is possible. She doesn't understand why the other kids are writing down our boy's explanation, nor does she get why Azel and Bion haven't stopped to correct him. She then realizes that both girls are too distracted by the problem to care about something so petty. The girl returns her gaze to the board, wondering if things are okay. The next chapter starts with the evening time in Stella Academy. The lights in different rooms have been turned on, and they leak out through the windows. In one of them, Yuseong flashes our MC a big smile as he hopes to see him tomorrow. He then waves him goodbye, so Yuseong lifts his hand, returning the gesture. Immediately after the genius leaves, our boy buries his face in his palm, already regretting what life will be like if he gets involved with someone like him. He doesn't even want to see the genius tomorrow or ever again. Our hero peels off his hand from his face and heaves a tired sigh. He stares at his palm, wondering if it's because of the Terravan. Anyway, he complains about not even being able to use it at the moment but still catching Yuseong's attention. He keeps getting troubled, wondering why the genius is interested in him. In the game, there weren't any instances where other characters, other than Flame, used the staff. Our boy makes his way to the exit and catches a glimpse of Princess Beyond by the door. She just stands there quietly, and it makes our boy deduce that she must be waiting for someone. He instantly shrugs it off, seeing as it has nothing to do with him. Our hero simply watches the ground as he walks past her, only to hear her mention his name. This stops him in his tracks, and he turns to his side, as if to confirm whether or not she really called him. It turns out she did, because she immediately tells him that she has something to ask. Our boy doesn't believe that the great Beyond wants his help. On the outside, he stays collected as he asks what she wants from him. She goes on to inquire why he didn't explain the solution earlier. Our hero freezes in place, thinking to himself that there was no way for him to explain a nonsensical quiz. He fidgets for a few seconds, rubbing his neck nervously, as he realizes that the princess must have misunderstood him. He simply reiterates that he had nothing to say, and Beyond just as quickly claims to understand. She thinks that he didn't want to expose his process at a place like that. Our boy knows that she is absolutely wrong, but he stays quiet. With her arms folded, the princess offers to compensate him. Yuseol tries to confirm what she said, so she repeats it, adding that she'll compensate him fairly. In turn, he is going to explain whatever it is he has in his mind to her. Her expressionless face remains the same, but our hero freaks out. The lights in the self-study come alive as Beyond and our boy sit beneath one of them. The princess already handed him the test questions, but they lie helpless on the table. Our sympathetic hero reaches for them and examines them, wondering aloud why the princess would pay just to understand 3 problems from the placement test. She remains cold about it, stating that she has her reasons, and commanding our boy to just tell her what he knows. He wastes no time concurring with Her Majesty. After looking over her test, he points out that she only failed those 3 questions and got all others correctly. He then asks whether she doesn't feel embarrassed coming to him, who failed every other question, for help. She vehemently disagrees, but you can't tell because she lacks emotion. Anyway, she explains that the only thing embarrassing is that she still doesn't know the solution to the problems. The princess admits that she is willing to do anything if it'll help her find answers. Our hero just stares in awe, committing it to memory that she seems to be a model student. He then inquires why she approached him specifically, sharing his gaze between her and the answer booklet, pointing out that she is supposed to have many helpers at her disposal because she is a princess. She leans against her table before revealing that out of all the 1141 freshmen, only 3 students, including Yuseol, actually got the 3 questions from hell right. Our hero's jaw literally drops as he asks what the princess is talking about. In turn, she tucks her hair away and admits that the questions were trick ones, meant to be unsolvable. She adds that only Yuseong, Flame, and himself managed to solve them. Apparently, this put her in a tough spot. Our MC's hands begin to tremble as he grips the sheet. He soon explodes into a nerve-wracking mess as he stands to his feet and screams to confirm the whole trick question debacle. While he is freaking out, the princess quietly asks if he didn't figure that out while he was solving them. Defeated, he sits back down, ripping the paper as he tells himself that the academy is insane. He now understands why he got into S-class. He stares blankly into space as it dawns on him that it's also why Flame held him back. It turns out that he didn't know all the details involved in building the Ether world. He didn't even know about the trick questions existing. With this, he realizes that Flame is different. You see, she has read the entire novel, so even if she doesn't know the game's story, she must be painfully aware of the way things should go in the story. Things like the 3 trick questions, not an extra who wasn't in the original story butting his head in. Since it already happened, our hero admits that Flame had no choice but to acknowledge the existence of Beak Yuseol. He buries his face in his hand yet again, his dilemma unable to hide itself. He now gets why the female lead was cold to him earlier on. Just then, Princess Beyond intrudes his thoughts, asking why he looks downcast. He tells her not to worry about it but goes on to worry himself. He then reminds the princess of their deal, which binds her to listening to any request of his after he teaches her the answers. She immediately concurs, so our hero asks her to alter his sword and turn it into a magic sword, adding that the blacksmiths of her kingdom can easily get it done. The princess objects to this, pointing out that only low-level mercenaries use those kinds of weapons. She asks why he would use such a weapon when he is a mage. Our hero cuts her off as he reinforces that it fits his style. In truth, he just doesn't feel like explaining how powerless he really is. With a steady exterior, he asks whether the princess is going to get it done or not. Bayon takes a moment to mull it over and then announces that it should be easy enough. A small smile visits our hero's features as he admits how nice that is. Afterwards, he points towards her answer booklet and tells her that he'll begin with how to solve the first question. He then plainly states that the way to solve it is through a change of perspective. The princess does not know what he means, so she asks again, only for our boy to repeat his answer. You see, Hong Bayon's weakness is that she uses textbook magic strictly, and the girl is also stuck in a rut. Unfortunately, according to the game sequence, she only discovers this in her second year after losing to Flame in a significant way. For these reasons, our boy believes that he can't give her significant insight at this moment, but he feels he can push her in the right direction. He asks her if she knows what a nonsense quiz is by any chance, leaning in. Bayon's eyes finally open wide enough to show her slight surprise. She then admits that she thinks she has. Our boy offers to give an example, asking her what's between a knee and a knee. The princess is left to think it through, and the best she can come up with is the back of the knee. He then tells her that she is wrong. Apparently, the answer isn't. She still doesn't get it, so she requests an explanation. Our boy tries breaking it down with a smile, reiterating that it is literally between both words. The princess is still blank. Soon enough, her expressionless face takes on a frown as she glares daggers at our hero. He begs her not to glare at him like that, and then laughs nervously as he tells her to calm down and take a look at the question again. He explains that it has formulas and techniques that she is not aware of, so she has to solve it using only her creativity. Our hero then asks if creativity can be memorized. This question stirs the princess's curiosity. She looks away as realization washes over her, and then answers in the negative. Our MC lets a soft smile fly as he points out that having many spells and techniques is important. But for a mage, the most important thing is to look beyond the boundary of your thoughts. The princess's mind begins to open up as she hears our hero talk about how magic can grow with even the smallest chance. He then points out that she only thinks about things as she sees them. Apparently, she didn't know that spells aren't just about memorizing and casting them, because she stares at her desk shamefully when she hears this. Anyway, Yusial admits that the princess might be better than him at analytical thinking and judgment, and adds that she lacks creativity, which is the most important tool for a mage. She looks away completely, intertwining her hands beneath the table because of how hurtful the truth feels. Her entire aura takes on a serious tone, so much so that it unnerves our hero. He even admits to himself that the look on her face is way too serious. To push past this, he flashes a nervous smile and asks if she understands what he is trying to say, even though it sounds kind of complicated. In turn, Bayon confirms that she did. He keeps the smile going, when he is really surprised that she understood him, mostly because he has no idea what he is talking about. Our hero just claims to be glad about her understanding and declares that they get into reviewing more trick questions. He begins by asking what a man said to his horse while putting him to bed. The princess is immediately flustered, so our boy repeats the question for her. Her thumb alone pays her chin a visit as she racks her brain for something creative. Unfortunately, she comes up empty and tells our hero that she doesn't know. Apparently, the answer is it's past your bedtime, a classic play on the words past and your. The next question is about why beds don't work hard. The princess also has no idea what the answer could be, so our boy tells her that it's because they're always lying down on the job. He poses another question about what happened when rock, paper, and scissors entered a race. As usual, Bayon averts her gaze and shamefully admits that she doesn't know. It turns out that it's because rock began to roll, while paper and scissors were stationary. Yep, it's just another play on the word stationary. Not gonna lie, I'm kinda digging these stupid puns. Our hero is excited about his last pun, but his joy gets sucked out when he notices how frustrated the princess looks. She bites her lip in anger as a frown deepens on her face. She has shown more emotion in the last 10 minutes than she has since the story began. To err on the side of caution, our MC drops his once lifted finger. He admits that the princess is about to explode, and this makes him feel threatened. He pushes past this as he asks her what the cloud said to the ocean. Once again, she doesn't seem to get it, so our hero rephrases the question and asks what the cloud said to the ocean when it's raining. Her hand returns to her chin in thought, and as she mulls it over, our hero begs the universe to send him a win as he anxiously watches her struggle. And at last, his prayers were answered when she finally replies correctly that the cloud said it was getting emotional. A nice play on the word emotional. Our boy's eyes widen in a pleasant surprise before he tells her that she got it right. It was a joyous moment indeed. Even for the lady, the surprise washes over her, and it's accompanied by the most beautiful smile that she has been hiding away this entire time. My guy can't help but stare as he realizes that this is the first time she smiles, both in the game and in reality. He cups his chin and flashes her an equally encompassing smile. He then tells her that the creativity of a princess is on another level. She instantly clears her throat, telling our boy that it's enough chit-chatting. She then requests the next question, so Yusial keeps up his smile as he feeds it to her. The moon is already high in the sky by the time our boy is set free from the prison of education. He walks amongst his fellow night crawlers, tired and wielding eye bags that would make pandas jealous. Sighing for the umpteenth time, he remembers how he spent 3 hours on some stupid questions with the princess. His smile is one of shame as he refuses to believe all the rubbish he said. He is then swarmed with memories of the blunders from his past. Anyway, our hero is now certain that Hong Bion is undoubtedly an excellent magician with a sharp mind to match, but her problem is her rigid way of thinking. He begins to feel guilty for exploiting this rigid mind of hers, even though she is the villain. His staff comes to mind, so he is left thinking about how to quickly modify it into a sword so that he can do more with it. Our hero pushes everything else aside, seeing as there is nothing he can change about what he has already done. Up next is shopping for the books he'll need for class that day, so he walks around trying to find where to get them. After walking for a while, he finally arrives at a small house and announces that he has found it. The house is quite aged, and the inside is covered in cobwebs, shelves and all. After taking a look around, our hero admits that it's pretty rundown. He steals a glance at a cloaked man sitting nearby, and this is all the proof he needs to know he is in the right place. You see, in the game, this bookstore is said to be owned by the man who has a perverted habit of pretending to be asleep just so he can watch his customers on. In this nameless, decrepit bookstore lies the study notes of Mela, the student who graduated at the top of Stella Academy 10 years ago. Lore has it that it is hidden in this bookstore. If it were the game, the player would only need to click a button to take a major, but since this is real life, students will have to source out textbooks for the courses. In addition, your grades will increase at different rates depending on the textbook used. Our hero continues to peruse the bookstore as he recalls a time when he only bought textbooks from the famous ones. Luckily, he later found out that there were good textbooks hidden in stores without signage. He continues to search for the notes of Mela, imagining how guaranteed he would be to pass if he used them in his study of magical engineering. At this point, he remembers the bulbul glasses and how they will get him decent grades if he uses them, but he wants more. Our hero would like to be able to figure out secret recipes. Just then, he gets distracted. A simple aversion of his gaze reveals the notes he has been searching for. He reaches for the book at that moment, only for another set of hands to reach out for it too. In slight surprise, he turns to see who it is. Apparently, it's Hazel, so he calls out her name. She just stands there staring before finally asking if he knows who she is. He doesn't hide that he does. In fact, he points out that she is quite famous. She then admits that she remembers him from the supplementary group and calls out his full name. Our boy falls silent with a panging feeling in his chest as he realizes that she doesn't even remember meeting him before the academy. She innocently continues talking about enjoying his debate in class and adds that it was a shame that he couldn't finish explaining. This reminds our boy that Hazel also couldn't finish all 3 questions from hell. She interrupts his thoughts with a farewell and turns around to leave. Yusial reaches for Mela's notes as he watches Hazel leave. He then thanks God that she didn't take it. Holding what he came searching for, he is left wondering why the fake heroine would be in an unnamed bookstore. He watches as she picks up a book, stares at the price tag of 78,000, and then quietly returns it after heaving a sigh. His mind begins to run scenarios through his head, but the most likely would be that she is broke. The bookstore is known to sell used books, so the students that come to it are the poor ones, just like our hero. It becomes apparent that Hazel, having come from a fallen family, has no choice but to join the category of poor students. The thought of her father probably being killed by the dark demonic humans just spells sadness for our hero. It's even worse that a princess like Hazel is coming to buy used books and is still worried about the price. Sadly, it doesn't get better. She also faced an unfortunate end in the original novel, dying before Flame, who became the heroine of this world. You could say that Hazel is the most unfortunate character in the game, and you would not be wrong. She spies as our boy drops a couple of books on the counter. He then flashes a smile at the creepy man in a cloak as he asks him to sell him the books. The store owner is quite startled by the number of books and he stutters in agreement, keeping in mind that our boy is much stronger than he looks. He smiles menacingly at Hazel, and she holds her tongue as she looks at the books he chose. Our boy finally pokes the bear by asking her what's going on. The fake heroine almost insults our hero, but she stops halfway, claiming that it looks like he picked out some interesting topics. He could sense that she was about to call him names, and doesn't know whether to be amused or offended. He continues poking the bear, so she asks why he is reading topics like the advanced sealing theory. She adds that the theory of sealing is an ancient magic involving the use of an item. So, in the current world where alchemy and magical engineering are already advanced, sealing has become a skill that is rarely used. RMC easily agrees that the subject is one that doesn't have much use. Hazel then pastes an ostentatious expression on her face as she discovers that he already knew. It quickly changes to one of surprise when our boy reveals that he is taking the course because people think it's useless. She turns to face him, asking what he means. Our hero's smile returns as he explains that everyone thinks like her, and that's why it'll be easier to get higher grades in the sealing class. He then tells her that he'll be leaving first, and she just stares helplessly as he does so. Yusial agrees with what Hazel said, seeing as most students don't want to take on the sealing theory class, and that's why he can spend less time on it and still make a good grade compared to other classes. With this, our hero looks forward to not having any issues this semester. Regret laces the eyes of the fake heroine. so much so that she can only stare in silence as our boy struts away. The next day is a shy sunny day. Azel shows up for her first class, and it's about the study of nihility. She grips her notepad with both hands as she walks down to the class, keeping in mind that the subject is easy to get good grades on, so it shouldn't be too bad. Well, it is. Upon stepping into the hall, she sees a multitude of students and hides her alarm pretty well. She overhears two girls talking as one asks the other if she is also taking nihility. Her colleague admits to taking the class and adds that she thinks she messed up. She had signed up because people were saying the class was an easy one that she could get good grades on. Apparently, the rumors have already spread, and she is worried that all the smart kids are also taking this class. Azel stays silent as usual, telling herself that it can't be helped. She then promises to do her best in the other classes. The class comes to an end soon enough, and the second student out the door complains about being hungry. His friend right behind him wonders what she'll eat for lunch. They just decide to pick out what they want when they reach the cafeteria. In all of this, Azel is right behind them. She sighs dejectedly as she thinks about how troubling her situation is, scared that it'll be difficult for her to get a scholarship if so many people are signed up for all her classes. The growl from her stomach intrudes on her thoughts, and she looks over her meal tickets, wondering whether to get something to eat first. She begins to calculate her means, seeing as she has only 60 meal tickets left for this semester. She then decides to just get some bread. At that moment, she catches a glimpse of the boy from yesterday, Beak Usial. With his bulbul glasses on, our boy also catches a glimpse of the fake heroine. Azel is moved to almost ask him what he is doing on this side of campus. Her eyes then follow him until he enters a nearby classroom for a lecture. The lecturer had already scribbled a few things down, and the classroom looked scanty. The fake heroine notices this alongside the fact that they're all students with low grades. She continues lusting for the class, afraid that it might get cancelled. She then welcomes the possibility of signing up for the class and being able to make good grades without putting a lot of her time into it. She thinks about using the time saved to study for other subjects and being able to earn more scholarship money. She clasps her book against herself, and a fresh wave of motivation washes over her. Azel then takes another look at our hero, wondering if he already knew that the class would be easy to score in. It dawns on her that our boy might have planned out all his classes in a way that makes his life easier. It breaks her perception of him instantly, and she forces herself to look away. She refuses to believe that he is that smart and just concludes that it must have been a coincidence. Next up, it's an unusually sunny day in Stella Academy, but students are in class nonetheless. Our hero pays rapt attention as their professor talks about the origin of magic. He goes on about the founding mage, also known as the White Mage, and how he spread magic around the whole world for humans and other species to learn to handle. Their professor is one Mr. Layden, and he's a specialist of divine moon studies. You see, the White Mage had taught the elves nature class magic, the dwarves matter magic, and finally, he taught humans elemental magic. Afterwards, the White Mage traveled to the heavens, and this is where Usiel stops listening to his professor. He's more dejected as ever and is left wondering how he's going to keep up with stuff like this for the next 3 years. He almost buries his face in his desk as thoughts of being too old for high school visit his mind. He feels like it's torture and remembers that he could have skipped all of this with a click if he was playing the game. Something on his left catches his attention, so he takes a look, all while realizing how important this course is. He now believes that it can give him clues as to what the true ending of the game is. He rests his head on his hand as he reminds himself that it's all an assumption. Our hero is distracted once again, but glances to his right this time. He has to ask himself if Azel was always in his class, because the girl suddenly appears in it, concentrating on the lecturer as though she didn't just pop in. Usiel has no recollection of main characters taking this course, but soon brushes it aside, telling himself that it doesn't matter. After this, he reverts his attention to Professor Layden, who's now talking about how human curiosity didn't end with elemental magic. Apparently, human mages traveled the world and began stealing magic from other species. Unfortunately, that still wasn't enough for them. They only had to stop because it wasn't physically possible for them to learn any more magic. The founding mage had left the 12 divine moons and disappeared. After mentioning this, the professor stares intently at his students as if to let the information sink. He then asks if anyone in the class knows anything about the 12 divine moons. Azel opts to answer, and goes on about the 12 moons being guardians who protect the balance of power in the continent. It turns out that they were scattered all over the continent, carrying out their duties until 1,000 years ago. The professor takes over and waves his wand around in agreement. He mentions how the 12 moons have their own special powers used to protect the continent, and even gives examples. For starters, the divine moon that symbolized summer, also known as the 6th moon of the red summer, wielded a red flame. It is said that those flames never died out. Professor Layden then proposes that whoever goes to the deep sea of Alamanca can still see the red flames. He adds that any curious student can go take a look. The class falls silent after his lame attempt at a joke. Even Usiel feels bad for the professor. This doesn't stop him from recounting the actions of Alamanca, king of the seas, and how humans would die if they step into his domain. The professor points at one of 2 drawings of the sea he had up on the wall. He announces that it's called Levian's Coast and that a great whirlpool that appeared in the middle of the ocean has been frozen solid by the 12th moon of the blue winter. Apparently, each moon possesses a particular power, and it's said that a miracle will happen if you gather all 12 of them. One of the students raises his hand as he interrupts the professor with a question about what type of miracle will happen. Mr. Layden's posture slumps as both his hands rest on the table. He then admits that he has no idea because all the moons fell asleep 1,000 years ago. Our hero immediately agrees with the professor's assessment, seeing as he recalls meeting some of the Divine Moon while playing the game. Strangely, he had met only 5 out of 12, and it was through limited time events. This was only possible because our boy stayed peeled to his computer as he gathered information from various layers in the community. At the end of the day, there weren't any other players who met as many Divine Moons as our MC did. Back to the present, and our hero's expression takes a serious turn. He tells himself that if his assumptions are correct, then these 12 Divine Moons have something to do with the true ending. He had come to this conclusion because if no one has been able to reach the true ending of the game in the last 10 years, then the answer must lie in the content that no one has been able to reach. Our hero intertwines his arms as he rests them on his desk. He's still deep in thought about meeting only 5 Divine Moons and how he had to risk his life multiple times to do it. He then tells himself that he has no choice but to risk it if he wants to witness the true ending. He simply resolves to do it all over again. Soon enough, some flame and an unfortunate mannequin suffers the wrath of Professor Hong Yil, Bion's mother, as she teaches a class on the element of fire. She has all the students outside as she strikes a majestic pose and yells them that strength isn't all there is. The professor reiterates that no matter how strong one's attack is, it's useless if you can't hit the enemy. Mrs. Hong simply stands amidst the display of flames as her student etch away at the mannequins one attempt after the other. Her eyes follow a certain attack intently as it flies right above her head and destroys one of the mannequins in a not-so-quiet explosion. She stands in awe of this student. At first, unfortunately, the dust begins to settle and she discovers that said student didn't even hit the target. The professor then takes a look around for who's responsible and notices the silhouette of her daughter holding her staff and biting her lip in regret. She doesn't hesitate to mention how terrible she thinks it is, and Bion just turns away in shame. Bion separates herself as she thinks about her EFF up. She's painfully aware of the fact that she showed her mom yet another sorry sight and stares at the ground in shame. Her hands meet each other on her thighs as she fidgets over how disappointed her mother must be. Just then, someone calls out to her and she looks up with her big eyes. It's some red-headed girl with a soft smile. Her smile then brightens as she wonders if Bion is okay. She wastes no time sitting beside the princess, her smile still plastered on her face. She then tells her that she's so amazing, and this surprises Bion, so much so that she asks this girl what she means by that. In turn, the redhead admits that she and the princess used the same magic, but hers was much weaker. The princess doesn't care about that, she just points out that she couldn't aim. Right, even with all that power. The redhead flashes another 1,000-watt smile as she reminds Bion that her magic itself is incredible and super cool. She proceeds to narrate how she has been hearing about the princess since she was young. Our girl quickly remembers that the redhead is a fire-type mage, just like her. She can't quite remember her though, so she wonders if the girl's name is Arshuang. If it is, the princess may have heard of her. She had heard about a next-level genius of the fire attribute and how she emerged suddenly. With all of this, our girl still wasn't expecting Arshuang's magic power to rival her own. While the girl watches intently, the princess tells her that it must feel good to have such accuracy. In turn, a weak smile graces her lips and she tries encouraging Bion, telling her that with a little practice, the princess's power won't even be comparable to her. Our girl feels like she's being patronized, so she stands to her feet and tells Arshuang that she has had enough of her rubbish. She then adds that she feels better after talking to her, catching a glimpse of the redhead through the side of her eye. She then bids her goodbye and walks away, leaving the girl sitting by herself. Just like a pencil drawing, Arshuang's smile fades over time and she just stares at Bion with an expressionless outlook. The sky bears touches of pink as the sun threatens to set. At this point in time, a certain royal makes her way home. She opens the door and the first thing she sees is her potted plant. Princess Bion is the royal in question and she sighs tiredly after locking the door behind her. Just then, someone calls out for her and she steals a glimpse of who it is. She realizes that it's her aide, and said aide welcomes her home. Her name is Yi Taran and she's the princess's exclusive guard. Yi sets out some hot cocoa alongside some ginseng candy and offers it to her mistress. Our girl then thanks her. The guard brings up the staff remodeling commission that her mistress had asked of her and adds that a top-grade magic sword will be made out of it since the staff is so good. The princess overhears her as she digs into the candy. Just as she's about to place one of them in her mouth, Yi reveals that there was something slightly questionable about it. This piques the princess's interest and she watches her guard touch her chin to explain the situation. She reiterates how staves are supposed to suck in the mana of their users. Bion quickly downs her candy, so she can ask if the guard isn't referring to a dark magic tool. E clears her throat and then claims that this is a bit different, seeing as it is consistently in resonance with nature's energy. The princess eyebrows furrow as she struggles to understand how someone would take a user's mana and resonate it with that of nature. She abruptly turns to her guard after this, wondering aloud about why such a garbage staff is ranked as a middle-high class. E then reiterates that it's precisely a middle-high class because of its attributes. Our girl asks what she means, so the guard explains that the original ability would drastically strengthen the user's mana, making it a high class, or even higher. Unfortunately, it was only downgraded to a middle-high class because it absorbs mana just by holding it. The princess practically gets out of her seat when she hears this. She screams in an attempt to confirm that the guard said high class, following up with a question about how a student can wield such a thing. E admits that she's also confused about that part. The princess needs her head in frustration. She recalls that the Terravan wasn't there for them to resonate with in the first place. Apparently, she doesn't believe that most mages would use that kind of staff even if they were given. She then comes up with two conditions where that could happen. One would be where a mage had too much magic, and the other, he would have none at all. The princess expresses her confusion to E and declares that she's sure our hero will figure things out. After shrugging it off, she takes a sip of her tea and admits that our boy is quite unique. A few days have passed since the semester began. It's now a beautiful morning with clear skies and an almost bald professor teaching our hero's class. Yusial has on his bulbul glasses as he pays rapt attention to the lecturer. He overhears him mention how attack magic needs to be manipulated in more detail than any other type of magic. This is why mana orbitory class is important. The professor's name is Karlam, by the way. Azel is also laser focused as the professor declares that for the PvP battles, all students will be learning orbitology with a focus on shooting, which means exuding magic from one's body, and target, which entails creating magic with a fixed target. The professor draws something on the board and announces that they're going to discuss the orbital formula. He poses a question concerning the orbit and predicted observed distance covered needed to hit a mage using water-type magic. Mr. Karlam then opens the floor for the students to attempt it. Instead, they immediately start to complain. One of them wonders why the professor had to pick water out of all the available attributes. His colleague even adds that someone who isn't a water attribute major can't handle such a question. All this while, our hero stays quietly seated, overhearing his mates thinking about whether or not the professor is trying to bother them. A yawn comes along soon enough, indicating how bored our hero is with the class. Just as he wonders why these classes are harder than Korean, the professor locks eyes with him and his bored expression. Well, the expression becomes one of caution, but it doesn't help his case. Mr. Karlam calls our hero out to solve the problem. He panics on the inside, regretting that he got caught. But on the outside, he agrees to solve the question. He gets on his feet, heads to the blackboard, and a few moments later, he tells his professor that he's done with the question. Mr. Karlam stares at the board in surprise and even breaks into a cold sweat with his mouth open. He stutters as he compliments our hero for solving it quite easily. The professor stands in awe of our boy's ability to organize the Redi-Hibok equation so simply. He draws closer to Yusial as he asks him if his first major has something to do with the water attribute. Our boy flashes a shy smile, throwing his hands up in denial. On this note, the professor announces that they'll continue with similar questions in their next class. Meanwhile, Azel continues looking at our hero whilst keeping her thoughts to herself. Afterwards, everyone including our MC makes their way out via the exit. He then hears someone draw his attention, so he glances towards the person. Apparently, it's the fake heroine. She just stares at him intently before declaring that she has a question for him. Our hero is taken aback by Azel's approach, so he wonders aloud about what she wants to ask. You see, the fake heroine thinks she has determined something about him during the time she has watched him. She found out that he's definitely smart if you put his grades aside, and this is even in comparison to the top rankers. At this point, the memory of him rounding up Mr. Karlam's question plays in her mind. How she was shocked that he did it when she was certain that the question was one that only professors can solve. She had troubled herself thinking about Beak Yusial's identity, even if she was told that Stella Academy is a place where geniuses gather. At first, Stella had brushed a possibility concerning our hero aside. But now, she's certain that he has a course registration strategy. On this note, the fake heroine gathers the courage to ask our boy what his next class is going to be. Determination heavy in her voice as she promises herself that she must get the information. Once again, Yusial is left in shock, not knowing how to respond. He simply asks her why she wants to know and whether she's interested in him or something. This immediately pisses her off and she wastes no time telling him how gross he sounded. In turn, our hero admits that he was more grossed out by saying it. He centers himself, running his neck and reminding himself that he's actually an adult. He then repeats his question about why she wants to know. Azel opens up about all the research she did about the classes our boy is taking, and she reveals that they all seem like classes where students can easily get high grades. A mix of surprise and amusement shows on our hero's face as she goes on. The fake heroine promises to be straight with him, so she asks where he learned his strategy from, passing that it's really important to her. Yusial puts up a false front after finally learning what she wanted to ask. He then laughs at the whole strategy talk and claims that it was all a coincidence. He doesn't give her a chance to think it over and announces that he'll be on his way if she doesn't have any other questions. He turns to leave while Azel is left gathering her thoughts. He has already gone a few ways down the hall when she tells him to wait. She's not audible enough, so our hero doesn't hear her. The fake heroine just stands there contemplating what to do next. She stares helplessly until she can force herself to move. She then yells for our boy to wait up, and this time, he hears her and averts his gaze to her. She covers the gap, clasping her book tighter than ever as she tells him to hold on for a second. UCL complains about her, asking why she would follow him. He then tells her to go and learn the whole strategy thing from someone else, adding that there are a lot of smart people at Stella. For option's sake, he advises her to just follow what he has been doing, since she claims to have looked him up. The girl tries to object, stating that anyone who takes Divine Moon Studies gets an A+, so it won't matter if she also takes it. The problem now is that Azel registering for other classes that our boy is also in could impact his grades negatively. Our MC realizes that this girl will lose out the most if she doesn't get her scholarship, and even in such a situation, she's still worried about the grades of others. While he's thinking about this, the fake heroine is as disturbed as ever, sweating and staring at her feet. In turn, Yuseol admits that she may be a bit annoying, but a female lead is a female lead. He waits until she lifts her eyes to see him, only for her to act all cute and request for his help. She then pleads with him to suggest a class where she can easily get a good grade. Seeing through her facade, he inquires whether she thinks her looks will convince him. In turn, Azel reiterates how her stress gets taken away when she looks at her face. This perplexes our boy though, so he asks if she's serious. The heroine bursts out laughing and admitting that she was joking. Apparently, she expected our hero to be wound tight, so she prepared some compensation. Upon hearing this, our boy gets thrown off balance. He wonders why most of these kids offer compensation, and is also disturbed by why they're all so snobbish. Azel interrupts his thoughts as she asks whether he knows about the ghost story of the 7th tower. Yuseol's eyes widen in surprise before he admits that he knows. Even the heroine didn't expect a positive answer, so she points out that there aren't many people who know the story. Anyway, she mentions that it's an abandoned building that disappeared and that it has a bunch of barriers preventing people from even getting close to where the building used to be. She's about to continue when our hero stops her. She looks at him to beg his pardon but ends up asking if everything is alright after seeing our boy grab his head. G admits only to himself that he might go insane. You see, he perceives this to be big news, seeing as this information can help Flame greatly increase her affection with the male protagonist. The fact that Flame knows this also means that Azel must have known it in the original novel. Worse off, the fake heroine is supposed to give this information to the male protagonist, not some extra like Beak Yuseol. To cut her off, he mentions that the story is a scary one, so he doesn't want to hear it and thinks it's not interesting. He swipes her story away with a gesture of his hand and then makes his way out of there. The fake heroine stops him again, mentioning that it's not as scary as he claims. She then asks if he's scared of ghosts at his age. In turn, our hero agrees to give her a strategy top for free. This confuses the poor girl though. She begins to analyze what made our boy refuse to tell her in the beginning, only to change his mind in the end. Our hero then makes it clear that it's his mind to change. His eyes well up with consideration as he admits to himself that it's enough for Azel to want to sincerely give him something. Her book never leaves her arms, nor does her look of determination waver. Our MC explains that the information he's about to divulge isn't related to grades but will help her immensely. He then tells her to take the class on a meditation journey into the abyss as her liberal arts class. Azel is more confused than grateful. She wonders why he would be taking meditation classes alongside the Divine Moon course. This makes her ask if he's into cultivation, and our hero blatantly denies this. He averts his gaze as he thinks up a good way to explain the situation. The best he can do is talk about his master being in a bishop position just like the fake heroine is in, and adds that she was able to greatly raise her magic power through the use of meditation. She's now interested, so she confirms if only meditation can increase her strength. Our boy seamlessly agrees because it may not be known yet. But in reality, bishops who wield large-scale destruction magic find meditation to be extremely important. You see, precise casting comes from formulas and equations, but it ultimately comes from your mind, which moves mana. Our hero announces that he doesn't usually give out such information but claims that Azel is an exception because she's cute. Her expression is as deadpan as it can ever be as she reminds our boy about calling her ugly just moments ago. She then lets a small smile fly and thanks him for the help even if it won't improve her grades. She bid him goodbye and they parted ways. Our hero watches her leave, only to be in his feelings about the information he gave could change the future. The other option would be to leave her be, but this would make the girl die a tragic death in this life as well. Our boy hopes that meditation will be helpful to her. At that moment, he remembers that he's also a mage and wonders why he never thought of training until now. The Beak Yuseol in the game trains his body strictly, awakens his magic revelation delay physique, and grows immensely. He remembers how one could gain experience by clicking a button in the game, but now he can do it directly. Unfortunately, it's been quiet for ages, and our hero hasn't gathered any experience, so he simply smiles and admits that he should be grateful to Azel. Having pulled off his school coat, our hero declares that his dorm really is very large. In Stella, all the students reside in the dorms. The dormitory system was a fun addition to the game so that players can decorate their rooms as a little extra content. But for BQCL, it was his only home because his village burned down. Anyway, the dorms are assigned according to the class you are in, and although the size of the rooms are the same, the number of students sharing them differs depending on the class. Of course, the S classes get the highest floor to themselves. Our hero sits on his bed, folding his arms as he remembers feeling a bit lonely in his room. Now, he's just glad that he can use the silence for good. He takes a deep breath and then exhales loudly, telling himself that he'll begin his meditation at this moment. His hands drop to his thighs, he closes his eyes, and he tries his best to concentrate. Our hero reminds himself that stats aren't the most important thing, and that he has to get used to his body, seeing as this is now his reality. He's covered by a bluish hue as he deepens his concentration. Undoubtedly, BQCL was a genius in the game. This was because he managed to manifest Sword Aura by utilizing the fact that mana is always circulating in and out of him. He never drew anyone's attention, so nobody knows that UCL is a genius swordsman who was the only one in the Ether world to attain the pinnacle of swordsmanship. Our hero keeps maintaining his focus as he tells himself that he needs to walk down the path of excellence once again. His breathing is what dictates the flow of mana through his body, so our boy thinks that slowly increasing the amount of mana he takes in with each inhalation will enable him to eventually take in enough mana at once. Since skills don't level up by just collecting EXP, one would need to continue using the skill in order to level it up. Our hero is now encapsulated by a golden glow as he admits that all he has to do is train. The clock on the wall announces that it's just a little past 4 AM, the skies are barely bright. But our boy notices none of this because of how deeply focused he is on his meditation. The golden glow around him now exudes like stray smoke, and our hero's eyes shoot open with realization. He stares at his hands in awe as he realizes that this must have been the way BQCL felt in the game, like a strange essence is moving in and out of him. This is what someone who had accepted the mana leakage syndrome as part of him at a young age would feel. The feeling wasn't far from base because at that moment, his console pops up, notifying our hero that his mana leakage syndrome skill has been leveled up. That, and his blink skill too. Our boy just watches with excitement until the upgrade is complete. He then yells out in celebration, loud enough for the whole dorm to hear. Anyway, he balls his fist in determination, accepting that he's now a step closer to fulfilling his mission. With this, he promises to find the true end of the game no matter what. Later that day, the wind blows stray leaves in every direction, and students gather beneath the bright sky, including a scheming flame. Well, that's what it would seem like to outsiders. You see, the grass field and the wind are both artificially created with magic, but they both feel real. This is because the students are gathered in the Stella Dome. The Stella Dome is similar to a pocket dimension and is set up on the Academy campus. This dome allows you to freely manipulate the size of its space and even its features. For this reason, almost all Academy events are held there, including sports, dungeons, gates, and monster training. Meanwhile, a total of 141 students gather under instruction, 50 each from Class A1 and A2, and 41 from the S class. The female lead thinks that if this was anything like the novel, it would have been 39 students from S class. She expected it to be 40, including herself, and never expected another student to be added last minute. This gets her thinking about where BQCL came from. Apparently, there were only 1,140 students in the first year. With the addition of the lead, it became 1,141. This only reveals that UCL was in the original novel too. Instead of admitting confusion, Flame promises to slowly figure things out, reassuring herself that she can do it. She then reminds herself that she's the only person in the Ether world who knows the novel, so she balls her fist in solidarity. Afterwards, she gets a sense that the class will be starting soon, so she covers the gap between herself and the group. Upon arrival, she overhears someone asking a certain Master Jeremy if he's done with class registrations. This instantly piques her interest and she watches as Jeremy answers positively. A nearby student then adds that they signed up for soft magic research just because they heard that the young master will be taking it too. Jeremy smiles with all of his teeth as he tells the student that they'll have fun together. Meanwhile, Flame keeps checking him out like he's food on the stove. She remembers Prince Jeremy from the novel. Unfortunately, he was in love with Azel, obsessed even, but she never loved him back. This became the villain arc that nobody wanted. The female lead realizes that the young master looks kind. She also remembers that each of his actions are carefully calculated. For this reason, she plans to watch out and not get close to him. At this point, Jeremy catches a glimpse of her, so he turns to face her, smiling ear to ear and waving like she's his long-lost love. In turn, Flame smiles and waves too, pretending not to be cautious of him. She does admit that he's good-looking though, and adds that she understands why he has so many people sucking up to him. The young master goes back to talking with his friends and the female lead concludes that his clique is the most conspicuous in Stella Academy. She walks away from him soon enough, reminding herself to get her act together. Since this world is her reality now, she realizes the need to prepare for her future. Jeremy watches her go and a smile creeps onto his lips as he thinks about her. At that moment, a tutor calls the attention of all the students. This is none other than Professor Hanwall. He then announces that they'll begin with simple training before moving to the lesson of the day, adding that he needs to know the skill level of the students so he can teach them properly. With his usual stoic demeanor, he goes on about being the one to direct their training and yells that if no one likes it, they should keep it to themselves. He makes it known that as a professor, he reserves the right to add to or subtract from the points of any student, and reminds them that they'll be expelled if they fall below a certain number. The professor finally announces that he'll explain the nature of the training. Apparently, it's going to be a mock dungeon, so Mr. Hanwall alerts everyone that he'll be using phenomena that occur in real dungeons, as well as traps and monsters, to test each and every student. Anyone who takes down a risk level 1 monster will get 4 points, and 8 points will go to whoever eliminates a level 2. The professor tosses a short golden stick around called the point stick, and whoever can catch it will get a whopping 20 points. It turns out that the top 5 students will get a small reward, alongside shop privileges, but those who score 0 will have their points taken from them. The professor adds that whoever is scared of failing or taking up the challenge alone will have the courtesy of forming teams. Unfortunately, points will be divided amongst team members. Here's the dicey part. Whoever is able to defeat their fellow student gets to take all their points. With this, the professor bids all of them good luck and disappears into thin air. Soon enough, the Stelladome begins to manifest. The ground begins to tremble and the students begin to panic. In no time, giant trees begin to shoot out from the ground, causing even more panic amongst the kids. Flame easily recognizes the dungeon they've been put in and refers to it as the Jack and the Beanstalk map. As the name implies, a ginormous beanstalk emanates from the center of the dome and grows until it touches the sky. Its vines spread out to cover the whole area, and they're much bigger than the average person. All the students are left in the heart of it, including the female lead. She immediately summons her staff and resolves to get going. She has all but taken one step when she hears someone call her name. Flame turns around to answer, only to see Jackie asking if she's going to be alone throughout the practical training. Our girl remembers her from their first meeting, but takes some time to think over Jackie's question. You see, she does the math and concludes that working alone is much better than teaming up, because one can get more points that way. She then apologizes to Jackie, explaining that she's going to try being on her own this time. Weirdly, the girl just smiles and tells Flame that she understands. She adds that it can't be helped because of the point distribution system. The female lead stutters as she concurs with Jackie. She then wonders to herself if the girl was trying to be sarcastic. Swiping the thought aside, she smiles and tells her colleague that they'll go together next time. In turn, the girl agrees and goes on her merry way. Our female lead is left riddled with questions. She's not sure, but it seems to her like that Jackie girl keeps trying to mimic her. She brushes this under the rug soon enough, telling herself that it could just be a phase that the girl is going through. An hour has passed since the practical began, and our girl is busy shooting down monsters. She admits that it's quite exhausting and tugs her collar to combat the heat. She's left wondering when the practical training is going to end, only for something weird to draw her attention. She immediately becomes alert as a bunch of hefty vines makes their way towards her with the speed Hermes would envy. In turn, she lifts her staff and activates a defense spell which helps her push back the vines. After this, the vines retreat and the girl is left standing with a sizzling staff. She's taken aback that the field also attacks, so she gives kudos to Stella Academy for making it impossible to underestimate even the dungeon practical training. So far, Flame has collected 18 points, but she's unimpressed because someone could easily surpass her by finding 1 point stick. She decides to continue moving forward, so she puts one leg in front of the other carefully. In no time, she stops in her tracks, her senses picking up a certain presence in the distance. She first mistakes it for that of a monster before realizing that it belongs to a person. She becomes worried at this point and grips her staff with everything in her, seeing as she has never encountered someone who could hide their presence to this extent. She continues to stay quiet until she comforts herself that everything will be okay. Apparently, she's also hiding her presence using the one with nature skill. With specialties like bind, destruction, defense, and healing, it would be an okay choice for Flame to ambush an opponent. She hides behind a vine, using it as shade as she spies on this opponent. She soon realizes that he's holding a stick and it dawns on her that he's actually Bikusial. In turn, our hero feels a presence nearby, so he turns around in search of it. Meanwhile, Flame wonders if he's also going around alone. She crouches as she recalls hearing that many students tried to team up with our hero but he rejected all of them. Just as she admits that she's uncertain about what our boy is thinking, her eyes pick out the point stick in his hand, surprising her that he already obtained one. She takes a few moments to think it through and then concludes that this is the perfect chance. She spies on Usial once again and resolves that she's going to test him. Our girl then summons a light cluster using her staff and as instructed, the lights begin to gather around it. She quickly calculates that our hero is just 15 meters from her current location. Seeing as his back is turned at the moment, she concludes that there's no way he can perform a defensive tactic from such a distance. Just then, the female lead expands her spell, steadies herself, and finally releases a light bullet. Said bullet bolts through the once quiet air in a burst of gold. It comes close to our hero, so close that he only sees it via the corner of his eye. He activates his blink skill last minute and does some bolting of his own. Flame's jaw literally drops from the shock. She stares at where she had aimed her spell, but all she can see is a black patch. Her staff trembles in her hand as she tries to understand how he did it, how he managed to avoid a second-class spell in such a small distance. While she's still in shock, our boy had successfully blinked into the bushes a few ways from her location. It's his turn to hide and spy on his opponent, but he mutters under his breath, asking if she's trying to kill him or something. The light bullet she had used out of nowhere really took our hero by surprise. Now, he's just grateful that the level of his mana leakage syndrome increased, else he would have been in big trouble. At this point, our hero's blink skill lies at class 1, with a maximum distance of 12 meters, 2 more chances to be used, and a cooldown time of 3 seconds. After looking through his stats, he realizes that he can take on Flame to some point, using his remaining 2 blinks alongside his environment, but he concludes that avoiding her would be the best choice. With this, he activates his blink twice and goes 24 meters ahead of her. After sticking his landing, he concludes that he'll be fine since she's so far away from him. Our hero takes a good look around though. He then admits that his present goal is to come in 5th place, so there's no reason for him to risk anything. There's a reason he wants to make 5th place, and that's for the etheric roots. These are roots capable of increasing the health and strength of the user by a certain amount. He concludes that the first 4 spots are going to be taken by the main characters anyway, and in this state, all they need is 3 more point sticks. Our boy simply bows his head as he makes his way forward. Upon lifting it, he sees a familiar face. He stops a few ways from it, only for the rascal to call out our boy as Beak UCL from S-Class. He wears such an annoying grin, but as usual, our MC keeps his cool. UCL recognizes the rascal to be Raiden, a guy who has been famous around school recently. His annoying grin stays as our boy realizes that Raiden is a member of Uslek's clique, and Uslek is a pushover from Jeremy's clique. So, this rascal is practically a clique member of a clique member. In other words, he's a nobody. Our boy looks down at the rascal's hand and discovers that this nobody just so happens to have 3-point sticks. This makes him admit that he has collected a lot of sticks for a pushover of a pushover. Someone on Raiden's team mentions how he heard about UCL being a failed student who cheated to get into the S-Class. The rascal intertwines his arms as the annoying grin returns. He then declares that Stella Academy has surely fallen because they gave our boy admission into the S-Class just for solving 3 weird questions. Our hero is practically bored of hearing the same lines repeated all the time, so he concludes that these bullies lack creativity. At this point, he hears his name again and meets Raiden at eye level. In turn, the rascal holds his staff over his shoulder and requests that our hero give up his point stick. UCL simply says that he doesn't want to, a deadpan expression gracing his features. The bully confirms if he's resisting, and smiles even wider as he asks if our hero thinks he can face them alone. At this point, the other 3 members of his team cluster to seem more threatening. The hoodlum goes on about whether or not our boy will use his amazing middle-high class staff, and taunts him by reminding him that he can't even use magic, much less the staff. Our hero just grips his stick as he mulls over his next line of action. With a first-class blink, it'll be difficult to face Raiden, who's from a famous family by the way. Our boy then welcomes the possibility of winning if he had 3 blinks. He accepts the variables at his disposal. First is the point stick in his possession, and the second is the fact that they're in a dungeon. The bully stretches his staff as he continues to threaten our MC, so he just stretches the point stick in return, offering to give it to the rascal without opposition. Of course, our boy gets laughed at, but he also has a trick up his sleeve, so a smile creeps onto his lips soon enough. He instantly uses his blink and appears right under Raiden's nose, catching the rascal by surprise. He stares down, but it's too late. With a smile on his face, our hero attacks the rascal with his point stick, and while he tries to block its effects, he steals one of his point sticks. The after effects leave the hoodlum incapacitated for a few seconds, and he curses our boy, calling him a damned commoner bastard. He struggles until he finally regains his footing and wastes no time cussing out our hero once again. He even screams as he promises to catch him, only for him to notice that UCL isn't anywhere close by. The sound of our hero's voice gets Raiden to turn around with immediacy. He then overhears him complain about how dangerous the stunt he just pulled was. After this, our hero flashes his opponent a wide smile, thanking him for his point stick. All the bully can do is curse and scream as he commands our MC to give it back. In turn, he simply says that he doesn't want to. With a smug look on his face, our boy keeps flashing the sticks for his opponent to see. He then thinks about how efficient the sticks are. He had learned this coincidentally while other players were playing the game. He had discovered that these point sticks are actually bug items and that they qualify as magic tools because of the amount of strength they possess. You see, these sticks were made with unnaturally high durability so that they won't get destroyed by the magic of students. Although it's more helpful for other mages to use magic, for our hero who fights physically, a weapon with a strong attack power can be very effective. For the millionth time, Raiden curses our hero, adding how perplexed he is because he has the audacity to swipe his point sticks. He then yells at the rest of his clique for standing around and sends them to attack Yusial. At this moment, the entire dome starts to tremble like it did in the beginning of the practical training, leaving the bully no choice but to curse his bad luck. Amidst the trembling, he still yells at his team to load up their magic and adds that they shouldn't let our hero get away. Fortunately, our boy is sneaky enough to slither away and only gets noticed after putting a reasonable distance between himself and his pursuers. One of them alerts the others, so they all line up and fire water elemental attacks at him. He glances behind and notices 2 attacks rushing towards him. This makes him admit that his opponents are better than expected. Not good enough to catch him though. At that moment, he activates Blink and evades both attacks simultaneously. Raiden yells as he asks where our hero went, but his teammate can only complain about how fast he's moving. Our hero keeps blinking from place to place, seeing as he has more experience in player versus player, and also has the advantage of using terrain features as he pleases. The bully's eyes dart from side to side as he declares that all they have to do is hit the hero once. His friend then points out that the dungeon is trembling, but Raiden shouts at him to calm down because he believes our boy is nearby. He instructs his friends to wait until the terrain stops trembling, and to attack our MC together if they see him. He then warns them to be careful about the magic rebound in case their magic fails. Once again, the hero appears beneath Raiden's nose, only to smack him silly using the point stick. The rest of his team lament behind him while he groans in pain. Unfortunately, our boy's disturbance messes up his opposition's magic and a magic rebound ensues. The rascal is the first to curse as his staff emanates cackles of blue lightning. Soon enough, the lightning increases and falls down on him and his team from multiple locations. All they can do is lift their hands to shield themselves. Meanwhile, our hero successfully darts out of harm's way and declares that it's over. After Raiden and his clique groan and complain, our hero announces that he'll be taking another point stick. He then flashes them for his opponents to see. To make things worse, he jokes about giving one of them to his girlfriend, should he ever have one. Our boy just keeps smiling as the bully yells at him to give the point sticks back. He's considerate enough to leave the last one with the rascal and then bids him goodbye. Before Raiden can complain, our hero blinks himself out of there, leaving his opponent to scream curses into thin air. All this while, a mystery girl has been watching everything unfold. On the other hand, our hero chuckles and celebrates the fact that he struck the jackpot. He reminds himself that if he had fought normally he would have been robbed. But since this is a dungeon, things are different. As he struts, he begins to feel weird, almost as if something is coming at him from somewhere. And of course, a quick glance behind him reveals a large fireball approaching him at full speed. Upon noticing the magnitude of danger that he is in, our hero grits his teeth. He begins to cuss loudly as the heat increases, but in no time at all, the fireball makes impact, licking dry everything in its path. It is almost like a comic god would use to punish puny humans. However, Yusial does not get punished. Instead, he activates his blink skill at the dying minute and darts out of harm's way once again. He admits that he came really close to death and can still feel the heat from 12 meters away. Gripping his 3-point sticks, he stares at the aftermath of the fireball and announces to no one that it was almost trouble. The once vibrant vines are nothing but char at the moment and our hero has a sense of who to thank. As though summoned, Princess Bion's silhouette forges its way out of the smoke until she comes face to face with Yusial. She then yells at him, referring to him as a commoner. In turn, our hero grants her audience. She then continues yelling at him for leaving 1-point stick with the riffraffs from earlier, revealing that she is indeed our mystery girl. Her brows furrow even deeper as she puts him on the spot and her staff stays ready to attack if he does anything stupid. He does not. Our hero just looks her over and wonders why she is in front of him. They stay staring at each other for a few seconds before our boy declares that there must be a misunderstanding. He adds that he did want to take the last point stick, but couldn't do it. Our boy then follows up by questioning Bion about how it is her business whose point stick he leaves or takes. This immediately shuts her up and the silence becomes deafening. It is as if our hero uses this moment to realize what's going on, because soon enough, he gets an epiphany. He goes on to point a finger at the princess, accusing her of lying in wait for him to collect all the point sticks, just so she can collect them all from him. He even reminds her of how he taught her before and asks how she could do such a thing to him. All this while, the princess stays quiet and stares at him like he is a 4-year-old struggling to make a full sentence. In a response devoid of remorse, she only claims to be royal blood, adding that if our boy is aware of her scheme, he should come at her. This startles Yusial a bit, but he keeps his composure. Meanwhile, the princess proceeds to challenge him outright, claiming that taking objects from a commoner is undignified of a royal. She then promises to defeat him and collect the point sticks fairly. Our hero is perplexed by her little speech, so he tells her that there is nothing dignified about robbing a weakling. The last word really gets to Bion, so she reiterates how she saw our boy joking around with the riffraffs from earlier. All our hero can do is stare at her as she makes her case. She proceeds to accuse him of not even facing his opponents with any real magic. You see, during the training, the princess walked around almost aimlessly, thinking to herself that she has to hurriedly find a point stick if she does not want to get into any trouble with her mother. At that moment, her attention got drawn by some voices in the distance. She looked in the direction of the voices and saw some riffraffs. They were yelling that Yusial was getting away and cussing him out as they asked where he was going. Meanwhile, she stayed hidden behind a vine close by. From there, she realized who was being chased by seeing nothing but a silhouette speeding through space-time. Of course, it was our hero being chased by Raiden's crew. Just then, she stared at her staff, wondering if she should attack. She soon realized that taking on 6 people would prove difficult even for an S-class student. In turn, she settled for lying in wait until all of their stamina dwindled and then collecting all the point sticks in one fell swoop. Unfortunately, she witnessed a surprising feat from Yusial, him beating the crap out of Raiden using only a point stick. She was somewhere between annoyed and impressed as she watched the commoner use nothing but his blink skill and a point stick to overpower 4 opponents at a go. Still hidden, she admitted that the opponents are much weaker than her, but they still grew up as elites in different families of mages. This made her conclude that if our boy is good enough to joke around with those riffraffs, then she must burn him down with her full power. This brings us back to the present, and use her full power, she did. Princess Bion begins to launch a myriad of fireballs towards our dainty hero, consuming everything in her path in the reddish yellow of her flames. Our boy seems overwhelmed at the moment, but he holds fast his point sticks and blinks himself to safety in a heartbeat. Well, that's what he thought. Unfortunately, 12 meters ahead, Bion also sends another myriad of fire attacks. He catches a glimpse of it through a side glance and caution falls upon him. The fireball seems to grow bigger with every passing second, so our boy has to activate a double blink to dodge. He almost falls on his ass but crouches down to stick the landing. This frustrates the warrior princess and she stares at our MC like he is nothing but inferior prey, a single meal for a lioness, if you may. Anyway, Yusial glances in her direction, standing to his feet and panting. He admits that he expected nothing less from Bion, and that the last attack was really dangerous. Luckily, our hero trained his intuition in advance. While the princess awaits her next chance to attack him, our boy realizes that using 2 blinks just to dodge will take its toll on him. This makes him brainstorm for some other way to survive. The princess then asks if he is not going to take out his staff, leaving our hero perplexed enough to ask what she is talking about. He proceeds to remind her that she took his staff to help him remodel it. She is not fazed by his point. Instead, she claims that he must have the basic staff that was given to him when he got into the academy. Yusial's eyes shoot open as he admits that he forgot about that. You see, he was given the staff upon entry into Stella Academy, but he put it away immediately. This was because he never planned to use it in the first place. The princess does not believe him, and after some seconds, she proclaims that he is up to his jokes again. Her eyes burn with anger as she glares daggers in our hero's direction. He literally stands to take the heat while Bion thinks to herself about how desperate she is, hating every moment that she thinks our boy is joking. She finally announces that she does not know how our hero behaves towards other losers, and adds that it will do him well to properly go all out against her. At this point, the flames surrounding the princess seem to burn brighter than ever, making our hero break into a cold sweat. He does not know how to explain that he was always being serious, and that he can't use magic at all. However, the princess does not care about what he has to say. Rather, she threatens that if he does not take her seriously, she'll really kill him. Her words are escorted by an even greater flame which towers over our hero. As both opponents face each other, Bion raises her staff, keeping in mind that she'll definitely crush our hero today. Once again, she sends multiple fireballs his way and our boy is mortified as they approach. One of them grazes his uniform, leaving only a hair's breadth for him to escape. He uses blink at the last minute and slides as he makes his way to safety. Unfortunately, the princess is relentless. All of our boy's senses warn him of the impending danger, and a look in the opposite direction reveals a mountain of flames. Our hero seems like a miniature soldier before this fire, so he curses under his breath, admitting that even if he manages to dodge it with blink, the attack scope is much too broad. He stops staring up at the inferno as he wonders what he should do. At this point, something draws his attention, a sound in the distance, so he turns around to scope it out. He realizes that some vines have been moving and have formed some sort of shade. As the flames draw closer, our boy's panic increases. He then welcomes the idea of hiding in the shade, and activates his blink skill to match his thoughts. Just as the flames pour down on his location, our hero darts into the covering of vines nearby. Another round of flame magic comes pouring down, leaving our hero no choice but to go even deeper. He stares at the aftermath of the princess's spell with caution like no other, peeking to see what her next move will be. While still on high alert, he admits that he got lucky with the last attack. This time, our hero is scared that it may be too difficult. Princess Bion mounts her staff on the ground beside her, standing amidst the flames as though it's room temperature. Meanwhile, our boy thinks to himself that the flames surrounding the princess will explode the moment he comes close to her. He knows this because of all the losses he has gathered during player versus player matches against fire class mages. He then admits that Bion is much stronger than anyone thinks. While the princess lies in wait, our boy confesses that he would have been done for within a minute if this were flat land. Just then, she catches a glimpse of our hero and instantly readies her staff to attack him, as she sends more fireballs in his direction. Our boy realizes that it wouldn't even be a fair fight in the first place. About 10 fireballs come face to face with him, but this time, he does not flinch. He clenches his point sticks as he births a plan to turn things around, asking the princess if she thinks he'll just stand there and do nothing. As usual, he blinks away from the flames at the last minute, leaving a massive explosion in his wake. He then tears through a narrow opening with flames on every side and more fireballs coming at him like homing missiles. At this point, his sixth sense activates and he begins to exude a bright blue essence. Even the approaching flames look blue in his eyes as they seem to slow down. This makes it easier for him to see them. He stops mid-step and uses his point sticks to cancel out the flames. For the first time, the princess is so surprised that her jaw drops. She exclaims that there is no way what she is seeing is possible. She refuses to believe that our hero is using a weapon to deflect her magic, and just watches in awe as he deflects one attack after the other. Meanwhile, Yusial is in the zone, but only he knows that his senses are fading as more time passes. With every swing of his arm, with every application of his sixth sense, he can tell that this feeling of facing a mage and moving his body is much too realistic compared to just clicking a keyboard and moving a mouse around. As the embers leak out from every side, our hero confesses how vivid it all is, gritting his teeth as he adds that he can feel the flow of mana surging through his body, so much so that he can grasp it with his hands. It is a sixth sense that feels as familiar as hearing or sight. The princess is left wondering how our hero is doing it, seeing as a location full of trees is supposed to be more advantageous to someone with the fire attribute. She bites her lip angrily, deciding to send even stronger magic to our MC. She grips her staff tighter than ever, lifting it as she summons a mighty inferno. Meanwhile, our boy is still fighting off the former fireballs she had launched at him. Amidst the ruckus, he realizes that he can't defend forever, and that he needs to use these point sticks to destroy the princess's shield somehow. The fireballs burn out during the time it takes Bion to summon her mighty inferno, and our boy notices this instantly, seeing as it is the only window he may ever get. He begins to run towards the princess. Just as she is about to release her spell, our boy activates his blink skill and appears mere inches away from her. The princess stares down at him in surprise and grits her teeth angrily soon enough. She then activates a lighter crash spell, forging a red magic circle beneath herself and Yusial, and pointing her staff towards him in hostility. Our boy's expression remains unfazed, seeing as he recognizes this spell. Apparently, it is magic used by fire-class bishops that engage in close combat, and this magic causes a knockback explosion for those within a 2-meter radius of it. A smirk revisits our hero's lips at this point because this is not his first rodeo with lighter crash spells. He simply jumps out of the 2-meter radius, leaving the princess perplexed to say the least. She opens her mouth to complain, but our hero wastes no time blinking his way back into her radius. He then uses the surprise launch to attack her shield with everything in him. As the barrier begins to break down, the princess just can't accept her fate. Unfortunately, it is not up to her. Our boy then delivers the finishing blow to her shield and it shatters accordingly, leaving the princess no choice but to deactivate any of her ongoing spells. Bion drops to her knees from the after effects, groaning upon impact. Our boy then walks up to her, still wielding all 3-point sticks. He drops to his knees just to be on eye level with her. He then smiles and announces that he won. This makes the princess blush with embarrassment, but she is mad at the same time. Anyway, our hero gets back on his feet, only for the princess to ask about his true identity. He plays it cool as he claims that he is nothing other than a normal student. At this point, he diverts his attention to someone behind him, yelling that she can stop hiding and come out now. True to his words, a silhouette behind a nearby tree finally reveals herself to be Flame, the female lead. Having been caught, the female lead takes gentle steps towards the other two. Upon reaching earshot, she announces that she was not hiding, and proceeds to ask our hero how he knew she was there. He just lets out a nervous laugh, lying that he just had a feeling. In truth, it was a result of the mana revelation delay physique's sixth sense. The girl's features soften upon hearing his reason, but she asks how he broke Bion's shield with only a training tool like the point stick. Our boy becomes cautious of her at that moment, seeing as she follows up by asking if the feat he performed was also a feeling. This makes him realize that this kind of bug, one allowing strengthened devices to be used as weapons, wasn't in the original novel. He then concludes that he can't just tell Flame the truth. Instead, he smiles awkwardly, pointing at the sticks as he claims that they're really sturdy. She does not buy a word of his story, so she clapbacks that training devices have their limits. She then asks if our hero thought he could use the point sticks to break a magic shield. She follows up with yet another question, inquiring why our boy thinks normal knights disappeared from this world. Her questions strike a chord in Yusial, making him admit to himself that the female lead is right. Worse off, he does not know how to respond to any of her questions. Flame goes on about always thinking he was weird, but now all she is interested in is knowing who our hero really is. Princess Bion also stares quietly from behind, awaiting our boy's answer. Drops of sweat make their way down his face as he realizes that he is in a tough spot. The bad part is that it hasn't even been a month since he arrived in the game. The situation makes him mull over the option of revealing his identity, but he quickly swipes this aside because of how dangerous it is that Flame has no reason to keep him alive. He finally speaks up, reiterating that he must seem suspicious to the female lead but isn't actually a bad person to her. She does not understand what he meant by that, so she asks him about it. In turn, our hero's nervous smile returns and he explains that if anything, he wants to help her. This does not clear up her suspicions, but just as she is about to ask our boy who he is for the second time, he takes it as his cue to make an exit. He lies that he would like to tell her more but does not have the time. In that vein, he waves the girls goodbye and they watch him leave. Bion's eyes are still full of malice, so as our boy celebrates internally about his escape, she throws all 3 of her point sticks at him, causing him a great deal of pain. She is surprised that they actually hit him and our hero turns around, trying to soothe his pain by rubbing the spots she hit. He then laments that she should have used her words if she had any complaints. In turn, she admits that she thought he would catch them, and asks how he can't catch point sticks but can dodge other types of traps and magic. Our hero is still nursing his head as he thinks about the Mana Revelation delay physique having a limit. He says nothing about it to the girls, and only laments about how much his head hurts. You see, how long our hero can sustain the sixth sense solely depends on his mind power, and since his mind power has bottomed out, his migraines are now very severe. Yusial proceeds to question Bion about why she threw the sticks at him. She only claims that she lost their tiff and adds that they're now his. Our hero wonders if it is the princess's pride talking and fears that his ranking will rise too much if he accepts the point sticks. Worse off, the other prizes are worthless to him. After thinking it through, our hero squats and picks up just 1 point stick. He then flashes Bion a smile as he tells her that he is fine with the one, and adds that she can keep the others. With this, he turns to leave and waves them goodbye for the second time. He is so moved by how cool he is, seeing as he is now a man who shows kindness to the opponent he beat. Our boy even blushes a bit as he heads out with this new sense of self. Meanwhile, both ladies are unimpressed. Flame asks the princess if Yusial is an idiot and she thinks he could be. The princess just blames his lack of common sense on the fact that he is a commoner. She then stares into the abyss, still worried about our boy's identity. Meanwhile, a magic device placed in a boardroom reveals the location of every student taking part in the practical training, representing them with nothing but red dots on a screen. From time to time, each student takes center stage as they battle whichever opponent comes their way. In the boardroom, Professor Hanwell looks back, half disgusted, as his superior declares that the S-class students are incredible this year. This superior is none other than Elder Telix of the Magic Council of Elders. He even admits that the training was worth coming to watch. Beside him stands Jarina Aeon of the Blue Mage Tower Board of Directors, and she also concurs that it was fun, adding that she was more impressive when she was younger though. Mr. Hanwell can only stay quiet in the midst of so many superiors, seeing as so many big shots have come just to watch the new students in a practical exercise. His eyebrows stay furrowed as he realizes that they have to come if they want to recruit new talent, and concludes that most of the other professors are also watching the exercise. His attention is drawn to the screen when 2 high-ranking students come face to face. The professor curses under his breath, seeing as these students are Ma Yuxiang and He Wenryang respectively. Both boys then prepare their staves as soon as they lock eyes, but Wenryang is the first to attack. He sends a streak of blue lightning after his opponent, only for Yuxiang to dodge it with some magic of his own. The genius practically phases out of harm's way, but it is nothing like our hero's blink skill. It is more like a trio of spells that allow him jump from one air pocket to another. Jarina calls it a 3rd rank power jump activated in succession, and Elder Telix is impressed that the genius can do that at the age of 17. As usual, the professor stays quiet, thinking to himself about how a normal mage would generally have to be in their mid to late 20s to be able to master 3rd rank magic, but here Yuxiang is, using it freely at 17. As they continue to watch the altercation, another member of the Magic Council of Elders expresses his disbelief, and points out to everyone that both boys have 3 elements each. Yuxiang controls earth, lightning, and fire magic, while Wenryang possesses wind, water, and fire magic as well. The professor watches them go, and realizes that most mages have only 1 element. Most of them only gain 2 after vigorous training, so by all ramifications, 3 elements and above is considered to be talent. Meanwhile, the genius, using fire as his major element, continues to face off Wenryang, who uses water as his, and these 2 have possessed their talents from birth. For the first time, Mr. Hanwell's expression switches from stoicism to panic as he hears a loud cawing sound. At this point, he and all the other visitors witness a large winged beast with flaming blue eyes and talons the size of 2 children as it lands in the middle of Yuxiang's battle. The professor refers to it as a hidden boss, and said beast lets out a loud cry as it begins to descend. Both students watch with caution as the bird continues to fall, and soon enough, it thumps against the ground in defeat. Out of the blue, Azel asks if both boys were in the middle of a fight, and they soon realize that she's standing on top of the hidden boss. The fake heroine quickly apologizes for the interruption, and it becomes clear to Professor Hanwall that she took down the beast. You see, a hidden boss is a type of hidden event that only appears when a mage has abilities to a certain amount. Not only are they hard to find, but it is also difficult to defeat them. Azel makes her way down from the corpse of the hidden boss, leaving the professor in awe of the fact that she took it down by herself. One of the elders present refers to her as the eldest daughter of the traitor Grand Duke Malf, and Elder Telix adds that it is unfortunate that her talent will not bloom like it is supposed to because of her father. His attention is drawn to the screen soon enough, and he witnesses our hero going up against the Adalbert princess in a battle of flames. He and the other elders watch with rapt attention, but his hand makes its way to his chin as he wonders who the princess is up against, stating that he has never seen the person before. At that moment, our boy uses his signature spell and the elder's eyes open in shock. He is left wondering if he just witnessed a blink spell. It turns out that multiple mages and countless scholars have been trying to control the blink skill for hundreds of years, but everyone failed, either dying or becoming crippled from the after effects. Because of this, scholars ended up giving up. It is established to be an impossible spell to control, so you can understand Elder Telix's shock as he witnesses a student who can control blink effortlessly as though it is in his hands and feet. The more our hero combats Bion's attacks with his point sticks, the more the elders ask who he is. Professor Hanwall has no choice but to introduce him, mentioning that our boy's name is Bikusial. The elder turns to listen to him, so he goes on about how our boy is a unique student whose specialty is using the blink skill. The other scouts begin to talk amongst themselves after hearing this, adding that this is a completely different league from Yuxiang, Wenryang, and even Azel's overwhelming power. On the other hand, Elder Telix asks the professor why our hero does not use any other type of magic, and instead just jokes around. He then reiterates that our boy could have ended his battle long ago, if only he used magic. This leaves the elder quite confused. Suddenly, a voice from behind announces that our hero is actually fighting with all seriousness. They turn around and witness as a cloaked young man makes his way into the boardroom at this point. The other elders then refer to him as Eltman Eltwin, and the young man smiles softly towards them. He continues to defend our boy, telling everyone gathered that he has been fighting seriously from the start, and asks if it does not seem that way to all of them. A disappointed smile comes to his lips as he declares that their ignorance is interesting. He then goes on about our hero's fighting style, reminding him of the chivalry that once existed in the old generations. His words are taken literally, and even Elder Telix inquires whether he is referring to the same chivalry that disappeared alongside the old weapons. Mr. Hanwall keeps his eyes peeled on the battle between bishop students, admitting to himself that he also sees chivalry. By chivalry, the elders mean the mentality of a knight to fight with a sword even in a world where magic prevails. It is a testament to the existence of heroes who have existed since long ago to protect the world against evil. It was said that these heroes always faced evil with a single sword. The elder sinks into his subconscious as he refuses to believe that someone fights with a sword when magic already exists. He thinks it is realistically impossible, but before him, Yusial is battling his opponent using nothing but a point stick as a sword. He then stares at the young man who professed that our hero is chivalrous, wondering that if such a person of his caliber thinks that, then who is he to fight it? You see, Eltman Eltwin is actually the headmaster of Stella Academy, which is well known as the best magic academy in the world. He is also a 9th rank master mage and one of only 10 great sages in the continent. So, if such a person believes in our hero, no one else in the room can prove otherwise. Some time passes before the first dungeon tactical training finally ends. Later on, in the S-Class training exclusive training hall, some perplexed student attacks a mannequin with the wrath of the gods. It turns out that it was just Wenryang putting in some time to train. He pants heavily after his last attack, stares at his staff in regret as he curses the fact that he is almost out of mana. He then grips the staff, refusing to give up because he believes he is still far behind. You see, out of all the students that participated in the practical training, 39 of them were eliminated. Azel came in first place after defeating the mysterious winged beast, while Wenryang came in second. As for his opponent, Ma Yuxiang, that genius came in 6th place. He walks back to the dorms, feeling like he did not win at all. He keeps staring at the ground as he revisits memory lane, thinking RK himself that if Azel hadn't interrupted this match against the genius, he probably would have lost. This really gets his goat, so much so that he gnashes his teeth in anguish. Apparently, this has been the case since the first day these two met. He noticed that Yuxiang would half-ass every single thing but still managed to get above expert results somehow. Even in the last practical training, Wenryang had planned everything out, setting up magic circles all around and thoroughly calculating his opponent's movements. Still, the genius received all his attacks with ease. The boy is frozen in place as he wonders if he cannot defeat the genius no matter what he does, and asks him whether the wall of talent between him and his nemesis is this tall and thick. Wenryang can practically see Yuxiang smirking arrogantly, and it gets to him very much. Still staring at the ground, the boy shakes his feelings off, reminding himself that he does not have the time to be blaming himself and that he just needs to work harder. At this point, Bion and her staff make their way to the training ground, and she is surprised to see Wonryong letting out his wind magic as though he is fighting the greatest foe ever. She remembers him as the guy who's usually calm and wonders why he is full of spite today. She instantly rebukes herself, claiming that she shouldn't be the one saying such things. Afterwards, she summons a mighty inferno and attacks the mannequin in front of her like it hurt her loved ones. One attack does not satisfy her, so she gears up and fires another. This one is big enough to draw Wonryong's attention, so he glances at the princess, noticing that her staff is still glowing red from all the heat it exuded. Her anger refuses to be quenched as she remembers that she still came in third place after our hero yielded her point sticks. She recalls that her mother was quite satisfied, but peradventure Yusial had taken the sticks, she would have been punished like she was just another student. Her flames just keep burning brighter as our hero comes to mind. She hates the fact that he is a commoner who thinks that he is worth something. As she unleashes her next attack, Wonryong is almost blinded by the brightness, and afterwards, she breathes heavily in a bid to vent her frustration. As the dust settles, her fellow trainee is left dumbfounded, and quietly wonders if something happened to the princess too. He just stares at the still angry princess, confused as to whether it is just his imagination or her magic has actually gotten more accurate than earlier. Seeing as the princess's fire magic is extremely explosive, Wonryong had concluded that it is almost impossible to control it precisely. He still refuses to believe that Bion has improved so much in such a short amount of time, and is left wondering if it is just a coincidence. As for the princess, she quietly cusses as she thinks about our hero once again. She may hate to admit it, but his classes have been quite effective for her. Apparently, after switching to the pun quizzes, her magic has increased tremendously. This basically means her creativity has improved. She cannot see Yusial as anything other than a commoner, one with terrible grades and the worst personality under the sun. But she is certain about one thing: he is the only one who knows the method to supplement her weaknesses. The princess looks away, telling herself that it does not stop her from being upset. At that moment, she hears someone call out to her, and aptly twirls to see who it is. She soon realizes that it is her guard, Terran, so she asks her what the problem is. Wields a box in her hands and promptly stretches it out to her mistress. She then announces that the remodeling of the Terravan staff has been completed per her request. As a follow-up, the guard inquires whether or not to hand it over to our hero immediately and opens it up for the princess to take a look. In turn, Bion gives her the go-ahead, so the guard readies herself to leave. For some reason, her mistress grabs her shoulder and tells her to hold on. He then asks the princess what the problem is, only to get glared at in return. It is high noon in Stella Academy. It is either that or the sun is out to smite an enemy. Anyway, Princess Bion arrives at the second main tower that afternoon with the remodeled Terravan staff in hand. Apparently, she had collected it from me to deliver it personally, and is now at the main tower because she heard it was our hero's last known location. Normally, this tower houses the faculty's research facilities, and it gets her thinking that Yusial may be there to see a professor. A wave of realization washes over her and she blushes in embarrassment. She backs up as she asks herself why she came over, since she can just hand him the sword at the training hall. The new feeling is shame as she notices that giving him the staff at the facility makes it seem like a royal is following a commoner around. Shame turns into disgust, so she resolves to just return to her dorm. Unfortunately, she does not go unnoticed as a teacher calls out to Her Highness. Bion then pays her some attention and realizes that it is Miss Hammerl, her middle-aged teacher with purple long hair. Anyway, the princess admits that it has been a while, and almost refers to Miss Hammerl as a teacher when she is actually a professor. In turn, the professor quips that the princess has already gotten so old, but it still seems like just yesterday that she was teaching her magic at the castle. She then segues into asking what Her Highness is doing in the facility. Bion hesitates before commenting that she had some business to handle but is returning at the moment. The professor lets her know that it is better that way, seeing as the facility is a bit disorderly. Her statement piques the princess's interest, so she asks about it. Miss Hammerl wastes no time revealing that it is hectic because some magic officials have come due to a student named Beak Yusial. The mention of our hero's name strikes a chord that leaves the princess wide-eyed. Her Highness is now very interested in the matter, so she pays close attention as the professor reiterates how our hero fought battles without using a lick of magic, adding that Bion should know this since she fought with him. Her Highness averts her gaze to the ground shamefully, realizing that her former mentor watched her fail. She regrets showing something so unsightly to the teacher she respects the most. The professor notices this almost immediately, so she tells her student that she does not need to blame herself, adding that her opponent tried his best. This does not do anything for Her Highness. Instead, she asks if her mentor feels the same way even if Yusial did not use any magic. In turn, Miss Hammerl claims that it is because of our boy's creed. This is news to Bion, so the professor reiterates how the headmaster saw our hero fighting and proclaimed that he was doing so with a creed, adding that the headmaster mentioned our hero's efforts to revive chivalry, which was lost many generations ago. Her Highness almost loses her bearings as she raises her voice to repeat her mentor's last words about chivalry. She then admits that the theory makes sense, and soon enough, she slips into her subconscious, replaying how our boy had used his point sticks as a sword during their battle. She stares at the remodeled sword in her possession and wonders if chivalry is also the reason why our hero wanted it. A gulp of saliva ensues for the princess before she goes back to talking with her mentor. She reiterates not using magic in a magic academy will only attract penalties for our boy. Worse off, he'll end up receiving penalty points during magic practical training, amongst other things. Miss Hamrill intertwines her arms as she concurs with her highness, adding that our hero has decided to walk that path despite the consequences. She thinks it's incredible that Usial is still pushing himself after the great achievement that is Blink. Bayon, on the other hand, just quietly stares at her mentor as she adds that she thinks our hero's creed must be the real deal. Later on, the princess stops by an alleyway to sulk, thinking to herself that everyone would mock anyone who said they dreamed of chivalry, and wonders if our boy wants to be a knight in this generation, whether he is doing it as a joke or seeking it sincerely. Just as she starts to feel guilty about getting mad at our hero and telling him to stop joking around, he shows up. He wastes no time asking what the princess is doing in an alleyway, all while chewing on the ethelic root he got as his prize for 5th place. Bayon's cheeks stain red from embarrassment and she quickly clarifies that she's not there because of him. Confused, our hero also makes it clear that he never said she was. It becomes a stalemate as the princess stares daggers at our hero and he shoots her a dumbfounded look in return. She just gives up, looks away, and stretches his remodeled staff at him, yelling at him to take it. Our boy gets excited immediately and thanks the princess for it. His eyes cannot hide his intrigue as he pops the box open to reveal his staff. He discovers that it is a shapeless sword, but just swipes the thought aside seeing as the people of Adalbert have excellent craftsmanship. At this point, our hero bears no regret over helping the princess. Riding the wave of his excitement, he asks Bayon if he can keep the box, mostly because he thinks he can fetch a good price if he sells it. She just shuts her eyes and tells him to do as he pleases. In turn, our hero does a small dance to celebrate the free money coming his way. The princess isn't the least bit surprised by our boy's commoner behavior. A sort of sadness finds its way into her eyes soon enough, and she calls out Usiel's name. Our boy replies to her excitedly, only to get asked if he really isn't going to use other magic. The question takes him by surprise, so he stares the princess straight in the eyes, making her blush some more and hate every moment of it. She bites her lip in regret and immediately tells him not to bother. She then spins around, announcing that she'll be leaving. Still confused, all our hero can do is watch her go. After a few seconds, he also turns to leave, trying to decipher what she meant by other magic, especially because Professor Hanwell said something similar earlier. Our hero revisits the memory of his professor gripping his shoulder and claiming that he has chosen a difficult path. The man had told our boy that he understood his intentions, adding that he would respect his creed or some nonsense like that. Bottom line is that the entire thing confused our hero, but he accepts that what's good is good. For now, he grips his sword, knowing full well that as long as he has it, he'll be safe enough for the next episode. Up next, he decides to give it a proper look. The sunset stains a now empty training ground and our hero arrives there just in time to test his new sword without the prying eyes of the public. He wields it soon enough, asking himself if all he needs to do is channel his mana into the staff. Upon gripping it, a golden hue begins to surround the wand, and the more mana he pours into it, the more it transforms into a sword so sleek it would give gladiators a run for their money. The glint in our hero's eyes cannot be compared to anything. He is just really excited at how cool his sword turned out to be, seeing as it turned out much better than he expected. He lifts the blade towards the dimming sun and it still shines. His demeanor then drops once again as he thinks about Flame being the one who's supposed to wield the Terravan. You see, the female lead is quite special. Even though she is human, she can wield elf, angel, and even dwarf magic. As for the Terravan, it turns out that the staff cannot be used by just anyone because it continually absorbs the user's mana. But Flame has the ability to recover her mana using the energy of nature, and uses the Terravan as her lethal move in the game. On the other hand, our hero does not have any mana to begin with, seeing as it cannot accumulate in his body even if he continuously absorbs it. The mana just gets directed to the mana revelation delay physique. In simpler terms, the concentration of mana in our hero's breathing is used as the output of the staff. He becomes excited again, this time because he seeks to check his stat window. The blue notification bar pops up in accordance and reveals that our boy's strength has gone up by a small percent. His mana revelation has also become a level 2. Usial looks everything over and confirms that the ethelic roots he won from the practical training is the reason for the strength increase. A small smile graces his features as he acknowledges that he now has a weapon that he can use to directly increase his strength and other factors, rather than do it by using EXP. Up next, our MC resolves to try using the sword, so he fires it up, telling himself that he'll be busy from now on. Days pass, and the students gather for a mandatory class where the lecturer announces that they're going to learn actual magic. The students just line up a small ways from him and listen as he yells at them to spread out and hold their staves. This professor is none other than Virion, the magic defense lecturer. Mr. Virion does laps around the training ground as the kids practice their magic shields. A quick glance around makes him admit that there are quite a lot of talented students in his current group. He's even happier because he lined them up according to their ranks. At this point, something sticks out like a sore thumb and the lecturer shoots questioning looks in its direction. It's our hero, Beak Yusial, and the lecturer wonders if he's the infamous S-class that everyone is talking about. He only sees our boy as a commoner who managed to resonate with the middle-high class staff and got 5th place in the dungeon practical training. After concluding that he doesn't like Yusial, the lecturer approaches him and asks why he isn't doing anything. Our hero nervously picks his face as he explains that he doesn't need to learn basic magic because he's learning a different defensive technique. A forced smile comes to Mr. Virian's lips as he feigns interest in our hero's methods. In truth, he finds our boy to be arrogant and practically hates him for not, at least, learning the succession magic of Adalbert like Princess Bayonne. On second thought, the lecturer concludes that a commoner like our hero couldn't learn something like that. He heard that our boy can't use any magic other than blink, and for this reason, Mr. Virian puts him on the spot, asking him to show the other students an example of this incredible defensive technique that he's talking about. Our hero remains silent as the lecturer scans the room for a suitable opponent, and finally, the man chooses Morso from B class. In response, the brown-haired scrawny kid flashes our boy an arrogant smirk. You see, Professor Virian believes that connections are important for a magic defense lecturer like himself to stay at Stella Academy, and Morso Dordan, who's from the Scalvan Empire, will prove to be useful if the lecturer leaves a good impression on him. In turn, he asks our boy what he thinks about the duel whilst mulling over how good it'll be if Morso shows impressive magic against an S-class student. Yusial doesn't see any reason not to duel the boy, so the professor tells both contenders to step onto a platform. They obey almost immediately and stand face to face while the other students watch from down below. Some rascals in the crowd yell at Morso, telling him to kick our hero's butt, and another rascal announces that he should embarrass our boy publicly. A smile visits the noble's face as he assures his friends that he will. This little show of classlessness opens our boy's eyes to the fact that his opponent is part of Uslak and Raiden's crew. None of this dissuades him. In fact, he thinks it's good. It turns out that our hero is only taking the class because it's mandatory, and there was nothing to do since he can't use magic. A glance in Mr. Virian's direction reminds our boy that the lecturer has been notorious since the first year episode. Anyway, he flashes a soft smile and resolves to check the results of all his training up until this moment. As Morso wields his staff in preparation, the professor declares that the duel will be based on attack and defense turns, and adds that the contenders cannot use any magic outside of the two. The noble gets the first pick and his friends begin to talk among themselves. One confirms from the other if Morso will win, adding that he may be good at defense, but has also learned offensive Earth-class magic. In response, the other boy admits that it'll be difficult to defend against that. Jeremy just stays smiling as he eavesdrops on their conversation. At this point, Mr. Virian asks if both sides are ready, and then indicates the beginning of the duel. Morso instantly uses offensive Earth magic and his classmates recognize it to be second rank. Yet another classmate announces that it's the unspoken rule to only use first-rank magic during a basic magic practical, leaving him wondering whether Yusial will be okay. Meanwhile, our hero seems unfazed by his opponent's theatrics but stays vigilant nonetheless. The noble thinks of him as an arrogant S-class and then attacks him with the Dordan Stone Pierce technique. This sends a big rock encapsulated by the lime green essence of his magic towards our hero. Yusial watches as it covers the distance, grips his staff-turned sword, and cuts the rock into two. As the remnants disintegrate on either side of our boy, Professor Virian is left in shock. Jeremy stays as quiet as he's always been, but Morso twitches as he refuses to believe his eyes. The fact that his magic disappeared just doesn't sit right with him, but our hero stands there awaiting his opponent's next move. The same students who talked smack about him begin to analyze the situation. One of the girls proclaims that our boy cut his competitor's magic with his sword, and her friend wonders if such a thing should make magic disappear. The professor who had overheard them thinks to himself that it would make no sense for magic to just disappear from a slash, but it's exactly what happened. Apparently, all magic has a path of mana, and in a case where you accurately cut that path, the magic will be extinguished. It baffles the professor so much that he still asks himself if our hero did that. Afterwards, Yusial stares at his sword with hints of excitement, admitting that it works better than he thought. Although he can barely manage to cut through third-rank magic now, he feels like it was good that he practiced in the training hall for a few days without rest. With the vigor from his first defense, he now feels like he might actually win the match. Morse's features turn red in annoyance as he asks how a mere commoner would have the audacity to cut his magic. As he continues to grit his teeth, the professor is worried on the sidelines because it'll also be annoying for him if the noble loses. For this reason, he speaks up, telling our hero that his defense is good, and adding that there's a limit to just hitting aside everything one by one. He gives an instance using an abundant attack and this strikes a chord in Morso, bringing a smile of mischief to his lips. Our hero easily deduces that the professor just gave his opponent a tip, and it really annoys him. In turn, he stares down the Dordan as he prepares multiple attacks simultaneously. The mischievous smile has come to stay and the noble raises his staff in retaliation. The cackles from his attack seem to be increasing, making the bystanding students worry that he's doing too much. Some even fear that he'll hurt our hero at this rate, and wonder why the professor isn't stopping the duel. After concluding that his spell will end things, the rascal finally unleashes the Ballier Stone Pierce, sending multiple magic-infused rocks towards our hero at full speed. Ucial's eyes pop open as he just stands there, wondering what to do. The rocks cover the distance soon enough, but our boy is fast enough to count a total of 11 rocks. He then deduces that there's only one method left if he can't blink or slice them, and that is to block them all. In the presence of everyone, our hero begins to rotate his wand in a way that none of the rocks make it past its axis. Morso almost explodes from the ensuing anger of seeing his spell being dismantled like that. He never expected his strongest one to be blocked so easily. Even Professor Varian grits his teeth in annoyance, cursing in his mind as he asks what Morso is doing. The poor boy has no idea that things will be difficult for the lecturer if he ends up losing. As for our hero, he whispers that he just tried copying something that he saw in another game, and he's just as surprised as everyone else that it worked. Apparently, he had used a technique called panning. Terabin, his staff, has the disadvantage of requiring several times more mind power than others to maintain its form, so after using it, your stamina is guaranteed to fall rapidly. It becomes obvious that things would have been difficult in an actual fight, seeing as Terabin's defensive power is weaker when blocking multiple attacks than it is when blocking one. He's relieved that it's just a duel, and while he awaits the perfect time to strike, more murmurs emanate from the onlookers. Some of them proclaim that they've never seen the technique our hero used and they wonder if it's a variation of Magic Shield. Others ask if there was a technique like that in Magic Defense class, and the rest conclude that Morso is going to lose if things continue like this. The noble overhears this and it fans the flames of his anger anew. He curses under his breath as he asks himself how a mere commoner would embarrass him like this. He pulls from this rage and activates his staff, leaving the students to point out that his turn to attack has passed. Meanwhile, the professor smiles and pretends as though he doesn't know this. All he wants is for Morso to keep attacking. In turn, the noble screams at our hero as he tells him to prepare himself. He then adds that he won't let him go this time. At this point, a voice calls for the lecturer and the man diverts his attention to the direction of the voice. It turns out to be Jeremy, so the professor asks him what the problem is. The prince just smiles softly and then asks why Mr. Varian isn't giving Ucial his attack turn. This makes him nervous, so he begins to stutter his reply. Right on cue, he realizes the dirty stares he's now getting from the other students as they complain about the duel. Some of them point out that the duel is no longer a first-year basic one, while others proclaim that if it goes on, our hero might end up getting seriously hurt. The cherry on this blame cake is when one of the students proclaims that Mr. Varian isn't suitable to be a teacher. It then dawns on the man that he was too focused on the duel to notice the reactions of the other students. Still face to face with Jeremy, the boy puts his teacher on the spot, making him break into a cold sweat. Meanwhile, Morso tries to pull a fast one on our hero by activating his magic shield to block his attacks. Unfortunately, he's much too slow. Our boy successfully maneuvers through his opponent's defense and points his sword at the noble's neck. With this, Ucial gets declared the winner and his fellow contender remains frozen from the shock. Jeremy smiles soft as usual, acknowledging that our boy still won the duel in the end, and admitting that he's more impressive than he thought. His soft smile then becomes one of mischief. Later on, the grunts of a student rise into the air as he gets the beating of his life. Vera Jane just watches as the poor student struggles to breathe and begs for forgiveness. This is none other than Morso, and he lays in a mixture of his own blood and spit after Jeremy is done roughing him up. With a remorseless look on his face, he wipes his hands and calls out to Vera Jane. She instantly responds and the prince tells her that his friend seems to be pretty hurt. He then asks her in the softest of tones to take a look at him, adding that he'll be sad if anything goes wrong. She quips that she understands and Jeremy thanks her. Vera Jane just watches the prince as he leaves and realizes that he referred to Morso as his friend and not his loyal subject. You see, in the Scalvan Empire, the heir to the throne is decided solely by magic ability, and Prince Jeremy Scalvan became the crown prince after defeating his brothers at the young age of 12. The fact that he did not refer to Morso as his loyal subject means that the Dordan family has automatically been thrown out of the political world. Vera Jane realizes that it's not just Morso, but our boy. Seeing as he has caught the eye of the prince, she fears that our hero will no longer be able to have a comfortable school life. The next day, the wonderful Stella Academy houses a bunch of students and they all make their ways to their various classes. Our hero, on the other hand, makes his way to the lab for an alchemy class. There, some of his mates gossip about him and how he chose to follow the oath of chivalry. They mock him for his choices and proclaim that he's doing it because he's desperate for attention. One of them then points out how our boy won his battle against Morso of the Dordan family, and his friend reiterates how the Dordans are influential in the Scalvan Empire. At this point, Flame can't take it anymore. She's utterly irritated because she hears about Ucial everywhere she goes. The girl slams her hands against her desk, deceiving herself that she doesn't want attention. Instead, she tells herself that she just doesn't like our hero getting so much of it. Just then, the alchemy lecturer announces that the class should focus. She's none other than Professor Mage, and she breaks into a small speech about how alchemy requires accurate measurement and timing, as well as perfect temperature control. The experiment for the day involves practicing the Tire and Fatigue Recovery Potion, one of the professor's original concoctions. She once again asks them to focus, but Flame seems worried. Apparently, she finds the practical annoying because everything will go wrong if she messes one thing up. Still wielding a tube of purple liquid, she admits to herself that she tries to avoid alchemy because it's particular and difficult. She stares slyly at the professor as she yells at someone called Alicia, telling her that what she's doing is too dangerous. It turns out that Alicia is just another unfortunate student, and the professor spares no expense correcting her. In turn, the student bows her head and apologizes. Flame, who has been watching the whole thing ensue, acknowledges that Professor Mason will one day blacken and go out of control. For her to prevent this canon event, she will have to keep taking the alchemy class. On the other hand, the girl remembers that she needs more ingredients, but before she can head up to get them, she overhears someone laughing like a maniac in the corner. A quick glance in the direction of the laughter reveals Yusial wielding a tube of liquid and smiling into a concoction as he declares that he has gotten it right. Flame becomes uneasy as she watches our boy work. She had thought that he took the class to get close to Azel, but now she thinks that he might just be sick in the head. She simply exhales in a bid to brush aside what she just witnessed, and resolves to go get her ingredients. Later on, she rounds up making 2 vials of the recovery potion and wipes the sweat off her forehead as she acknowledges that she finally got it. She then gives kudos to the fact that her host body's academic achievement is high and attributes the swift creation of the potion to it. Soon enough, she glances in Azel's direction, wondering what the girl is doing. She sees her going about the experiment at her own pace and mumbling the instructions to herself. This makes Flame conclude that the girl seems decently good at it. Some seconds pass before it hits her that in the original novel, Azel coincidentally comes across Maila's magic engineering books. She even recalls that the girl created a high-rank compatible product to the Tire and Fatigue Recovery Potion in this very class. This leaves her wondering why Azel is making the potion the normal way this time. Her hand stays on her chin as she glances in our hero's direction once again. She then questions how he knew to change the experiment ingredients as he wished. Flame can overhear our boy conversing with Professor Mason and telling her that the way he made the potion is much more effective. The professor asks if she requested for a different result, and points out that it's different from the Tire and Fatigue Recovery Potion that she ordered him to make. These words strike a chord in the heroine, and she welcomes the possibility that our hero made the quality potion that Azel was supposed to make in the original story. The heroine senses that something is strange and stays on the premise that our hero made the potion Azel was supposed to. As she eavesdrops on his conversation with the professor, she overhears her scolding our boy for not listening to her, and for having a bad attitude. She massages her forehead to ease the annoyance and proclaims that this is why commoners just don't make the cut. Flame recognizes this conversation, and originally it was supposed to be the professor telling Azel that her stubbornness is why her family fell. She recalls this because those words became traumatic to Azel, who had lost her family, and they bothered her until she finished making the potion. The heroine wonders if our boy also knows the real story, and she deduces that it could be the reason why he got on the professor's bad side, to help protect Azel from the trauma. At this point, Flame remembers that Professor Mason has quite the influence within Stella, and that if anyone gets on her bad side, they will face the after effects on their grades in other classes. This only makes her question Yusial's identity, and it leaves her wondering why he would go so far for the fake heroine. Suddenly, Professor Mason bursts out in anger, yelling as she asks our hero to watch his tone. She even screams that he should bring his parents to school immediately. Our hero falls quiet after this, seeing as he had forgotten about his situation. He had been so focused on the alchemy that he didn't recall this part of the game's development. He then whispers that he doesn't have parents. This slightly stuns her, but she keeps screaming at our boy until her words trail off. Seeing as he has already gotten on her bad side, Yusial concludes that there's nothing he can do. At this point, he throws caution to the wind and tunes out the professor. He then makes a mental note to try making a kimchi potion and cola potion the next day. After a few weeks, the alchemy professor is still on our boy's case, yelling out his name in front of the other students and reminding him that she has warned him not to use any other ingredients that she hasn't taught him to. In response, our hero calmly tells her that he's creating better results by slightly altering her compositions. This infuriates the teacher even more, and while she's taking out her frustrations on Yusial, he activates his bulbul glasses and pulls up all the information he has on her. Apparently, her dark demon erosion progress is at 21%, and she has been confirmed to be a dark demon contractor, the level 8 boss, and a carrier of the dark demonization. After scanning through the info, our hero acknowledges that the progress is going as well as he planned. At this point, the professor is visibly shaking with anger. You see, Mage, also known as the episode 8 boss, is unable to defeat her dark emotions and ends up undergoing dark demonization. This turns her into one of the villains. Once her dark demon erosion progress reaches 90%, she'll completely become a dark demonic human. But while it's under 50%, it's impossible to find out through magic. Our hero reiterates that she's at 21% currently, making it impossible to report her or prove that she's a dark demonic human. For this reason, he needs to continually provoke her until it surpasses 50%, after which he'll call in the Dark Demon Assassination Squad. For a typical dark demon, there would have been a way to overturn it before she completely underwent the transformation. Unfortunately, Mage is a dark contractor who willingly underwent a contract with a dark demonic human, and their seeds are already blossoming inside of her, making it impossible to reverse. Back to the present, our hero glares at his professor, acknowledging that the 4th episode hasn't even started yet, and that he has to prepare beforehand because she's a very strong boss. If he doesn't prepare, the professor will turn other students into dark demonic humans and also threaten Stella. In turn, Miss Mason intertwines her arms as she reiterates that our hero's attitude is still the same as ever. She then tells him not to expect a good mark in alchemy. He remains unfazed, and it's evident in his expression. He even thinks this is better, seeing as there won't be any additional damage if he continues to receive attention. He then resolves to focus on building his muscles rather than doing assignments. Sadly, he gets blindsided when he discovers that the practical exams are going to be a group project. Worse off, that he's stuck with Azel and 2 other awkward boys in his group. Both boys just stare at each other in silence, and Azel staring at the desk doesn't help matters either. The atmosphere feels like someone died, so our hero takes initiative and introduces himself to the group. The first boy introduces himself as Ka Sehun, the other one is Mal Lewin, and finally, Azel introduces herself. Lewin immediately buries his face in his palms as he whimpers about their group being screwed. He then proclaims that the professor always gives bad marks to students she dislikes, and that it doesn't even matter if they do the exam. This makes our boy feel sorry for infuriating the professor, only for the fake heroine to finally speak as she points out that they can't just give up. She goes on about how the alchemy exam is assessed by at least 3 alchemists from the alchemy castle, making it difficult for Miss Mason to ruin their grades all by herself. Both Lewin and Sehun brighten up upon this realization. They then smile at each other as they announce that they'll try their best, and admit that they always wanted to work on the project at hand. In turn, our boy smiles softly at Azel, and she averts her gaze as though she didn't just turn the tides on their project. Anyway, she explains that it won't be that hard to create the D-Vitality potion given for their assignment, only if they combine their knowledge. She then announces that they have to begin by gathering the ingredients properly. The first and most important ingredient on their list is the tail of the fire lizard, and our hero volunteers to get that. Azel points out that the monster corpse is the most important part of alchemy and makes sure our boy understands that he needs to carefully select it and bring something fresh. Yusial quips that he understands, and his confidence doesn't go unnoticed by the fake heroine. She's left wondering if she can trust him though. Meanwhile, our hero just smiles slyly, knowing full well that he'll simply dropship the fire lizard to his location. Upon nightfall, our hero turns up for a one-on-one meeting called by Professor Mason, only for her to hand him a piece of paper with instructions to give it to the C Group first-year alchemy students. As she specifies that Team 12 will be exempted, a sinister smile accompanies her statement. In response, our boy quips that he'll do as she says. You see, the alchemy practical exam is done in front of the alchemy castle's official alchemists, and per adventure our hero shows a pathetic sight in front of them. His path as an alchemist will be blocked forever. As the professor watches him leave, she intertwines her arms and quips that she'll teach him what it means to go against a professor. The next day, Flame is busy making use of the S-Class training hall when someone calls out to her. She twirls to see who it is, only to realize that it's Beak Yusial. He goes on to hand her the piece of paper, telling her that it's an alchemy assignment. The heroine accepts the note with thanks, and he adds that they were instructed not to tell anyone about it. Apparently, the professor thinks Flame will understand when told to keep it a secret. She just heaves a tired sigh as the hero makes his way back, keeping in mind that Professor Mason probably meant the note for Team 12 because Yusial is on it. The girl opens the note soon enough, and it reveals that the assignment for the practical exam will be changed from the D-Vitality potion to the Tyrant Point potion. The heroine then wonders if her professor thinks that she'll just do nothing. Soon enough, she gets some sort of epiphany and takes a beat to think things out, asking herself if the hero will be prepared for this incident since he has knowledge of the original novel. She deduces that for the exam, he'll prepare the Idyllic Spider's scales for the Tyrant Point potion rather than the tail of a fire lizard needed for the D-Vitality potion. Flame stares at the note for a little longer and squeezes it within her palm as she resolves to use this another chance to test our boy. A loud announcement is made, pointing out that Beak Yusial has been transported to the Daredevil Stadium. As he makes his way out of the warp hole that transported him there, the first thing he does is complain about his head. The second thing is to complain about how dizzy warp holes make him feel. Just then, his attention is drawn by someone welcoming. A quick glance reveals a blonde lady pointing towards a huge passageway and smiling as she welcomes him to Daredevil. Our hero wastes no time letting her know that he's only a cadet, but she's adamant that a cadet from Stella Academy is worth the same treatment as an official mage. Anyway, our hero begins to draw unnecessary attention as a passerby pinpoints him as a cadet from Stella Academy. Other people begin to murmur after this. Some quip that they've never seen the Stella uniform before, while the others express how jealous they are of him. The blonde lady then reminds him that she mentioned him getting special treatment and adds that he should reach out if he needs help with anything. In turn, our hero simply thanks her and gets a move on. He thinks to himself that as long as he has a pass and a Stella pocket watch, he'll get treated as an official mage no matter where he goes. A soft smile then crosses his lips as he admits that his academy sure is nice. In addition, he gets to use a warp hole for free when it would cost 100,000 credits on a normal day. Thanks to this advantage, our hero has been using the warp hole every weekend to go around the city, and has confirmed that the information he has is mostly the same. Our boy arrives at the bush path beside a blue castle in the mountains, and twirls his head continuously as he searches for something vital to his school project. You see, the goal for the day is to get a hold of a fire lizard which is known to have a risk level of 2. This creature's stamina and power are stronger than that of most beasts, so any mage would have to use nothing less than second rank magic if they plan to catch it. This is also because of its quick movements and resistance to magic. At this point, our boy recalls how easy it was when he tried catching risk level 1 monsters, and quips that a risk level 2 should be pretty cut and dry. In no distant future, he feels the presence of this beast and instantly takes his battle pose as he peels out Verizon. Our hero takes a beat as the monster continues to linger in the shadows, only for it to speed up in an attempt to attack him from behind. Luckily, his sixth sense activates just in time and UCL turns around. The fire lizard gets stabbed in the neck just as quickly as it tries to attack our hero. After this, the beast coughs up a sizable amount of blood and continues to shriek as life seeps out of it. Soon enough, the shrieking stops and the monster falls to the ground in defeat. UCL just stands over the corpse as he acknowledges that he has gotten one fire lizard. Unfortunately, his attention is drawn once again, this time by multiple fire lizards crawling their way out of the bushes. Of course, our boy is neither scared nor overwhelmed. Instead, he smiles and lifts his staff as he resolves to collect more ingredients. He then runs headfirst into the swarm. Later on, Azel can't hide her surprise as he reveals everything he collected. He points out that they're super fresh and the fake heroine claps back about how obvious that is. As they wait their turn for the practical exams, she admits that our hero seems to have an eye for ingredients. In turn, he just smiles and quips that as long as she knows it, he's good. Up next, Azel announces that they just have to make the potion perfectly, and tells the other 3 boys on her team that they should get to it. In no time, Professor Mason appears in front of the class with 3 other examiners dressed in red hoods. She asks if everyone has gathered and goes on to reiterate that their exam will be carried out in front of alchemists from the Alchemist Castle. Apparently, students that do well in this exam will have a better future in alchemy. The professor declares the beginning of the exam, only to drop a bomb that the subject of the exam will be on the Tyrant Point potion. UCL instantly breaks into a cold sweat from this ambush. Even Azel can't believe her ears. Miss Mason revels in this as she asks if Team 12 have their ingredients ready, only for the fake heroine to raise her hand in protest, announcing that they thought the exam was on the D-Vitality potion. In turn, the professor tells her that she sent out an announcement about the switch, and goes on to ask the rest of the class just to prove her point. Azel takes a look around and realizes that no one is taken aback by this news. On the other hand, our hero acknowledges that his professor plans to play dirty, and although it doesn't matter to him, he feels bad that his teammates will have to fail because of it. As he wonders if such a thing happened in the original novel, he locks eyes with Flame, only for her to quickly avert her gaze. Our hero is left in confusion as he wonders what just happened. Anyway, the heroine is also having second thoughts about our boy knowing the original novel and wonders why he was unable to prevent the whole examination debacle from happening. Professor Mason verbally attacks Azel, asking her if she prepared the wrong ingredients. In turn, the already skittish cadet sweats buckets in an attempt to make up a reasonable excuse. Sadly, the professor doesn't even give her a chance to speak and goes straight to scolding her for forgetting the goal of an alchemist. Her menacing smile returns as she proclaims that it can't be helped, but just as she's about to eliminate Team 12 from the running, our hero tells her to wait. He raises his hand to signify that he has a suggestion, and confirms if all they have to do is create the Tyrant Point potion. Miss Mason tries to understand what he's talking about, but our boy proudly announces that they will make the potion. He goes on about making it with a higher efficacy than that of the professor and using different ingredients to pull it off. She didn't expect this to happen, so the shock is evident on her face. In turn, our boy smiles and rubs it in, leaving Miss Mason to suppress her anger. While the guest alchemists murmur among themselves, our hero recalls that the core ingredient for the Tyrant Point potion is the Idyllic spider's scales, and these scales happen to have vast amounts of nutrients. The Tyrant Point potion just so happens to be the thermal supplement created with the nutrients as the foundation. Miss Mason becomes amused as she realizes that our hero is going to try making a thermal supplement using the tail of a fire lizard. She believes that this is much better than she expected and plans to use this as a yardstick to end his path as an alchemist before the eyes of everyone. The professor then agrees to give them a chance and announces that they have 1 hour. Of all 4 team members, our boy is the only one that doesn't seem worried, and Miss Mason makes it worse as she reiterates that they have to make their Tyrant potion within record time. Lewin instantly asks our boy if he's crazy, and Sehun follows up by announcing that he doesn't think he has the right idea. In turn, Yuseol flashes them his brightest smile as he encourages them to try something since it has come to this. All 3 team members then give each other knowing looks as our hero tells them to trust him. Azel finally quips that it's better to try something than to get disqualified, so Lewin gets on board. And soon enough, Sehun does too. They all resolve to show the alchemists what they've got, and a sly smile revisits our boy's features as he offers to explain what they have to do. One of Yuseol's main interests while he was playing the game was gathering all sorts of recipes, and kept gathering them no matter how trivial they seemed. Luckily, amongst these recipes was the one for Tyrant Point Potion Type B. Back to the present, our hero thinks to himself that he wasn't going to use the recipe because it's one that the professor came up with down the line. He goes on to explain that the reason the Idyllic spider's scales have a lot of nutrients is so that the monster can hatch its eggs. Apparently, it has a similar feature as the tail of a fire lizard, and our hero goes on to point out a certain blood vessel. He explains how the Alaker tribe in the southern desert is said to use these blood vessels to improve the health of their leaders. Our boy then tells his teammates that using it also results in a longer life expectancy, and adds that they can switch it out with that part of the fire lizard's tail. At this point, Lewin indicates that he has some knowledge about the Alaker's process, and asks if he can handle that part of things. Our hero happily lets him and returns to explaining the process. It turns out that the spike mulberry mistletoe is a vital part of the end product and should be dehydrated using the desert style of mono release. He questions the remaining 2 members of their team if they know how to carry out the process, only for Sehun to admit that he learned the dehydration method from going around with his dad. He even humble brags about being able to dehydrate all the blood vessels given to him in 5 minutes. Yuseol hasn't finished calling out the next necessary step when Azel steps up and offers to take care of it, and so he simply thanks her. After this, our hero just watches his people work. Lewin and Sehun go hard at it, and the fake heroine refuses to be outdone. This brings a small smile to our boy's lips, and he admits that his teammates are much better than he expected. After they all carried out their respective parts, Yuseol instructs them to blend the ingredients as meticulously as he taught them. Later on, Professor Mason wears the most distraught look in life as she stares at the finished product made by our hero and his team, a purplish liquid sitting pretty in a glass vial. In turn, our boy flashes her a sly grin as he declares that it's the Type B version of a Tyrant Point potion. This gets the guest alchemists murmuring again as they express their disbelief over some kids pulling off such a feat. The professor is nothing if not bitter and furrows her eyebrows as she concludes that the kids before her must be clowns. She goes on about preparing her Tyrant Point potion after years of research and refuses to believe that these kids completed theirs this easily. At this moment, one of the guest alchemists steps up and offers to confirm the potency of the potion. She stretches out her hand for an over-the-vial test, only for a bunch of blossoms to surround the potion. This leaves the alchemist pleasantly surprised, and when asked what the problem is, she reveals that even though the potion is incomplete, with some ingredients added excessively, it's more effective than that of Professor Mason. The moment she says this, our hero and his team immediately beam with smiles. The guests continue their mumbling about how incredible they find the potion and how the students sure possess unique knowledge. This annoys the professor beyond what she can stomach, so she yells at the alchemists to hand over the potion, and adds that she'll check it personally. Upon grabbing it, Miss Mason falls silent, only acknowledging to herself that there's no doubt about her technique being applied to create the potion. This is the same technique that involves using a monster's nutrients to replace a human's vitality. It burns her to admit that it's actually the perfect Tyrant Point potion, and she just stares at the vial with so much malice, wondering how they made something better than hers in such a short period of time. The professor squeezes the vial even tighter, telling herself that she's still the one who gets to grade these students. She then resolves to disqualify them for not having the necessary ingredients. Meanwhile, our hero and his team await their fate as Miss Mason finally announces that she has finished inspecting. Just as she's about to decree a negative result, one of the guest alchemists cuts her off and announces that Team 12 deserve more than an A+. The professor stares at her angrily, but the guest just smiles from ear to ear, asking her if she doesn't agree with their assessment. Miss Mason just curses in her heart, calling the alchemists old bats and gritting her teeth as she struggles to announce that Team 12 have passed. The team is originally stunned by the news, but their surprise turns into happiness soon enough, making all 4 of them smile as they declare that they did it. They walk away from the examination hall, giving kudos to one another while their professor stares at our hero with the most malicious intent she can muster. She then whispers that he should just wait for her next plan. Sadly, this increases her dark demon erosion progress. On the other hand, Flame is busy training to sharpen her control skills. She then stretches after putting some time in, unconsciously announcing that going to school at her age makes her body ache. This draws the attention of the student next to her, but he has no idea what to do with what he just heard. Soon enough, she notices some students petting a girl named Arshwang and telling her that she's doing well. Another friend of hers even points out that she's still doing much better than the princess. Flame watches as Arshwang wipes her tears and realizes that she had heard about the princess being a genius fire mage. The girls continue to gossip about Bion's insane growth speed, adding that they practiced for several years but she already surpassed them. The heroine overhears everything and it dawns on her that the princess's control of her magic should only start to develop in the second year. This leaves her wondering how she's already controlling it so well. As Arshwang and her friends make their way out of the training room, Flame wonders if Bion's growth is thanks to Beak Yusial. The strangeness of the alchemy practical exam revisits her mind at this moment, seeing as the Type B Tyrant Point potion was a recipe that the future Azel was supposed to find. Unfortunately, Professor Mason would steal and complete it for herself. The heroine scratches her chin as she wonders how our hero could know a recipe that didn't even appear in the original novel. She recalls that he didn't seem to know about the switching of exam subjects, and she gets another epiphany as she realizes that our boy knows things about the future, but not things from the original novel. This helps her welcome the idea that he's actually a regressor and not a possessor like herself. It all begins to make sense, seeing as Yusial being from the future would justify him knowing things that will happen but not the small incidents that occurred to Azel. Apparently, Ma Yuxiang once gained the chance to regress in the original novel, and this was granted by the 11th moon of the Silver Mage, the sole being with the power of time in this world. The heroine is still deep in thought, trying to link the being's power to our hero, when someone asks her what's wrong. This makes her snap out of it and she soon realizes that it was He Wenryong talking. She thinks it's the perfect time, so she covers the distance between them and asks him what he thinks about Yusial. In turn, the mage expresses his ignorance over why she's asking, but goes on to say that he thinks our hero is a slightly strange boy. Flame tries to confirm if he feels anything else, but Wenryong quips that he doesn't. This saddens the heroine, so she bows her head in disappointment. After some seconds of silence, her friend asks if she's bothered by our boy, and this makes her lift her head once again. She wastes no time admitting that he does bother her, much to Wenryong's surprise. Flame conveniently leaves out the part about being worried because our hero seems to know about the original novel, just like her. She suddenly announces that her behavior won't cut it, leaving her friend to ask what she's talking about. In turn, she admits that whining like this doesn't match her personality, and declares that she's going to confide her thoughts to Yusial. Wenryong's eyes shoot open as he reads a different meaning into the heroine confiding her thoughts to our boy. The mage escorts Flame until they get outside the training ground, and she thanks him for hearing her out with a smile and a wave goodbye. Wenryong returns her gesture, but the moment she gets going, his hand drops to his side and his countenance becomes a sad one. He just bows his head as he continues to think about the heroine. The next day, the sun filters in through the windows of the diner, and our hero sits alone with two girls laughing in view. He then exhales loudly as he wonders what to do next. You see, Professor Mason's dark demon erosion progress is at 37%. This means the incident will occur in 3 months as Yusial predicted. Anyway, Miss Mason's dark demon erosion is sure to randomly affect one student, but there are 3 possible candidates. There's Jackie, Flame's friend, Arshwang, a member of Bion's clique, and He Wenryong, heir to the Full Moon Tower. As our boy gets on his feet, he acknowledges that Wenryong getting involved will be the worst case. He makes his way out of the diner, remembering the route of the game involving the heir. Apparently, if he gets caught in a dark demon erosion, it almost always meant a bad ending. He's still busy wondering who will be the most likely target of all 3 candidates when his train of thought gets interrupted. He realizes that it's Flame with her arms intertwined and a serious look pasted on her face. She wastes no time asking for our hero's real identity, but he tries to play it off by inquiring why she's saying such things so suddenly. In turn, the heroine reminds him that the last time she brought up his identity, he also didn't answer her properly. Seeing as he's stuck with the same question once again, our hero squints his eyes and acknowledges that the girl before him must like making things difficult. He then looks her dead in the eyes as he welcomes the possibility of telling her the truth in exchange for information that might help him reach the game's true ending. After mulling it over, he realizes that he actually has nothing to lose, but just as he's about to confess, notifications begin to pop up left and right, screaming that he lacks narrative power, and warning him not to reveal that he's a possessor. It also warns him not to share any information he has with the relevant character, and the number of warning notifications becomes quite overwhelming for our hero, so much so that he admits that it's driving him nuts. After coming to terms with the new conditions, he massages his head and comes up with a way for both parties to get what they want, or at least half of it. Flame instantly replies that it's fine with her, and dives right into the questions before our hero can have a chance to catch his breath. She questions him about knowing the future, and it dawns on Yusial that she has no plans to take things slow. He just announces that she must also know the future if she's asking him about it, and proceeds to ask what she's trying to achieve by going to the academy. She raises her voice, telling our boy that their world is unstable and announcing that all she wants to do is move it in a direction where it won't collapse. Her reply gives our hero some hope, but he's a bit skeptical because there's no way to know if she's telling the truth. Flame tags in with her next question and asks why Yusial is acting like that. The question seems too vague, so our hero decides to give a vague answer too, and tells her that he's acting that way just because. He later adds that all he's doing is for the best, and this catches Flame's attention, so much so that she begins to tremble and ultimately accuses our boy of lying. Yusial never expected Flame to accuse him of lying, so he is taken aback by it and begins to sweat nervously. In turn, the heroine quips that there's no way he is that kind and goes on to scream that there's definitely some goal he wants to achieve, or something he wants. Once again, our hero clarifies that he doesn't want anything, and when asked what he means, he buries his face in his palm. He then explains that he is honestly not sure of what he wants, so it's practically pointless to even ask him such a question. She still doesn't understand how he is not sure, so he makes it clear that all he wants to do is laugh. It's Flame's turn to be surprised and her eyes shoot open as she repeats his last statement to herself. After this, she simply apologizes for overstepping, leaving our hero to wonder if that's all she can do. Unfortunately, things take another turn as the heroine clasps her mouth shut and runs away crying. Yusial then realizes that it's actually his turn to ask a question, but he is also too distracted by why she is crying. At this point, someone calls out his name, so he turns his head to see who it is, only for a pissed-off Hyunryong to take malicious steps in his direction. This scares our boy into sweating even more, and the scholar yells at him to explain why Flame ran away crying, adding that he won't let Yusial rest if he gives him a false answer. Our hero freezes in place, admitting to himself that he feels scared because the rival of the world's strongest person is now glaring daggers at him. It's at this point that he remembers Wenryong's unrequited crush on Flame, so he realizes that if he gets misunderstood, things will end up being tough. For this reason, he tells the scholar that nothing happened with his girl. He even takes it a step further as he asks why Wenryong wants to know. This does nothing to throw off the scholar, seeing as he doesn't believe a word our hero said. In turn, he smiles nervously and clarifies that nothing like what Wenryong is thinking actually happened. He then urges the scholar not to worry, keeping in mind that his words should be enough this time. Unfortunately, the frown doesn't leave Wenryong's face at first, but after a few moments of mulling things over, he apologizes to our hero, claiming that he initially asked a pointless question. In response, Yusial flails his arms and tells the scholar that he doesn't need to go that far. Before he can even finish his sentence, Wenryong turns around and bids him goodbye, leaving him to display a fake smile and wave. In his heart, all he can think about is how different the scholar's character is from the original story, mostly because he is supposed to be calm and cold, but is being unstable instead. Our boy then admits that something feels off about all of it. Nightfall arrives in the blink of an eye, with lights leaking from various rooms in the academy. In one of them, Azel picks out a book and places it on the table in front of her. She goes on to close her eyes in a bid to regain her focus, but it just doesn't work, so she calmly opens her eyes once again. Just then, a memory from her near past comes visiting, one where she asked Yusial for a chance to question him about something. In response, our hero wanted to know what it was, so Azel asked if the alternative mixing method he came up with during their test was a spur-of-the-moment thing. He continued to stare at her and then revealed that the first part of it was. This left the fake heroine in a daze, and it followed her for the rest of the day. You see, she was used to thinking of herself as a genius, and had planned to keep on going until she was strong enough to defeat Bayon's mother. Right now, she doesn't feel like she is worth anything, and groans as she questions her identity. She goes on to ball her fist as she realizes that if she continues going at this rate, she'll never be able to avenge her father. Apparently, the Adelbits, who are a dirty and mucky lot, were the ones responsible for framing Azel's father and causing his death. The fake heroine then claps her cheeks as she tries to regain composure, and announces to no one that she can't just let things remain the same. With this, she resolves to work even harder. On the other hand, Flame lies in bed, trying and failing in her attempt to get some sleep. She is too busy regretting why she chose to stay in a room that could house 4 people rather than choosing an exclusive S-class room for one. Since sleep refuses to come, she opens her eyes and revisits the matter of Yusial. He definitely said that he didn't have a goal he wanted to achieve, and Flame believes this is proof enough that he regressed. Apparently, in the last part of the original novel, the 11th moon of the Silver Age said specific words to Ma Yuxiang, revealing that turning back time is possible. The only problem is that it will come with the price of losing most of his memories, not to mention the fact that he'll simply cease to exist after fulfilling his mission. To make things worse, no one will remember that he saved the world, and all his loved ones will come to forget him. After the 11th moon told him all of this, he went on to inquire if he would still go back in time. Battered and bruised, the hero still smiled and announced that he will do it if that's his fate. This was when Azel, the heroine of the original novel, came out to stop him, claiming that she would rather go to ruin while remembering him than live in a world where he doesn't exist. She then hugged him and ended up convincing him to give up on the world. For this reason, he no longer regressed and the world was destroyed. Or so went the epilogue of the original novel. Flame sits up in bed to critically analyze the situation, welcoming the possibility of this world being different from that of the novel, and Yusial being the one who regressed using the power of the 11th moon. With this, she concludes that after fulfilling his mission, our hero will disappear and his existence will be totally erased from history. The heroine then stares at nothing in particular as she realizes that RMC, who's supposed to have lost all his memories and be left with only his mission, has decided that he just wants to live. She grabs her sheets even tighter as this fact unsettles her, but before she can finish collecting her thoughts, someone draws her attention. It's her redhead friend, Jackie, and she rushes in, bearing news of Wonryong coming to see the heroine. The moment the redhead announces that the visitor is waiting on the first floor, Flame buries herself under her sheets and tells the girl to lie to Wonryong that she is not around. Jackie tries to object to this, but the heroine pays her no mind and simply announces that she is going back to sleep. This leaves the redheaded with no choice but to stare helplessly and swallow her saliva alongside any other opinions she might have about the matter. Soon enough, she heads to the first floor to address Wonryong and meets him waiting with arms folded. She had quickly put on a coat before heading down, and upon coming within earshot of the scholar, she shyly called out to him. In turn, he looks her over and asks her to identify herself. The blushing redhead is disappointed but does well to hide it by asking what he means. Wonryong then responds by only inquiring about Flame's location, so she stutters as she reveals that the heroine is sleeping due to her sickness. The scholar immediately registers this as Yusial's fault and concludes that she is feeling down because she confessed her feelings to RMC and got rejected. With this, he simply tells Jackie that he'll be going back to his quarters and walks away without hearing her response. She just stands there alone, with the wind blowing her coat as she watches him leave. The redhead then admits that she likes him so much, but he doesn't even remember her name. Apparently, it has always been this way, seeing as Flame has always been the one with outstanding abilities and somehow always got everyone's attention. Meanwhile, all Jackie could do was watch from a distance as the heroine seamlessly got Wonryong's heart without even wanting it. At the moment, she just stares into nothingness in the middle of the lot and balls her fist as she admits how annoying the whole thing is. The next day, Professor Mason is summoned to the first main tower by Mr. Akahaden, the academy's vice principal. He points out that she got embarrassed by a student, only for her to bow her head and admit how ashamed it makes her feel. In turn, the vice principal turns around to take a good look at her, simultaneously reminding the professor that they have high expectations for her. She had been researching the random sequence convergence technique with the Moon Shadow Order doctors, so Mr. Akahaden would like to know if it's going well. Professor Mason's expression brightens upon hearing this, and she wastes no time giving an affirmative response, even adding that she'll not disappoint the vice principal. Afterwards, he gently grabs her shoulder and admits that he'll trust her. She then tells him to leave it to her and makes her way out of his office. The VP just watches her leave, only to call her an idiot when she goes out of earshot. Apparently, he calls her that because she is so blinded by glory that she has no idea that she is being used because. To make things worse, it turns out that Mr. Akahaden is a dark demonic human, so he silently mocks the professor for working for him when her mission as a mage is to fight against his kind. With his hands behind him, he quips that he can't wait for the day alchemic magic engineering will be complete. On the other hand, Altalicia, Miss Mason's assistant, is struggling to keep a stack of papers from falling over, and the other students just watch her as she complains about not being able to see in front of her. Luckily, Beak Ucial turns up just in time to pick up half of the stack. He then flashes the assistant a smile as he asks if she is okay. They end up in the professor's storage space where they lay the stack of papers to rest, and Altalicia thanks our hero for his help, pointing out that she would have gotten into trouble with her boss if it wasn't for him. He simply brushes her compliments aside as he quips that it's nothing. Just then, he twirls his head to take a look around the storage room, and soon realizes that the place is chaotic to say the least, with crumpled papers littering every nook. His eyes shoot open the moment he notices the drawings on the chalkboard, so the assistant reveals that it's a formula that Miss Mason is researching with other doctors. She calls it the random sequence research technique, and this makes our hero visibly jolt out of surprise. He takes another look at the technique and recalls that it's the first formula of alchemic magic engineering. According to the original story, the professor works with some dark demonic humans to complete this technique in her blackening episode. As a result, the difference in technical skills leads to incredible damage, but it all changes when Altalicia appears. This makes our hero wonder if the assistant is supposed to solve the technique before the dark demonic humans. He goes on to call out to her, but she thinks it's because he wants a coffee. That's not the case at all. It turns out that he just wants to know if the assistant isn't bothered or even annoyed by Professor Mason. Altalicia doesn't give a straight answer. Instead, she asks why he is bringing up such questions. It's at this point that our hero sneaks in the possibility of Altalicia getting revenge in a very refreshing way. In turn, she just stares at him, speechless as a child caught with her hand in the cookie jar. Altalicia can't stop staring, so our hero stares back with a smug expression on his face. Soon enough, her silence takes the opposite turn as she begins to fret and announce that she is only an assistant. She wonders how she can get revenge, and spirals about having to live on the streets if she gets fired. While she continues down the rabbit hole of being homeless, Ucial interrupts her with a suggestion, telling her to just become a greater alchemist than the professor. She tries to figure out what he means, but our hero simply comes close to her, looks into her eyes, and tells her that if she follows his suggestion, no one can look down on her. Tears gather in her eyes upon hearing this, and she averts her gaze as she admits that such a thing would be so nice. Our MC can tell that she is already tired and that there's no way she's satisfied with only doing Miss Mason's dirty work in a dusty storage room. Due to his knowledge of the original story, he knows that Altalicia has a dream to become an alchemist that'll make a bunch of inventions. He also knows that she has the talent to make her dreams come true. This is because she is destined to one day become this generation's greatest genius alchemist and will use her genius brain and innovative thinking to create countless items. Once again, the assistant apologizes for not getting our hero any coffee, but he simply tells her that it's fine. He realizes that the lady before him has been discouraged by reality and had to put her dreams aside. For this reason, he resolves to help her make them come true as soon as possible. Some time passes and so does the first round of Stella exams, after which Ucial pays constant visits to Altalicia. Their most recent meeting is going on at the moment and the assistant is overjoyed as she listens to our hero's opinion of her latest idea. She then tells him that she was thinking of adding a function where the user could change the color of a pen just by pressing a button. In response, our MC chuckles and suggests that she adds an eraser while she is at it. Altalicia easily buys into the idea, seeing as she thinks a mechanical pencil would be perfect. She goes on to scribble in her notepad after this, leaving Ucial to admit to himself that her inventions are now moving along smoothly. The only problem lies in her formulaic solutions, which are unfortunately lacking. As Ucial makes his way down the hallway, he keeps telling himself that he needs to lead the Altalicia to the answer before Professor Mason reaches it. Sadly, it's not as easy as it sounds. Just then, someone calls him an old man and asks what he is spacing out for. He soon realizes that it's Flame, but it doesn't stop her from telling him that he'll bump into something if he continues to space out while walking. Our hero instantly folds his arms as he turns his attention to her. He then follows up by asking who she is calling old. In turn, the heroine also folds her arms and blatantly repeats that she was referring to him. This frustrates Ucial a bit, mostly because he has never told anyone about his age. The only good thing about their last honest conversation is that she has been speaking to him more frequently since then. He just scoffs, tells her that she caught him right on time, and mentions her friend, Jackie. Flame takes this the other way and scrounges her face as she tells our hero that going out with the girl would be a crime. In turn, he basically shrieks and yells that he hasn't even said anything yet. He regains his composure just as quickly, and advises the heroine to keep an eye on her friend. Flame shoots him questioning looks, but they don't stop him from revealing that Jackie might not be in a good condition at the moment. In truth, he is scared that the girl will be influenced by the dark demon erosion and that it will lead to her being in a very unstable state. The heroine finally speaks, admitting that she doesn't understand what our hero is saying and adding that she'll watch Jackie when they go hunting together over the weekend. Ucial thanks her, but keeps in mind that there's only one place that they'll go during this hunting season. It just so happens to be the same location where the 4th episode begins, and it's none other than the Martavis Cemetery. You see, all the main characters including Ucian, Azel, and Flame are going to be involved in this hunt, seeing as it becomes a huge battle where a 5th-class necromancer appears. Of course, our hero isn't going to do any intervention in the story, but earning the hidden reward that comes with it will be pretty handy during the familiar contract ceremony. For this reason, Ucial approaches Professor Hanwall and hands him his leave pass. In turn, the professor takes a good look at it and discovers that our hero wants to leave under the grounds of training. He then quips that it's not like the boy can learn anything about swordsmanship or chivalry at Stella Academy. Our hero begs the professor's pardon, but he quickly clears his throat and acts like he didn't say anything. After this, Ucial notices something on Mr. Hanwall's desk, and upon closer inspection, realizes that it's Uciang's leave request. He then decides to bring up the topic to see what the professor will say. Our MC starts by mentioning that there are many students requesting leaves to go hunt, and without looking up, Professor Hanwall reiterates that they are all heading to the Martavis Cemetery for club activities, or to try and win points. In response, the hero points out that he was right, adding that although Yuseong and Wenryong have high marks, they're still proving their diligence by going hunting for points. This gets the professor to look up from the documents he was checking out, and he tells our hero that Yuseong is actually heading home. As it turns out, Wenryong is only going because of Flame. Ucial's brows shoot up as worry begins to consume him. This is because he is certain that the others won't be able to defeat the necromancer's attacks without the help of Ucial. To make things worse, our hero knows that the scholar wouldn't head home without a specific incident, and is now left wondering what has gotten into him this time. Once again, he recalls that the current members of the team will definitely not stand a chance against a 5th-class necromancer. His fingers make their way to his chin as he asks himself what he can do at a time like this. It's bad enough that he can't request for support without concrete evidence, but he also can't tell anyone any proper information because of narrative power. At this point, he balls his fist and admits that he can't just let them die. He then centers himself as he comes to a conclusion that he has to solve the problem himself. A few days later, the students arrive at the Martavis Cemetery as planned, and the place is as gloomy as they come. In no time, one of the second-year students named Doc Chulkwing defeats a fish monster with his fire magic. He then stares down at his recent victim, with an arrogant smirk pasted on his lips as he quips that it only needed a blow to get defeated. Just then, another second-year student named Kasif Derek begins to yell at him, calling him an idiot and asking how he could destroy everything. This makes Chulkwing steal a glance at him as he continues to furiously question him about not listening to his orders. In turn, the boy ruffles his own hair as he laughs nervously and apologizes. This does nothing to calm Derek down, seeing as he keeps screaming and asking why Chulkwing is laughing. At this moment, Bandion just tells him to leave the boy be, because talking too much will only tire him out. Azel, who has been right behind her, stays quiet the whole time, only to get told that she doesn't need to worry about guys like Derek and his friend. As she quips that she understands, both boys give in to the urge to remind them that they can hear their conversation. Miss Dion doesn't seem to care about that, so Derek tells her to shut up and watch her mouth in front of a new student. The fake heroine just watches as the girl laughs and proclaims that she doesn't want to shut up, and as they begin what seems like a staring game, Azel retires to her thoughts. The only reason she came with these people was because they claimed to have an empty seat in their club, not to mention the fact that they are allowed special leaves from the academy. It's just an added bonus that they also don't seem like bad people. At this point, Dion interrupts Azel's train of thought as she tells her to come along, and she perks up as she gives an affirmative response. Just then, a loud noise fills the atmosphere and is accompanied by a bright light. The fake heroine then joins the others as they stare in the direction from which it came, wondering what such a sound could be. Chulkwing thinks it's someone fighting passionately nearby, so Dion points out that it won't be good if their hunting grounds overlap. For this reason, she asks Derek if it's fine to go say hi to the fighters, and he gives the go-ahead. Together, all four students approach the noise, only for Azel to freeze in place upon seeing the people responsible. It turns out to be none other than Bion and Flame. Flame and Bion are still on each other's throats when the others arrive, and Azel just watches as they go on about who caught the predate fish first. She acknowledges that the predate fish is pretty big and that it's of a difficulty level of 3. In fact, it has become obvious that they're in a battle to raise more points, but she says nothing on the matter because it'll only complicate things some more, not to mention the fact that it'll make her speak with the younger sister of the enemy who took her father's life. She plans to leave rather quickly, but Derek interrupts Flame and Bion, calling them his juniors and asking that they express their concerns to him, seeing as he's their senior. The princess is quick to tell him to shut up, adding that he should be on his way, and in response, Derek tries to challenge her for what she said. Unfortunately, she just piles on as she tells him to act like a senior if he's actually one. Suddenly, the ground begins to rumble, putting their petty arguments in perspective. In no time, skeleton hands begin to find their way out of the soil until the students come face to face with a bunch of undead soldiers. Meanwhile, Beak Yusial is on a part of the cemetery that bears a warning never to be entered alone. The baffling part of all of this is that he's busy gaining more and more EXP in this restricted area. In such a short amount of time, he takes down so many predate fish that he's left hoping that he gets to use magic too. This is because he's kinda tired of using only blink. While he keeps looking for something special, his attention is drawn to the part of the cemetery where the others are facing off skeletons. He acknowledges that he has found them, keeping in mind that he doesn't have any opus skills or overwhelming power to sweep away the skeletons like Ma Yuxiang does. For this reason, our hero tells himself that he has to fight in a way that only players can. With this, the fourth arc of the game begins, the Necromancer's attack. Without wasting time, the skeleton general makes a run at Yusial with its murderous eyes and red essence escorting it. Its job is to lead hundreds of other skeletons, and our boy knows for certain that it's one of 3 semi-boss ranked skeleton generals in this arc. He's also certain that he would die immediately if he were to fight against it using his current ability, so he has no plan to face the beast normally. Just as the general makes his way out of the soil, Yusial knocks its head with the hilt of his blade multiple times, and continues doing so despite the golden rule to just watch when a monster is transforming or being summoned. This is because he believes that ignoring such a monster won't help with dealing with it. After attacking this skeleton general ferociously, it turns into a spine staff which our hero wields seamlessly. This spine staff automatically gives him the same authority that the skeleton general possessed. With this, he seeks to enter the midst of the other skeletons. At the same time, Chulkwing and the others are getting surrounded by more skeletons. Flame had almost forgotten that this was the Necromancer's arc, but is now well aware. Worse off, she feels like something feels strange about it because it was Ma Yuxiang that resolved the trouble in the original novel. This time, Azel is with the juniors instead of him, leaving Flame to wonder about Yuxiang's whereabouts and whether or not they have to fight off the 5th class Necromancer with the low-ranking members they have. She squeezes her staff ever so tightly, until she hears from Derek that he sent a rescue request to Stella Academy using his pocket watch. He then adds that they just have to fight off the skeletons until help comes. Chulkwing also believes that their professors will show up if they can continue fighting for long enough, and Dion brings up the possibility of escaping if they can't fight off their foes. The Fire Princess doesn't think this is the time to be talking about something like that, seeing as the longer they wait, the more the number of attacking skeletons will increase. True to her words, more skeletons make their way towards fresh prey, leaving Bion to advise that they hurry up and return to base camp. One of the skeletons launches itself at a very scared Jackie, and Azel rushes to her rescue by engulfing it in blue flames. She then asks after the well-being of the girl, leaving Chulkwing to call her a newbie and admit that she's pretty good. Azel doesn't even let the compliment land before announcing that their necromancer must be thoroughly prepared. She thinks that there's a possibility a pose vessel was created. This is a technique which involves a necromancer continuously injecting and storing one's mana. You see, even necromancers have a limit to the amount of mana they can use, and if they were to summon skeletons, they would tire out after summoning a dozen 3rd to 4th class skeletons. It becomes obvious to Azel that the necromancer who's controlling a domain this large must have plans to turn them into skeleton mages. Amidst the chaos, Chulkwing can't help but complain about the ever-increasing number of enemies, adding that this must have been planned a long time in advance. On the other hand, Derek feels the need to show some initiative as the leader, so he resolves to use strong magic to sweep away the skeletons in one go. Sadly, one of said skeletons shoots out from the ground beneath him and grabs him by the leg, thus catching him by surprise. Chulkwing fires a spell to get the skeleton off of his friend. But Derek, who did not finish his spell, begins to feel the effects of its rebound. His friend notices that he was mid-cast and warns everyone else to duck. Azel and Dion just stare in shock while the princess is worried about them also being in danger if Derek's spell explodes. Unfortunately, this doesn't stop it from going off. As a result of the explosion, some students are down bad and the survivors, much like Flame, are at their limit. Our heroine takes a quick look around and realizes that most of her colleagues are curled up on the floor, leaving her with barely any mana and not enough time to recover. The worst part of it all is that more skeletons keep popping up. They launch themselves towards her almost immediately and Flame panics as she wonders if this is how she dies. Her opponents are mere inches away from her now and she grips her staff like her life depends on it, only for them to stop just before they can attack her. This leaves the heroine more surprised than ever, and when she looks past the skeletons, she notices Beak Yusial in all his glory. The moment she asks herself how he pulled it off, she notices the skeleton general's spine staff in his hand. If Flame's memory serves her, the skeleton general is much stronger than a normal one and should have an elite skeleton guarding it. This makes it all the more impressive that Yusial defeated it by himself. Despite finding it difficult to believe, Flame is actually relieved that she might get to live now. Afterwards, everyone gets back on their feet and Chulkwing thanks our hero, telling him that they survived because of him. He brushes this aside as nothing, only for Azel to question him about how he got his hands on a skeleton general's head. As usual, he trivializes the issue, smiling and claiming that he got it from some bone soup. In truth, he doesn't want anyone to know that he was waiting at the very spot where the general was summoned, and this leaves Azel unimpressed. Of course, our boy forges forward anyway, clearing his throat and announcing that they should quickly set up some plans. He warns them of how annoying things will get when the necromancer begins to ignore the general to control the skeletons by himself. Chulkwing asks for his plan, so our hero explains that it's impossible to get past this siege. Apparently, he saw that the necromancer had taken control near the base camp and declares that the only way out of this situation is to get the boss. Everyone stares at him as if to find out whether he's serious or not, and after they discover that he is, they begin to complain and scream in revolt, asking if our boy is out of his mind. In turn, Yusial brings up what they learned in school, reminding the others that although necromancers wield the strongest form of necromancy, their body itself is nothing to write home about. Dion points out that the necromancer must have countless guards near them only for our hero to tell her that they can't escape if they don't go for it. Luckily, he already has knowledge of the enemy forces, which consists of 1 skeleton general, 6 elite skeletons, and 50 normal skeleton soldiers. Sadly, the more time passes, the more these numbers will grow, making now the only opportunity they have to fight like hell. Yusial is still wondering how to convince everyone else when someone from behind quips that they can defeat the boss. He turns to look at the person, only to find that it's Flame. She goes on to vouch for our hero, telling the others that although he may look stupid, he actually possesses experience in battle strategy. Dion backs her up, pointing out the necromancer won't expect them to attack anyway. Chulkwing shoots Dion a skeptical look and then tells our MC that they'll work with him only because the two of them can't escape by themselves. Much to his surprise, even Dion supports trying what they can before the necromancer catches on. Meanwhile, their major opponent is lurking around, happy that he gets to meet the chicklings of Stella Academy at his cemetery. He has to get the Dark Demonic Union to stop looking down on him, and it entails turning these chicklings into skeleton mages. The necromancer is from the Mage Tower of Darkness and is a 5th rank mage known as Sabihyuk. Apparently, Bihyuk has been gathering mana for 7 years in his posed vessel and has about 700 skeletons sleeping around him at the moment. This brings a smile to his lips, seeing as he now feels like no one can scorn him. The smile gets wiped off almost immediately and is replaced by the panic that comes along with having all of his senses being blocked so suddenly. He wonders if a general got captured, only to get distracted by a mighty attack coming from behind him. The necromancer quickly summons a wall of bones to block this attack, but its pressure is so much that it puts cracks in the bone barrier. Seeing as it was 4th class magic, Bihyuk is both surprised and perplexed. He then declares that he won't let them go, only for a mighty inferno to completely consume his bone barrier courtesy of Princess Bayonne. Afterwards, the necromancer is left sweating profusely and blaming himself for letting down his guard. Just as predicted, he never expected them to attack him directly, so he keeps in mind that they are from Stella Academy even if they're chicklings. Bihyuk can feel them approaching through the fog, and despite his better judgment, he resolves to summon his elite soldiers. To pull this off, he bites his thumb to get some blood and beckons on his soldiers to come forth. Right on cue, they show up all around him, leaking such powerful essence that it'd be the stuff of nightmares. Unfortunately, this results in the necromancer coughing up some blood and breathing ever so heavily. He acknowledges that it's only right he takes some damage after overdoing himself like that, but concludes that the worst part is over. With this, he sends forth his elite soldiers and lets down his guard again as he realizes that they're fighting well. The moment he feels at ease, Yusial emanates right behind him, pushing the necromancer back into panic mode. He twirls in a frenzy and asks for our hero's identity. In response, he only cracks a devious smile. More questions escape Bihyuk's lips, but our MC doesn't grant him any answers. Apparently, the necromancer had been keeping an eye on all the Stella Academy students using the vision of his skeletons, so he's left wondering how Yusial managed to escape them all. It's at this moment that he notices that our boy is holding his skeleton general like a staff, and he wastes no time smashing it against the ground. As he crushes what's left of the general, the necromancer coughs up even more blood, scolding himself for thinking too lightly of his opponents. All he can do now is stare at our hero and wonder if this is the true strength of Stella Academy students. In truth, Yusial is equally freaking out, seeing as this isn't what he planned. He had thought that Chilkwang and Dion would quickly round up the generals and come to his aid, but because the necromancer summoned more elite soldiers, they seem to still be caught up. Our boy bows his head as he wonders if he's going to have to fight alone when he's the weakest among them. He's still considering running for his life when Bihyuk coughs up some blood once again, giving it away that the necromancer is also not in good shape. He also realizes that his opponent has internal injuries courtesy of summoning all those elite soldiers, and a smile comes to his lips as he tells himself that he can pull it off. Princess Bayonne is still in the heat of battle when she realizes that the situation is quite dire. She would love to round up her battle and go help out our hero, but it doesn't seem likely. Just then, Jackie calls out to her, pointing to her side and announcing that there's trouble. She goes on to inform the princess about Yusial's one-on-one battle against the necromancer, and this shocks Bayonne to her marrow. She's well aware that our boy is just a first-class mage compared to his opponent who's a fifth-class necromancer. In her eyes, there's no way it'll be a manageable battle. A bright flash of purple light brightens the place after this, and the princess promises to kill our hero if he dies. Meanwhile, Bihyuk tries to entrap our boy within some huge ribs, but he uses his blink skill to quickly escape its grasp. He then realizes that a follow-up attack is approaching him, so he uses the blink skill in succession and appears mere inches from his opponent. The necromancer is quite startled when this happens and screams that there's no way. Yusial just flashes his usual smile, peels open his jacket, and brings out the 2 cola potions. Apparently, he had prepared them ahead of time because they are excellent for dissolving bones. He pours the contents of the tubes onto Bihyuk's bone barrier and the dissolution begins, emanating smoke as the bones break down. The necromancer hurls multiple curses at our boy, even calling him a rat-like bastard, and after this, he uses his bone pierce technique to send skeleton phalanges after him. As usual, the blink skill comes into play and Yusial appears right behind his opponent, feeling like everything has fallen into place. Sadly, the moment he seeks to attack the necromancer, Bihyuk turns to smile at him, and this is signal enough that he has messed up. Almost immediately, skeleton claws pop up from underground and dig a hole through our hero's left leg. Blood and pain escapes him at this moment, and he grits his teeth as he admits that he has been had. With this, our boy quickly puts some distance between himself and his opponent. One look at our MC's condition and the necromancer's happiness returns, leaving Yusial to learn that he's not only a 5th class in name after all. Despite his initial naivete, our boy holds onto his staff and reanalyzes the situation. This reveals that his opponent may be strong but has shown the height of his strength. Our boy keeps his eyes peeled on him and discovers that Bihyuk is quite tired now, so he resolves to fight him once more. This time, he believes that he'll win. The only downside is the inability to use mind power because of the pain his injury is causing. At this rate, our hero may nor be able to use Blink's motion as a counter, so he begins to rack his brain for what to do. Suddenly, his eyes grow wide, seeing as he gains a last-minute epiphany. He stays kneeling down as the necromancer covers the distance between them, and the moment he comes close enough, Bihyuk tries to stab our boy with his staff, yelling for him to die. Yusial's eyes follow his every move, so he jumps out of harm's way right on time. The necromancer bursts out laughing because he finds it amusing every time our hero makes a run for it. Meanwhile, amidst his heavy breathing, our MC hopes that his opponent will chase him down just a little more. Bihyuk opens his hands wide as he approaches Yusial, yelling that it's pointless to struggle and telling him that he'll kill him at the cemetery. Our once agitated hero suddenly cracks a grin and declares that he has won. You see, Beak Usial had calculated the distance between him and the enemy to be 13 meters, and in the darkness of the fog, he realizes that it's within the range that he won't need to use the motion cancel of blink. He activates the blink skill at the last minute and comes too close to Behyuk for him to make any sudden movements of his own. The necromancer then remains frozen in shock until our hero pierces him in the chest using his staff. At the same time, all the skeletons he had summoned stop in their tracks and begin to disintegrate, leaving Cholquang to ask the question that's on everyone's mind. Did Usial really defeat the necromancer? Jackie falls to the ground as she quips that she can't believe it and follows it up with screams about them being safe and alive. As for our boy, he's still lying on top of Behyuk's body, involuntarily so. He then manages to pull himself off of the necromancer and points out how tired he is. All he wants to do at this point is to go home. Afterwards, they were all transferred to Stella's Magic Knights and then returned to school. Usial gets face to face with Professor Hanwall, who stares down at him with so much malice as he reiterates what our boy told him before he left. Apparently, Usial had told him that he was going to train somewhere with good mountains and good air, but the professor doesn't see how that describes the cemetery. He and his bandaged leg apologize to the professor, only to be told that he'll still receive penalty points according to the school's rules. He makes it clear that there are no exceptions, but also points out how amazing it is that he saved the life of his friend while breaking school rules. For this reason, he'll also receive appropriate rewards. All he has to do is await his fate, so Usial thanks the professor and watches him leave. He heaves a sigh of relief almost immediately and resolves to be on his way. Seeing as he was told to give his thighs a few days to heal up, Usial is all about resting for now. He catches a glimpse of Azel through the side of his eye and turns to face her. She instantly thanks him for his help earlier and he tells her to just buy him a meal later. The girl falls silent after this, but when our hero seeks to leave, she asks if she can pull off what he did. This stops him in his tracks, so she asks again if she'll be able to do it if she tries. Our boy begins to panic a little, mostly because the original Azel never asked questions like this, and he blames himself for her current state of mind. In his eyes, his interference has only given the girl trials and has never provided her with a chance to overcome. In turn, he tells her that she doesn't need to ask him such a question, adding that she has already achieved a miracle that others would call impossible. Azel is taken aback and asks how he found out about it, and the only thing Usial says is that he has been watching her. She instantly goes red in the cheeks after hearing this, but our hero is busy bothering himself with whether or not his last statement made him seem like a stalker. In a bid to save what little dignity he has left, he adjusts his tie and briskly walks away. Azel, on the other hand, stays in place, staring at the ground as she realizes that Usial is the only one paying attention to her despite her being the daughter of a traitor. She feels all warm inside as she recalls that he's watching her, and the thought of a miracle helps move this along. Later on, a bunch of students alongside some nobles, people from the magic faculty, and some others from the Mage Towers all gather for some commendations. As the whole place stays busy, our boy can't help but feel like they're doing too much. A swift glance at Princess Bion reveals how outwardly excited she is, with her eyes glistening and her mouth curled into a smile. She notices that Usial is looking at her, so her demeanor changes as she questions him about it. He quickly denies looking at her and is saved by Professor Hanwall soon enough. The professor yells at the crowd, telling them to quiet down. And after this, he announces that he will be handing out commendations to 12 brave students who fought against dark demonic humans. The icing on the cake is that the awards will be given by the headmaster himself. Upon hearing this, all the students including Usial light up. His eyes follow the headmaster to the stage and he can only see him as the peak of humanity, the 9th class master mage known as Eltman Eltwim. Apparently, he's 300 years old and is known for always putting on a warm smile. This mage warrior is undoubtedly the strongest in the world and is also known to possess the destructive title of Decimator. Well, he doesn't seem like it as he taps Cholquang on the arm and tells him to work hard in the future. Up next, he comes face to face with our hero and Usial can feel the immense pressure coming from the headmaster. It's so much that he can feel it just by locking eyes with him. This makes him understand what it's like to be in the presence of one of the 10 9th class mages in the entire world. Despite the pressure he's feeling, our hero resolves not to avert his gaze and the headmaster notices this. It pushes him to laughter and he just tells our boy that he's as hardworking as ever, just like he hoped. This only leaves Usial with more questions and he continues to stay puzzled even after the commendation ceremony comes to an end. Beak Usial gets his reward in the form of 5 million credits, so he just stares at the envelope, telling himself that he won't have to worry about money for a while. In addition, he received a pose vessel said to be the heart of a necromancer. It's some sort of purple orb with a thin line of exoskeleton wrapped around it. At this point, our hero can't help but think of Altalicia, seeing as she'll soon be able to create a subspace. To fulfill this, she'll have to solve the random sequence convergence technique. But after that, carrying items around will become easy. Our MC is just glad that the other students passed on the reward to him. As though that wasn't enough, Usial also gets system rewards for completing the necromancer's attack arc. He gets a boatload of EXP, followed by the Constellation project promising him a downgraded version of an item he used in the game, a downgraded version of a skill he obtained in the game, and finally, some more EXP. Our boy had seen this before, so seeing it again leaves him a bit torn. After taking a closer look at the situation, he announces that he would like to use the EXP to upgrade his blink skill. This is when the memory of how weak he truly was in the last battle comes flooding in, with the hole in his leg proving that he had to improve in some way. For this reason, he concludes that it's pointless to work hard like the others when he can just use his knowledge to go as far ahead as possible. Just like that, UCL gets a notification about his blink skill reaching its EXP limit and increasing by 1 rank. It becomes a class 2 skill with a maximum charge of 3 as compared to the former max of 2 charges. A glowing golden light surrounds our hero and he can literally feel his skill getting upgraded. He then balls his fist excitedly, keeping in mind that he can finally be at ease while using his skill more often. All that's left for him to handle is the Azel situation. At the same time, the fake heroine is on a meditation journey into the Abyss class. She and her classmates are on their knees and have their eyes closed as the professor guides them through the journey. Suddenly, Azel hears her name being whispered and the shock makes her eyes shoot open. She begins to wonder if she fell asleep, only for some sort of fairy to tell her that she can't use magic in the middle of meditation. The girl tries to argue but gets told to look above her head. Azel is quite surprised, and even more so when she notices some blue crystals floating up above. She can't help but wonder when she made them, seeing as she didn't use any techniques or make any calculations. Worse off, she begins to worry about whether or not the other students noticed, mostly because they should have felt the flow of mana before the first class spell was completed. The fake heroine makes peace with her newfound ability and credits it to be a result of her meditation. The only problem now is how UCL foresaw all of it. Later on, Azel visits the cafeteria and then finds a suitable place to sit outside. She peels out her red bean paste cream bread, happy that the reward she got made it possible for her to afford a 15 credit meal. She joyfully takes a bite of her meal, but hears someone call out to her almost immediately. She stops the meal after this and her gaze shifts to Crown Prince Jeremy, who has this quaint smile plastered on his face. The prince inquires if Azel has joined any clubs yet, and when she claims that she hasn't, he asks her to join his club. She quickly tugs on her loaf of bread as she asks Jeremy for his conditions, but the prince claims that he doesn't have any, adding that he just likes her and wants her to join. Of course, Azel can tell that he's lying, not to mention the fact that he only wants to use her as a trophy. The moment she looks away, Jeremy curses under his breath and points out that the girl doesn't believe him. He comes closer to her just so he can reiterate that he really doesn't have any conditions, and then squats to whisper in her ear. He tells her that she needs to join his club and stay with him so that he can do all sorts of things for her. It's at this moment that he reminds her of his station, and Azel thinks to herself that she knows about it more than anyone else. As it turns out, the Scalvan Empire and the Adalbert Kingdom have quite the hostile relationship. For this reason, Azel's difficult life would end should the Crown Prince be on her side. It dawns on her that she won't have to get happiness from mere bread, nor would she have to bear the humiliation of being a trader's daughter. Despite it being a terrible idea, the girl seems to lean towards giving a positive response, but the moment the first letter of agreement escapes her lips, Flame shows up and gives her a resounding slap. This surprises both Azel and Jeremy, and they both stare at the heroine in a bid to know what's going on. Amidst heavy breaths, Flame yells at Azel, calling her a piece of trash and spewing rubbish about them agreeing to work things out. She practically plays the role of a jealous lover and blames our girl for abandoning her. The entire time, our girl just holds her face in shock but plays along when the heroine drags her by the hand and tells her that they need to talk. Jeremy just watches both ladies as they leave and a devious smile crawls onto his lips. At the same time, Flame successfully drags Azel out of the prince's range and heaves a sigh of relief. She tells the girl that she should be thankful, seeing as the prince would have chased after her until she died if she turned down his offer without a reason. She doesn't wait for Azel's reaction before apologizing for hitting her and then zooming off. The fake heroine remains dumbfounded until the last moment, leaving Flame to wonder if she made the right choice. Apparently, if Azel had joined Jeremy's club like in the original story, he would have thoroughly destroyed her. The heroine had no plans to disrupt the flow of the original story, but UCL had set quite the example for her. She stares back at Azel one last time, hoping to God that the prince doesn't realize that she lied. After returning to his chambers, Prince Jeremy has a cup of tea. Flame comes to mind at this point and he finds it cute the way she lied to help her friend. Worse off, he now finds her much more interesting than Azel, so he smiles ear to ear and declares that Flame is the one he wants. It's a new dawn at Stella Academy and all the students of the ANS class are gathered under the guidance of Professor Hanwall. He announces that they'll spend the day carrying out preparations for a monster mock battle and points towards the projection on the wall showing the possible terrains they might be battling in. For clarity, he explains that the students won't be fighting monsters of risk levels 1 or 2 like those they've been fighting until now. The goal is to fight against mid-level monsters with a risk level of 3. As for strategy, the professor makes his students understand that they'll have to form teams, analyze the monsters, and then defeat them using standard tactics. UCL stays undistracted as he hears that they'll be given some time to practice facing mid-level monsters should they choose to suppress one of them. Apparently, they can locate the geography they want in the Stella Dome and hunt mid-level monsters that suit their respective teams. INS class members will be carrying out the exercise together and they'll all be assessed after 4 days. With this, Professor Hanwell instructs everyone to make teams with a maximum of 6 members and to submit the list to him afterwards. Azel stands in the corner, anxious as hell because she hates group projects. She then catches a glimpse of 2 girls trying to convince Princess Bayonne to join their teams, and while they fight over her attention, the princess basks in all of it. The spotlight is obvious to an onlooking Azel, but it only reminds her of what her life was like before the Adalbits destroyed her family. You see, both families had the same starting points, the Grand Duchy of Malf with the ice attribute, and the royal household of Adalbit with the fire attribute. During a time when both families kept each other in check and controlled the magic world, Bayonne and Azel were born as children of genius talent. Back then, Azel thought she had been chosen, but now, she's full of doubt as to whether or not she can get revenge on Adalbit. She's still standing in the corner when our hero approaches her. He calls out to her, asking if she's alone and breaking her out of her trance while he's at it. Azel simply stares him down, from his eyes to the smile on his lips, before asking what he wants. In turn, Uasal announces that he would like them to team up. Of course, Princess Bayonne notices this and can't help but steal glances at our hero from time to time, wondering why he would choose to hang out with the trader's daughter. Meanwhile, Azel tries to confirm if he's certain about teaming up, but Usial goes on to remind her that the professor never set a minimum number of members per team. For this reason, he'd like the team to comprise the 2 of them only so they can receive bonus points for being a small team. The trader's kid instantly shuns our hero, asking him if he's crazy and wanting to know how he expects the 2 of them to defeat a mid-level monster. The fear is obvious in her eyes, but our boy remains calm as ever, shooting her a wide smile as he asks if she wants to team up or not. After a few seconds of mulling it over, Azel exhales loudly and agrees, pointing out that she has no one to team up with anyway. Happily, Usial excuses himself to go submit the team list. The moment he steps away, Princess Bayonne steps in, crossing her arms and staring at Azel like she's the scum of the earth. Our girl stands her ground and questions the princess's motives, only to be asked why she's spouting nonsense. Bayonne then tells her to behave herself now that she's a pig wearing a pearl necklace. Her harsh words sting the poor girl's heart and her eyes widen as she watches the princess turn her back on her. She soon realizes that Bayonne wasn't wary of her abilities, but of Usial. At the same time, the princess can't stop thinking about how annoying she finds Azel and tells herself that the girl thought she'd lose to a commoner. With this in mind, she begins to scan the area for a chance to team up with a knight who is called the best. This knight is none other than Ma Yuxiang. The princess calls out to him and he abruptly turns in her direction. He follows up by exchanging pleasantries, only for Bayonne to go straight to asking if he has formed a team yet. It turns out the knight planned to do the exam alone, but the princess presses him about teaming up with her. A sly smile graces Yuxiang's chin as he wonders why he should do that, so the princess informs him about Usial and Azel teaming up. This comes as a surprise to him and Bayonne milks it as she speculates that the opposing team won't go for a mid-level monster, but a mid-large special monster. With this new information coming to light, she repeats her proposal to Yuxiang and he finally cracks a smile as he admits that it'll be fun. Apparently, he always wanted to compete against our hero at least once in his life, so the princess declares that they should get on it. She steals more glances at their opposition, promising to defeat them properly this time. The 4 days allotted to preparations pass by in a flash and the monster mock battles finally begin. Professor Hanwell takes center stage as he announces the commencement of the INS class assessments. One group makes ample use of lightning magic while another uses fire to take out a tree monster named Mugrika. Flame is busy observing this beast and even concludes that she's capable of taking down a mid-level monster like that. She exhales loudly, keeping in mind that she has practiced enough. You see, our girl is well aware that she can't gain reverse bonus points using a special monster's attribute, or even fight a mid-large special monster, but a mid-level monster of risk level 3 sounds perfect for her to gain the highest score. Naturally, 5 first-class mages come together to defeat a monster with risk level of 1, but if you put compatibility, experience, and environmental factors into the mix, the same group can defeat monsters a few levels higher than that. As a light-class mage, Flame is unfortunate enough to not be compatible with any other classes, but she hopes everything goes well for Azel. Sadly, she never formed a team in the original story because of Princess Bayonne, so she ended up receiving the worst score. The heroine had welcomed the possibility of teaming up with her, but Beak Usial beat her to it, so she just watches as he and Azel exchange pleasantries and talk about how he was delayed because he had to use the washroom. Anyway, Flame's mind is at ease now that our hero is on the girl's side, mostly because her future will turn for the better. At this moment, Group 16 rounds up their assessment and Professor Hanwell calls for Group 17, which happens to be Flame. The heroine quickly responds to her professor and makes her way towards the assessment arena, walking past our boy and Azel while she's at it. For some reason, she had forgotten to lace her shoes, so she trips on them and begins to stumble. Just before she can fall flat on her face, Usial comes to her rescue and catches her by the neck of her uniform and exhales as he keeps her stable. Flame abruptly turns to thank him for his help and he swipes this aside, telling her to simply tie her shoelaces. As memory serves, it was fine when Jackie tied the laces for her, but this doesn't stop our hero from offering to help her out. Of course, she turns down his help, keeping in mind that it would have been terrible if she went to fight like this. She quickly laces her shoes and steps into the arena, staff in hand. Onlookers begin to murmur when they realize that she's fighting alone and are even more surprised when they see that she'll be up against a giant boar with tusks big enough to be the girl's size. Anyway, Flame remains unshaken in the face of this beast and gets told that it doesn't possess any special attributes. For this reason, it's impossible to target it using the opposite attribute. With this, the professor declares the commencement of the battle and the boar wastes no time charging towards the heroine, eyes red as scarlet. While the onlookers continue to worry about Flame, she activates a technique named Flowers Whisper in the Wind and a burst of golden light escorts it. Right on cue, multiple vines shoot out of the ground and wrap themselves around the once charging beast, thus keeping it in place. As expected, the boar continues to struggle, so the heroine uses a technique named Matter Modification to transform the vines from plants into stone. This actually keeps the boar immobile, but Flame is certain that it's not over yet. While the beast continues to fight her last spell, the heroine prepares another one with a huge magic circle overhead. In no time, the vines begin to snap and they continue to do so until the boar is set free. It charges towards Flame once again with its jaws exposed in a bid to swallow her whole. Little does this monster know that it's all part of the heroine's plan. The moment it comes close enough, Flame releases a concentrated ray of light with so much output that it enters the mouth of the boar and escapes through its back, creating a hole big enough for everyone to see the heroine through it. Flame exhales after this amazing feat and watches as her enemy hits the ground like fallen timber. The same onlookers who once doubted her abilities are now left in awe of her, seeing as 5 of them can't even defeat a mid-level monster. They're still wondering who she is when Flame makes her way back to the stands. She's startled by who she sees on her way, and even stops to ask herself if she's mistaken. Unfortunately, she's not. Professor Hanwall goes on to announce that Group 31 will be assessed next, and this group consists of none other than Princes Hong Bion and Ma Yuxiang. And there you have it, folks. This is the end of the latest chapter.